Imagine a world where magical creatures, incredible sorcerers, and sword-wielding heroes live side by side. A world where the amazing energy called magic can allow you to do many things once thought impossible. In this place, called the Heroes' Continent, all those are a reality. However, all is not peaceful in this land. From the demon race rose an all-powerful demon queen that wages war with every other race on the continent. Using her overwhelming strength, she was able to crush every empire that stood in her way. Quickly, various races fell under her control until all that was left was the human race. Although they remained steadfast in their resistance against the demon queen's rule, they were weakened by the constant internal strife and rebellions that eventually led to the human empire's collapse. With the human race gone, nothing else is standing in the way between Elizabeth the Demon Queen and complete dominance over the Heroes' Continent. In the human empire, we are greeted by the sight of a priest struggling to stand as he faces off against a human figure respectfully standing next to the throne that Elizabeth took for herself. The priest's guards have long fallen under the Demon Queen's attacks. The priest looks at Elizabeth in rage, clearly staying defiant. He loudly claims that although her armies have defeated the human empire, she still hasn't won. According to legend, a hero will rise from the humans and defeat her in battle. Hearing this, the Demon Queen's servant kicks the priest across the face. The man looks at him smugly, intimately calling him Teacher Barrow. Turns out the servant was the ex-prince of the human empire, Prince Malfoy, who betrayed his kingdom by murdering his father and allying himself with the demons. Barrow feels betrayed after seeing the person he worked so hard to cultivate into a hero of the human race become a servant for the other side, and berates him. Hearing more of his yapping further annoys Prince Malfoy, so he decides to silence him once and for all. Reaching out his hand, it transforms into a large and hideous gooey claw, ready to take the priest's life. But just before the claw could touch him, the Demon Queen, who was watching the whole ordeal go down, orders Prince Malfoy to stay his hand. Prince Malfoy quickly stops and kneels as Elizabeth approaches the priest. With a domineering aura, Elizabeth then orders the priest to properly explain the prophecy, or else she will make him suffer 1,000 fates worse than death. With a shaken voice, the priest explains that there is a sword embedded in stone in the main hall. It is prophesied that a hero will one day pull it out and use it to end the Demon Queen's reign. Elizabeth's eyes are instantly drawn to the said sword. Gently, she rubs the sword's hilt before turning around and saying how she is looking forward to finding someone that can challenge her. She will not shrink away, but instead face him head-on. So for the first year of her reign, her entire army guards the main hall, awaiting to fight the prophecy hero. Then came the second year when Prince Malfoy left the defenses to the army, then the third year when more of the army has left, then the fourth, then the fifth. As the years went by, fewer and fewer people guarded the main hall until it became abandoned. Still, no sign of the hero was ever seen or even heard. Meanwhile, the daily lives of the people continued as normal, and soon enough 15 years of Elizabeth's reign came to pass. Under the rule of the Demon Queen Elizabeth, past practices that bred inequality and distrust among the different species were all abolished, and the kingdom started to flourish and thrive under the new peace her reign has brought. The Demon Queen turns out to be an amazing ruler, so much so that the people started to fear that the prophecy hero's coming would end their era of peace. Thus, the Anti-Hero Alliance was born, an organization that rejects the arrival of the prophecy hero. We then cut to the main hall of what was initially the castle of the human empire turned into the main capital of the demon empire. Resting her head on her hand, Elizabeth asks her subordinate for any news regarding the arrival of the prophecy hero. The first to speak is the Chancellor of the Elves, Twilia, who reports that her people utilize the tree insects to gather information on the prophecy hero, but are unable to find anything on the matter. The Chancellor of the Dwarves says something similar, saying that none of his people have found any information either. The human Chancellor, Aristotle, voices out that even if the hero were to appear, he would not be powerful enough to stand against them all. However, his fellow chancellors hurriedly explained to him that it wasn't that the Demon Queen was afraid of the hero, on the contrary, she wants him to come so that she can end the prophecy herself. Twilia grumbles that it is all Priest Barrow's fault for even mentioning the prophecy. If it weren't for him mentioning it, then this prophecy wouldn't bother them in the first place. As if he was summoned by his name, a familiar presence enters the main hall chanting the slogan of the Anti-Hero Alliance. It's Barrow, the ex-high priest of the human empire and now the president of both the Demon Queen fan club and the Anti-Hero Alliance. Annoyed by his antics, Queen Elizabeth sends a magical hand that grabs hold of Barrow and pulls him near. She then demands him to explain why the prophecy hero hasn't arrived yet. Shaking in fear, Barrow weakly explains that it might be because she's so powerful that the prophecy targeting her becomes untrue. Prince Malfoy chimes in, agreeing with Barrow's words. He believes that she should not be troubled by the prophecy and should instead focus on other manners. But before he could even finish his words, a demonic tail smacks him across the face, ceasing his yapping. Without turning back, the Demon Queen orders him to get lost. Frustrated, she throws Barrow like a dart, impaling him to the wall. She laments on how she has reached the peak of the world, waiting for the hero to come and challenge her right to rule. Yet no matter how long she waits and how much stronger she becomes, no hero is coming to challenge her. Staring at the sword stuck in the middle of the hall, she comes to a decision. Her subordinates guess her thoughts straight away and plead with her not to follow through. However, the Demon Queen has made up her mind. She puts her hand on the sword and tries to rip it out of the stone, sending waves of power, debris, and ex-high priests flying through the air. Quickly, the Demon Chancellor shields the rest from the blast. As the dust settles, we see the Demon Queen triumphantly holding the hero's sword in one hand. With the sword free, it connects itself to the hero. Using the connection, the Demon Queen quickly learns of where the hero is hiding. A smirk plasters itself on her face, and she prepares to teleport to the location. Seeing this, Malfoy desperately begs her to allow him to stay by her side. However, his cries remain unheard as she teleports away. Meanwhile, in the house that the Demon Queen saw, we see our legendary hero maintaining his crops. Not too long ago, Le Ping was just an ordinary office worker whose only hobby was to watch farming and cooking videos on his phone. He always envies the simple life shown in the short videos he watches and wishes to live just like them. And just like that, his wish came true. He was suddenly transported into this strange other world with a newbie system to help him. With the newbie system's guidance, he was taught the basic survival skills and soon enough is living the quiet, pastoral life he always wanted. After living this way for a while, his newbie system eventually tells him that he has met the conditions to leave the newbie village and venture out on his own. The problem is that Le Ping is not interested in going. So what if his mission was to murder the Demon Queen? Le Ping doesn't want to murder anybody. Despite numerous messages and annoying notifications, Le Ping continues to ignore them all and live his quiet pastoral life. Thanks to the special time barrier set in the newbie village, not only is he kept hidden, but the perception of time in the village is different too, so he can continue to do what he wants. Time flies by as he continues to spend his day foraging, farming, hunting, and meditating, not at all interested in learning about swords and magic. One day, the system has had enough of its lazy master and starts cursing Le Ping so badly that it crashes and disappears. However, Le Ping is completely unbothered and continues with his monotonous yet fulfilling life. After some farming, he decides to chop some more firewood before realizing that he forgot his axe back in the forest. Before he could go back and grab it though, a dark vortex of clouds gathered on top of his home with ominous red lightning crackling in its center. Within that dark vortex materializes the Demon Queen Elizabeth. She has finally found out where the hero is. But Le Ping, however, does not notice the queen at all. Instead, he runs towards the back of his house with one thing on his mind. It's gonna rain, my laundry and dried fish are in danger. Thankfully, his laundry and dried fish remain safe. Le Ping breathes a sigh of relief. Suddenly, a small robotic robot enters the scene and starts barking noisily to catch his attention. It is Wan Kai, Le Ping's AI dog companion. Le Ping tries to hush the dog and tells him to go inside. But before he does, he hears someone call for his attention. That's when he notices that something, or rather someone, is floating in the sky. Elizabeth looks down at Le Ping and lobs the hero's sword at him. Surprised, Le Ping hurriedly drops all his fish and laundry and covers himself in self-defense. However, the expected impact never came. Instead, the sword does a calm spin around his body and sets itself gently on his palm. Feeling the new weight on his hands, Le Ping swings the sword before panic sets in as he still has no clue what's going on. Elizabeth, on the other hand, has seen enough. The man in front of him is the prophecy hero. Gathering her magic, she starts preparing the spells she prepared just to deal with the hero. Meanwhile, Le Ping is panicking. He didn't even leave the newbie village. Why is the Demon Queen here? Wan Kai, on the other hand, starts to growl and bark at the new intruder. Le Ping berates him for this, telling him to stop provoking her. But it's too late. Elizabeth's abyss magic has fully formed, ready to strike at him. Le Ping then remembers what the system said before crashing, how his meeting with the Demon Lord is inevitable, and finally understands what he means. With the Demon Queen now in front of him, Le Ping's will to live flutters away. He throws away the sword and gives up, going towards his house to await his final moments. However, in the Demon Queen's eyes, this action seems more like a challenge rather than a man accepting his fate. This enrages the proud Demon Queen as she unleashes her magic on the small house. But before the magic reaches Le Ping's home, Wang Kai stands guard in front with a determined expression on his robotic screen. Several calculations happen in its mind before pulling out an entire arsenal of weapons that fire and nullify Elizabeth's magic. As expected, Elizabeth thought as she sees Wang Kai growl at her. The hero would not go down without a proper fight. Not giving up though, she casts another powerful spell, her apocalyptic magic. With full confidence she has Wang Kai's beat, she casts the powerful spell toward the little house. However, our little robot friend isn't done yet. Calculating some more, he fires back with his own attack. At first, Elizabeth scoffs at the attack and simply dodges it. But that's when she realized that he was never aiming for there in the first place. The beam collides with her apocalyptic magic and creates a massive explosion that nullifies her spell once again. Elizabeth is shocked. She wonders what exactly the hero did inside his house. Meanwhile, Le Ping, the guy in question, can be seen lying in bed accepting his fate. With the current situation, Elizabeth decides to float down and properly face off against this surprisingly powerful robot dog. As she gets closer, Wang Kai's eyes turn red and he starts to bark at her aggressively. Elizabeth smirks as she realizes that she has underestimated her opponent. But she isn't done yet. In reality, she only used 30% of her power. Magic flowed throughout her body as she started to transform, becoming more powerful in the process. In her new form, she charges toward Wang Kai, who stands at the ready with his arsenal of weapons. Their battle rages on for an hour, and this whole time Le Ping ends up falling asleep. When he awoke, at first he thought he already died from the Demon Queen's attack. Instead, he's surprised to see that he's still inside his house and completely fine. He then approaches the front door cautiously. Although it seems quiet on the outside, there is still a chance that the Demon Queen is waiting for him outside. Mustering his courage, he eventually opens the door. On the outside, a large cloud of dust slowly settles and Le Ping sees Elizabeth holding the broken and defeated body of Wang Kai in her hands. Although badly defeated, she musters the strength to face him and taunt him with his destroyed dog. Le Ping, however, assures her that it's okay and tries to talk it out with his crazy intruder. Elizabeth agrees to talk right after she kills him, but it seems like she used too much energy fighting Wang Kai. She barely moved a few steps before collapsing. The surprised Le Ping rushed to her side to support her. But without her power, her transformation is starting to undo, revealing her seductive body to the unprepared Le Ping. Streams of blood spray from Le Ping's nose. This situation is just too erotic. Later that night, a now clothed Elizabeth comes to on a bed with handcuffs around her arms. She's surprised to find that the hero actually kept her alive. Was it so that he could brag to the world that he defeated her? She tries to break apart the handcuffs, but to no avail. This only worsens her misunderstanding of Le Ping as she thinks that he is hiding more of his power. Looking around the room, she spots more of his trinkets and mistakes them for powerful artifacts. Elizabeth berates herself for underestimating such an opponent. Just then, Le Ping enters the room with food in his hands. Seeing him, Elizabeth proudly declares that she would not beg for mercy if he wanted to kill her. But Le Ping doesn't have these sorts of intentions. On the contrary, he believes that the only way he can survive is if he calms the Demon Queen down and talks to her. He tells her that the handcuffs are simply a precaution because of how terrifying and formidable Elizabeth is. In a friendly manner, he offers to unlock the handcuffs so that they can talk properly. However, Elizabeth once again misunderstands his intentions. She thinks she is being let go only because the hero still has some demands. Eventually, though, Le Ping unlocks the handcuffs. Seeing that she is not in a good position right now, Elizabeth begrudgingly agrees to not attack for now and listen to the hero. With that, Le Ping turns around to let her rest. Then he breaks the fourth wall to explain to the readers the reason he didn't try to kill her in her sleep. In a world of swords and magic, it is definitely normal that the Demon Queen has some sort of resurrection skill. But killing her is not the only way to resolve his issues. He plans to use the power of friendship to calm the Demon Queen and make her his ally. That way he gets to live and have a powerful friend by his side. He laughs at his own marvelous plan, which makes Elizabeth misunderstand that he is still mocking him. Then Le Ping turns his attention to the broken body of Wang Kai. Elizabeth asks him what Wang Kai is, and Le Ping replies that he is a new companion he made recently out of boredom. Hearing this, Elizabeth sees an opportunity. With the handcuffs gone, she can use her abyss magic to quickly recover. Now is the time to strike. To let his guard down, Elizabeth apologizes for breaking his magical tool while preparing her attack. Unaware of the situation, Le Ping replies that it's okay since the memory card is still intact. As Elizabeth towers over him, ready to strike, Le Ping opens a cabinet to reveal several Wan Kai copies. He simply pops the memory card back in and Wan Kai is back, good as new. Elizabeth freezes in shock. Her plan has been foiled. Looks like she won't be able to attack him anytime soon. But before she can think of what to do next, the scent of food catches her attention. Le Ping notices and explains that he made some meat porridge and dumplings for her while she was out cold. At first, Elizabeth refuses. She has reached a level where she does not need to eat anymore. However, the delicious smell of the food made her tummy rumble. Seeing the opportunity to resolve conflicts with delicious food, Le Ping proudly explains that he made it all using vegetables and grains that he grew himself. Elizabeth hesitates before taking one of the dumplings and eating it. Le Ping watches on nervously. Even though he is confident in his cooking skills, with her status as the Demon Queen, he isn't sure if she would be satisfied with such a simple dish. She takes a moment to chew, then takes another, then one more until she cleans out the whole plate. She exclaims in ecstasy that the meat is super tender and delicious and contains a lot of magical energy as well. Elizabeth didn't even know that a delicacy like this existed in this world. All of a sudden, she experiences a surge of heat emanating from the meal. She gasps due to the dish's fiery nature and voices her displeasure about the spice, insisting on knowing the ingredients he used in the food. Seeing this, Le Ping panics. Can she not handle spicy food? He quickly explains that he added some spicy chili according to his usual taste. As expected, Elizabeth thought. Le Ping had no good intentions at all. He only kept her alive to use her in his experiments. To combat the hot spice, Le Ping hurriedly serves her some lean pork congee and century egg. Once again, Elizabeth misunderstands and thinks that he is toying with her by providing her with the poison and the antidote right after. As soon as she gets a taste though, it's as if she was transported to a whole nother world. A peaceful feeling envelops Elizabeth and suddenly the feeling of world domination and the fight between the hero and the Demon Queen are simply disturbances that no longer bother her. As the feeling washes over her, she suddenly levels up in power. She cannot believe it. By simply eating food, she has reached the next level. This finally makes her want to get straight to the point as she asks Le Ping what exactly he wants from her. Le Ping replies that he simply just wants to research how a demon queen and a hero can coexist together. But in her ears, it's as if he is saying that she is the only one qualified to be the subject of his research experiments. He challenges her to become stronger so that she can finally beat him. He then offers to cook more food for her if she accepts. But her delusions run deep. What she hears instead is that he will help her become stronger to defeat him by using his so-called naturally made food. At first, this angers her. This sort of humiliation is too much. But after thinking it through, she sighs and caves in. Standing on top of the bed, she declares that she will follow his demands, but not because she is scared. Instead, she is pursuing the pinnacle of strength with the hope that one day she will be able to defeat him. Furthermore, her dignity as the Demon Queen must not be trampled or else she will sacrifice everything to end him. Scared out of his wits, Le Ping quickly agrees to her demands, and with that, the story of how the Demon Queen and the hero started living together begins. The scene then transitions to a year later. Le Ping can be seen chopping wood with the hero's sword. As he chopped, he thought about what happened during the time that Elizabeth had been living with him. Ever since she broke into the newbie village, time has gradually started to synchronize with the outside world. Now, time synchronization is not the real issue, but without the time barrier's protection, the newbie village is now completely exposed. Thankfully, Elizabeth's pretense deters any of the strange wildlife outside the newbie village from attacking his house. Suddenly, a voice calls out to Le Ping from inside the house, complaining that it is lunchtime already. Le Ping replies that he is coming and enters the house. Inside, we are greeted by the sight of a now fat Elizabeth watching TV while eating some potato chips. She says that she is watching his recordings and nags at him to get something new from his system. Used to her nagging at this point, Le Ping replies that the system he had is long gone already. He then calls her over for lunch. With a wave of her hands, 2 tiny demon wings appear and she slowly floats over to the dinner table. Curious, she asks him what kind of poison he is feeding her that is making her feel lazier the more she eats. Le Ping sighs and explains that the potato chips she is eating are high in calories, so she should not eat too much of them or else she will become fat. As if she just noticed, she takes a look at her now bulging stomach and realizes that what Le Ping says is true. It's not a problem for the Demon Queen though. With a snap of her fingers, she uses her negative attribute conversion magic to turn all of her fat into pure magic and regain her slim figure. Le Ping simply looked in surprise. He didn't think that magic could be used like this too. Seeing his surprised expression makes Elizabeth gloat, thinking she was able to foil his plan of trying to poison her. Le Ping simply allows her to believe what she wants and tells her that lunch is ready. The mounds of delicious food take Elizabeth's attention, and she starts to wolf down all the food. Le Ping sighs after seeing how fast Elizabeth is eating and tells her to slow down. He can just make more if it's not enough after all. Le Ping's words make Elizabeth falter. In her mind, what Le Ping is implying is that she's still too weak, fatten up more. Elizabeth grits her teeth in frustration. She has already leveled up more than 10 times in the 1 year they were living together. With her strength now, she's confident in winning. But before she can challenge Le Ping to a decisive battle, he takes out the dessert he prepared for her, her favorite pudding. Instantly, any thoughts about fighting Le Ping were thrown away to the back of her mind, and she instead demands him to give her the pudding. Fortunately, it is very easy to deal with the Demon Queen, Le Ping thought. As long as he has the right food, it's easy enough to calm her down. Meanwhile, in a place not too far from Newbie Village, we see an old man running away with a blonde-haired woman in tow. Chasing them both are several mysterious figures with masks and dark cloaks. One of them leaps towards the pair, and with its dark claws, it rips a spatial tear in front of it. Suddenly, more spatial tears appear surrounding the old man and girl. Then, the mysterious figure plunges its long claws into the tear, creating a nail cage that traps the two. There's no way out. The old man stands protectively in front of the blonde woman and tells her, his daughter, to run away to the town while he holds the masked men back. Tears form in the girl's eyes as she refuses to escape without her father. But the father remains adamant. He already promised her mother that he will keep her safe no matter what. As the cloaked figures surround the two, one of them raises their hands and casts a huge ball of ghost fire at them. This forces the old man to use his strongest move to cut both the ball of ghost fire and the cloaked figure in half. Seeing his ally fall, one of the cloaked figures quickly grabs both halves of the fallen member and somehow fuses itself with both halves, revealing itself as some kind of goo-like monstrosity. Determined not to leave her father, the girl uses her magic to create a bow and arrow and shoots it at the other masked man. However, the arrows seem to have no effect. Her father warns her that she cannot handle the Dark Guild's apostles yet, and that she should just flee instead. Just then, the third dark apostle dashed towards the old man and hit his sword with its large arms. The old man is thrown back several feet until he hits a large boulder. Seeing her father in such a critical condition, the girl desperately calls out to her father. Although severely injured, the man still warns his daughter to get away and escape to safety. Meanwhile, the third dark apostle approaches the combined apostle from earlier and combines with it as well. As all three combine, they transform into a gigantic goo-like golem that's ready to crush the father and daughter pair. The girl rushes to her father's side and tries to plead with the giant monstrosity to let her father go in exchange for coming with them. Unfortunately, it seems like her being alive was not a part of the job description. But before the apostles can destroy them, an even bigger monster straight up curb stomps them to the ground, turning them all into paste. As the dust settles, the girl looks up to see that their unlikely savior turns out to be a massive mammoth. And the mammoth isn't alone. On top of the mammoth's head lies a small house where a wise immortal frog resides. The immortal frog croaks before informing his big brother that the threat has been taken care of. He then asks what should be done with the two humans that they saved. This big brother of his turns out to be living on the top of his head as well. It's Wan Kai, Le Ping's robotic companion. Wan Kai replies that they should not harm the humans. Instead, he will take them back to his master so that he can deal with them. A little while later, we see the young woman waking up in an unfamiliar bed. She looks at her surroundings, unsure of where she is right now, until she remembers that her father has been severely injured by the apostles. Without treatment, he might actually die. She quickly rushes out of bed and opens the door to the outside, worried about her father. But her worries seem unfounded as she is greeted with the sight of her father flexing his large muscles. The blonde girl continues to spectate as Le Ping compliments her father's muscles. Le Ping is amazed at just how muscled the warriors from this other world are. However, someone else does not seem as interested. As Wan Kai runs around Le Ping, minding his own business, Elizabeth kicks him out of the blue and berates him for bringing back two unknown people to their home. Wan Kai simply whimpers. Now that she has leveled up 10 times, he is no longer a match for her. Despite the commotion, Le Ping continues to gush about how sturdy the old man's muscles feel. Feeling proud of all the compliments, the old man decides to show even more of his muscles. With a mighty roar, he activates his battle soul-burning technique, which makes his muscles swell even more, ripping his shirt apart until he is in nothing but his underwear. Le Ping gasps in astonishment as the old man continues to flaunt his muscles. However, his daughter, Evil's confused voice breaks him out of his ego trip. He quietly explains that he is just trying to please his savior. Nonetheless, he is still glad to see that his daughter has woken up. Now that Evil is awake, Le Ping tries to explain the current situation to her when Elizabeth suddenly teleports in front of Evil and tells her that she should leave. And with a small display of dominance, she warns Evil that she came first. Evil shakes in fear under the pressure given out by both Elizabeth's aura and her superior assets. Thankfully, Le Ping is able to convince Elizabeth to allow the guests to come inside and talk. Inside, Le Ping offers the father and daughter pair some barley tea and apologizes for not being able to serve them something else. Evil looks at the sparkly barley tea and asks her father if this is the magical potion that instantly healed his injuries. Le Ping scratches his head in embarrassment and denies her conjecture, saying that it's too exaggerated. All he did was let her father drink some cold well water. In contrast to Le Ping's warm reception, Elizabeth still looks at the two warily. She wonders what kind of experiments Le Ping wants them to undergo and is angry that somehow she isn't enough to satisfy his urge to experiment on people. Evil's father disagrees with Le Ping, however. Although he was barely conscious at the time, he still remembers how Wang Kai brought him to the newbie village and Le Ping healing him with cold well water full of magic energy. For that he is grateful. He wouldn't have been able to see his daughter again if it weren't for his help. Hearing her father's story, Evil wonders if she is even allowed to drink something that precious. But Le Ping reassures her that she does not need to be that polite. So with Le Ping's permission, both Evil and her father took a sip from the barley tea. As the liquid enters their body, a bright light suddenly shines from their mouths and eyes as the tea transports them to an endless field of barley. Just like the Demon Queen before, a sense of bliss overwhelms their bodies as they gaze at the beautiful sky. Undisturbed by the problems of the world, in addition to this sense of bliss, they both also leveled up, with the father turning into a 4-star archmage and Evil turning into a 1-star archmage. The two stare in surprise at suddenly growing more powerful. The barley tea even awakened Evil's dormant elf blood in her, making her ears longer like a true elf's. They both sigh in satisfaction, happy that they get to feel such bliss in addition to becoming more powerful. Seeing how happy they are after one cup, Le Ping offers to pour them more tea, but Evil's father denies it with teary eyes. He cannot believe that someone as gracious as Le Ping can exist. Accepting his kindness almost feels like torment to him. Although disappointed, Le Ping agrees to not give them any more. He could offer them more drinks and snacks, but the problem is that Elizabeth has taken them all already. He apologizes to the scared duo about the lack of variety in what he can serve. Then Le Ping digresses and asks Evil's father why they were both attacked in the first place. Evil's father explains that it was due to the elf's bloodline inside Evil. Evil further adds that her mother is the elf saintess who had her when she fell in love with her father. The only issue was that intermarriages between races were forbidden by the elf race. Hearing this, Elizabeth says that it's impossible as the ban was lifted long ago under the rule of the Demon Queen. But reality seems to differ, as Evil's mother was forced to return to the Holy Land of the Elves and Evil's father hid her away. Le Ping then asked if the Elves were after them after discovering their existence. Surprisingly though, the answer is no. Both were spared after Evil's mother decided to return to the Elf tribe. Instead, the ones chasing them right now are envoys of the Dark Guild from the Demon Realm. With this revelation, Le Ping casts a suspicious look at Elizabeth, which earns him some harsh words from the Demon Queen. Still though, this situation piques Elizabeth's interest as she asks the two where the Dark Guild from the Demon Realm came from and why they are capturing elves. Evil's father replies that it is rumored that the Dark Guild is conducting human experiments to revive the Demon Queen Elizabeth. Because elves are one of the main materials, the Dark Envoys have been hunting them down ever since. With Elizabeth's own name being thrown around, Le Ping can't help but cast another suspicious gaze at Elizabeth, who this time grabs him by the collar. Realizing his mistake, he quickly apologizes and says that she's been here the whole time, so there is no way that she had anything to do with it. Curious about what the two are arguing about, Evil asks her father, but he shuts her down and tells her not to be nosy. A man knows better than to butt in a couple's argument after all. But their story intrigues Elizabeth as well as she asks them who started the rumor that the Demon Queen died. It was then revealed that it turns out she has been missing for 500 years. Lip Ping didn't even know how it was possible. Elizabeth had only been living in his house for a year. Elizabeth then asks how she is rumored to have died. According to them, the Demon Queen died after having a battle with the legendary hero that lasted for a month. In the end, the hero sacrificed himself to protect the hero continent and he died with the Demon Queen. Hearing this, Elizabeth becomes angry. She sends out her intent towards the two. Instantly, the father and daughter pair feel as if they have been transported to a field of skulls. It feels as if any wrong move and the two would die. With a demanding tone, Elizabeth declares that the rumor is false. Both Evil and her father had no choice but to quickly agree with Elizabeth's words, lest they be murdered. But before they can calm down, Lip Ping chimes in and says that she is right because he is the legendary hero while the woman they are speaking to is the Demon Queen Elizabeth. This information seems to be too much for their brains to handle. Both nearly faint from the information overload that they have just received. However, seeing their reactions made Elizabeth think that Lip Ping purposely saved them just to humiliate her. It's as if he is saying that he captured the Demon Queen, look at her and laugh. This makes her smash the table in anger and stand up to leave. She curses at Lip Ping inwardly as she leaves the room and smashes the door behind her. With the Demon Queen gone, Evil's father is finally able to exhale the air he was holding in. He then shakily asks Lip Ping what his plans to deal with them are. Lip Ping, shaking himself, replies that he isn't sure. Time must have gone haywire when Elizabeth broke through the time barrier until it finally synchronized time 500 years later. Later that night, we see the pair lying down together. Evil turns to her father and exclaims how unbelievable it is that the truth behind the Demon Queen's disappearance is that she fell in love with the legendary hero and decided to hide away from the world, just like her father and mother. Evil's father tells her not to compare them to the two. He also says that Lip Ping told him to calm down because he was probably thinking about whether he should spare them or not. Surprised, Evil asks then why did he save them if Lip Ping was just going to murder them anyway. In reply, her father said that just like he casually allowed them to break through, it is also just as easy to murder them. To get rid of or to spare is all up to either the hero or the Demon Queen's mood. Suddenly, a loud thud is heard as an ominous voice asks them what they are doing still awake at night. Lip Ping starts chuckling to himself as he pulls out a deck of cards and offers to play card games with them. Evil's father just stares at him in confusion. A little while later, both father and daughter can be seen sitting down with serious faces as Lip Ping explains the rules of the game Landlord. Unlike Lip Ping, who is playing for fun, both Evil and her father believe that this is a test whether to get rid of them or not. Looking at the deck of cards that are emanating an ominous aura, Evil asks him what the name of the game was. This stumps Lip Ping as he isn't sure that they would get what a landlord was. So instead, he names it Dragon Fight. This shocks both father and daughter and even Elizabeth, who is watching nearby with some high-level concealment magic. Lip Ping explains that the two heroes have to work together to beat the dragon, and they decide who is the hero and the dragon according to the cards they draw. Sure enough, they thought, this game is a test for them on whether they should live or not. In their vision, Lip Ping looks very evil as he warns them to think carefully while they choose their cards. Lip Ping draws his cards first and he tells the other to hurry up as well. Evil draws her cards first, but as soon as she touches the cards, their surroundings suddenly change. Evil's father, who is now revealed to be named Bess, looks around in shock. They've been transported to another realm. After picking all of her cards, Evil almost collapses. Just drawing her cards almost drains all of her magical power. Soon all of them have their cards. Lip Ping asks them if either of them wants to be the dragon, and they both said no. Looking at his cards, Lip Ping realizes that if he gets another 4 and an ace, then he would have a winning hand. He asks them once again if they wanted to be the dragon before drawing his cards. As the cards are revealed, Lip Ping frowns as none of the cards were a 4 or an ace. However, both Evil and Bess misinterpret his frown as him being dissatisfied with their performance. Lip Ping then plays an 8 before getting the floor to Bess. As soon as he tries to play a card, a surge of magic exits his body and enters the card. Playing a card is actually at the cost of his life force. Without further delay, Bess then plays a jack. Evil looks at her father worried, but Bess reassures his daughter that he is okay. Then both Evil and Lip Ping passes. Since it's Bess's turn once again, he puts down a combination known as Flying Dragon. All of a sudden, more magic is sucked out of Bess's body as the cards he plays give off the illusion of Flying Dragon attacking Lip Ping. Both looks in shock, however. When the dust settles, Le Ping can be seen completely fine. Both Evil and Le Ping then passes, which gives the turn back to Bess. He then plays a 3, which Evil passes. Le Ping then plays a 10, and they both pass. That was the start of their unfortunate end. Le Ping suddenly plays a straight, shocking the father and daughter pair. This time, it summons a huge wave that nearly washes them both away. Then Le Ping plays a trio and pair, which summons 2 gladiators on a chariot to charge at them. Bess grits his teeth. He has nothing to beat them. However, Evil steps up to challenge Le Ping's cards. Bess tells her not to play as it uses her life force as the price, but Evil refuses. She can't just hide behind her father forever. She then plays another 3 of a kind with a pair that is larger than Le Ping's cards. When the dust settles, only Evil's chariot remains standing. Bess checks on Evil if she is okay, and she replies that she is fine. However, Le Ping isn't finished yet. Both the father and daughter pair and Elizabeth, quietly spectating in the corner, suddenly has an ominous feeling. With his treasure, Le Ping summons a pair of jokers and plays it. A large crack suddenly appears in the realm that they are currently inside. From the crack comes out a level 3 demon clown king that even shocks Elizabeth with its power. As its eyes wander around, it suddenly looks straight at Elizabeth, despite her hiding herself with magic. The demon asks her what she was staring at before summoning a knife and threatening to hurt her. Elizabeth grits her teeth at the obvious provocation, but cannot do anything as the Clown King is actually equal in power to her. Despite being nourished by Le Ping for a year, Le Ping just casually summons something just as powerful as her. Bess and Evil look on in despair. Despite their best efforts, they are powerless. Suddenly, Bess starts to cough blood as he realizes that his life force is being sucked away like crazy. Concerned, Le Ping asks if he is okay, thinking that his injury hasn't healed yet, but then takes a sneaky peek at his cards. Turns out Bess had a winning hand. Le Ping then misunderstands it as Uncle Bess letting him play with him. In his naivety, he thought he was actually good, when in reality Bess just allowed him to play and Le Ping is just disturbing his rest. He then reshuffles the deck, canceling the summon for the Clown King and arranging it back into his deck. He apologizes for disturbing their rest and then sulks away back to his room. The father and daughter pair remain shaken and confused, but glad to be still alive. Meanwhile, Elizabeth once again misunderstands his intentions. In reality, this card game was a way to show off his dominance to her. The next day, the 4 can be seen standing outside Le Ping's house as he bade them goodbye. Le Ping asks them if they really did not want to stay for a few days more, as the fruits he planted were almost ripe. In response, Bess bows and says he cannot bother them anymore and that he is grateful for their kindness. He also assures them that after they go out, they will tell nobody about what they just witnessed. Evil also thanks them for giving them some barley tea. Le Ping just scratches his head in embarrassment and says that it's alright. He then approaches Bess and gives him a memento, his playing cards. After playing with him, Le Ping realizes just how bad he is at card games and decides that the cards should stay with Bess. As Le Ping willows in despair, Elizabeth catches Bess's attention. She then mouths the words "hurry up and get out of here." Seeing that, the two instantly flee for their lives without even saying goodbye, which confuses Le Ping. Just what did he do to make them react like that? Elizabeth then turns around and orders him to make food for the queen, to which Le Ping begrudgingly accepts. Meanwhile, Bess continues to run away with his daughter and Tao. Eventually, his daughter begs them to stop, so he comes to a halt. Bess sighs. First it was the test of the legendary hero, then it was the threat of the Demon Queen. He flashbacks to just last night when the Demon Queen approached them and slashed them across their necks. Surprisingly though, it did not completely get rid of them. Instead, they found themselves with new magical collars made out of runes. Then the Demon Queen commanded the two to leave tomorrow, while never revealing the Demon Lord and legendary hero's presence in Newbie Village to the world. If not, the curse marks around their necks will make them lose their heads immediately. The two had no choice but to accept the Demon Queen's request. Once the flashback is over, they both look up to realize that they were back where they first started. Even the dead apostles' corpses were still there. Bess was surprised. He didn't think that he could run that far and that fast. In reality though, Wan Kai actually gave them a helping push, so that they would not be able to bother Le Ping and Elizabeth anymore. Bess looks around carefully though. He is aware that there should be many high-level demons around, so they should leave as soon as possible. Suddenly, Wan Kai's ears perk up as he notices that something is quickly approaching this location. However, he decides to ignore it this time. If he doesn't want to get beat up by Elizabeth, then it's best to keep his robotic nose out of people's business. He then teleports himself back home just as several cloaked figures arrive in front of Bess and Evil. Alongside them, there is also one figure without a cloak that seems to be the leader of the group. Bess looks in horror. The Dark Apostle without a cloak is the Dark Guild's Great Apostle. Seeing that the gap in their levels are too big, Evil begs her father to allow her to just leave with them while he runs away. However, Bess is done with running. Comparing the level of the legendary hero and the Demon Queen, these Dark Guild Apostles are nothing. Taking out the deck of cards Le Ping gave him, he points them toward the Apostles, which instantly obliterates some weaker ones in the group. This surprises the Great Apostle. He did not expect such power to come from such a weak-looking old man. Bess admits that ever since her mother was taken back to the elf tribe, he has become timid and started escaping from their problems. However, now he realizes that it was wrong of him to do that. If they get through this difficult time, Bess promises his daughter that he will take her to the elf tribe and bring back her mother. Taking out a 4-of-a-kind out of the deck, Bess summons a mighty 4-bomb arrow god in the image of Evil's mother to fight for them. The arrow god makes a bow and arrow out of magic and releases a magical arrow aiming at all the Dark Apostles. Before they can react, 3 apostles in the arrow's path instantly die with only the Great Apostle remaining. At first, the Great Apostle sneers and confidently grabs at the arrow. However, the Great Apostle's hubris leads to its downfall, as even with both hands the arrow is able to easily pierce through and hurt it. Once all the apostles have died, the image of the arrow god dissipates and the cards return to the deck. Bess almost collapses from exhaustion afterward as Evil rushes to her father's side. Looking at the effects of the summoned cards on the environment, Bess decides right then and there to change his profession. And that's how a new profession, the Card Master, was born. A week later, as Le Ping said earlier, the fruits in his garden start to ripen and he can be seen enjoying some watermelon in his garden. He mentions that his fruit breeding method has been very successful, but without anyone to share it with, the joy of the harvest always feels like it is missing something. Le Ping then thinks back to all the amazing jobs he has seen so far in this magical world and realizes that he is a little interested in what the outside world has to offer. The only problem is that he is too weak, so he thinks that he should just forget about it. Suddenly, a cloud of dust appears as Elizabeth teleports herself next to him. Noticing his sad expression, she asks him what was wrong. Le Ping replies that he wanted to go see the outside world, but he is too weak to do so. Hearing this, Elizabeth decides to invite him out for a trip outside. Excitedly, Le Ping asks if it's true. It would be a different story if he had the protection of the Demon Queen after all. As Elizabeth finishes her drink, she tells him to change his clothes. Soon, the two of them are dressed in new and fashionable clothing that Le Ping has made. Elizabeth lets out a rare compliment, saying that both his cooking and sewing skills are really impressive. Le Ping replies that of course they are his specialties. Now that they are all dressed up, they are both ready to go out to the outside world. With a snap of her fingers, Elizabeth opens a transfer door to teleport to the nearest town. Le Ping marvels at the convenience of such a skill. But before Elizabeth walks in the transfer door, Le Ping stops her in her tracks to set some ground rules. 1. To not leave him alone. 2. To keep her emotions stable. And 3. To act more low-key with the people outside. Of course, Le Ping seemed more demanding and arrogant in Elizabeth's vision, so it pisses her off. But nonetheless, she understands and agrees to his requests. Finally, Le Ping asks if she will come back with him after seeing the changes of the outside world. After all, with the time barrier gone, he will become food for the demonic beasts if the Demon Queen isn't near. Elizabeth agrees, but for an entirely different reason. Before she officially defeats him, the outside world means nothing to her. However, the request comes with a condition. When they return, he has to go and make her a super deluxe assorted fruit pudding. Le Ping happily agrees and follows her through the transfer door, leaving Wan Cad to guard the house. After stepping through the transfer door, he is then greeted with the sight of Fantasy Town. The name of the town is Boaster Town, a neutral place where people of all races gather and live together. Le Ping's eyes shimmer as he looks around this new and strange world. He points out an equipment shop and a food stall to Elizabeth before roaming all around the place, looking at all the wondrous and foreign sights. Meanwhile, Elizabeth looks around and isn't as excited. Instead, she seems more surprised that the changes in the outside world do not seem so significant. Le Ping agrees, saying that it is not as chaotic as Uncle Bess said it would be. Elizabeth then proudly explains that it is all because of her. Before her rule, various forces were in conflict and the situation was very chaotic. Using her absolute strength, she suppressed all those forces and created a set of rules that made them all equal. So in reality, the one who saved the hero's continent was not the legendary hero, but the demon queen. Unfortunately though, her bragging seems to fall on deaf ears as Li Ping has disappeared from his original position. Instead, he can be seen looking at a stall of a young girl selling teddy bears. It's as if Li Ping doesn't even put her accomplishment in his eyes. Li Ping takes a closer look at the dolls and compliments its stitching. He then asks the little girl if she was the one who made the doll. The little girl says yes in reply and offers to sell it to Li Ping at a lower price. But before they can finish their transaction, a gruff and demanding voice asks the girl who gave her permission to set up a stall in the area. The voice belonged to a pig-headed man who kicks away the tiny stall the girl made, sending all of her dolls flying. The pig-headed man grabs the little girl and berates her as her church has not paid them any protection money yet. The little kids who were with the girl shake in fear as they witness their big sister be interrogated for money. Defiantly, the little girl retorts that they never really protected them, so she shouldn't have to pay any protection money. The pig-headed man simply snorts and informs her that since last month this territory fell under the influence of the Beast Gang. If she wants to survive here, she will have to pay them protection money every month. Still defiant, the little girl says that what he says is not true as the church belongs to the nun, and that when the nun comes back they will all be sorry they did this. The pig-headed man simply shrugs off her threat and fires back by saying that he will drive away the orphans today and destroy the old church. Seeing this injustice, Li Ping bravely steps up and tells them to stop. But when his words turn the orc's attention to him, suddenly all of his confidence vanishes. He tries to signal help from Elizabeth, but she simply ignores him. Without his main source of power, Li Ping stands helpless as the pig-headed man barks at him again to state his intentions. He looks around at the large crowd gathers and suddenly has an idea. With a loud voice, he proclaims that a pig-headed man is bullying a little girl. They should condemn him. Unfortunately for our hero though, the surrounding crowd seems to just ignore him. This makes the pig-headed man laugh. Everyone knows their beast gang here. There is no way anybody would help him. His eyes then wander to Elizabeth as he licks his lips. He judges from their clothing that they are all foreigners from the south. Seeing that the situation is not to his favor, Li Ping tries to reason with the gang by offering some local specialties from his bag that he is willing to share. But the pig-headed man does not listen. Instead, he orders his gang members to beat him up and take the woman back to the gang and lock her up. This angers Elizabeth, who believes that there is no one qualified to imprison her, despite her being a self-proclaimed prisoner of Li Ping. Her anger instantly darkens the clouds as red lightning starts to crackle, forming the shape of an evil face. The unnatural sight makes the pig-faced man shake in fear, and he drops the little girl. Seeing that her anger might end up destroying the town, Li Ping quickly tries to calm her down. Grabbing a fan from his bag, he quickly fans Elizabeth while saying that all she needs to do is scare them. Fighting with ordinary people like them is not necessary. Elizabeth coldly harumphs before deciding that fine, she will spare them because of Li Ping's words. However, her display of magic does not escape the eyes of the little girl, who is amazed with the amount of magical power that Elizabeth has. With her anger held at bay, soon the clouds dissipated as if nothing happened at all. The pig-faced man looks around in confusion and fear at the sudden change of weather. He has no idea what just went on, but now all of a sudden he has a bad feeling when facing those two. The demon pig's body trembled with fear as he asked Elizabeth and Li Ping about why they supported the church orphans. He felt confused and nervous facing them. Li Ping, realizing that negotiations might not go smoothly, suggested a deal with the demon pig. He proposed paying for protection and asked how much money the demon pig wanted. Eager for an opportunity, the demon pig nervously quoted 10 gold coins for 2 months. Elizabeth, who overheard their conversation from the sidelines, laughed and remarked that a mere 10 gold coins were making a big fuss, and it was utterly foolish. Li Ping was surprised, and he approached Elizabeth, asking if she had a lot of gold coins. Elizabeth became really happy after Li Ping praised her and claimed that she had so many treasures that she couldn't count them all. Li Ping was taken aback and asked Elizabeth to lend him some, and he would pay back later after selling the vegetables back home. However, Elizabeth wasn't pleased with Li Ping's proposal. She didn't want him to sell his precious vegetables for a mere 10 gold coins. She called Li Ping an idiot for exchanging his food for useless things, and besides, she hadn't brought any gold coins when she came to find Li Ping. Upon hearing Elizabeth's refusal, Li Ping was greatly surprised and didn't know what would happen next. Demon Pig inquired whether Li Ping and Elizabeth would pay the money or not. Li Ping, feeling nervous, scratched his head and admitted he didn't have any gold coins. He asked if he could use the local produce in his bag as compensation. Demon Pig became furious and accused Le Ping and Elizabeth of playing games. He declared that he wouldn't tolerate their nonsense anymore and ordered his men to eliminate Le Ping and capture Elizabeth. Out of nowhere, a bag full of gold coins appeared and smacked the Demon Pig in the face. The Demon Pig got super mad and demanded to know who threw it, threatening to do harm. But then, when he checked the bag, he found it was filled with shiny gold coins, surprising him. Just then, a man named Hawthorne showed up. He had a half-human, half-horse body. He told the Demon Pig to stop bothering his friend and leave after getting the money. Turns out, Hawthorne was from the Sword Saint Guild, Thunder C. Buckthorn, a powerful and famous adventurer. After realizing he was dealing with a tough guy, the Demon Pig decided to give him some respect. He told his men to leave, but not before warning a little girl that she might not be so lucky next month. Once the Demon Pig left, Li Ping helped the little girl, who thanked them for stepping in when nobody else would. Li Ping was really happy to see the girl was okay. Li Ping also thanked Hawthorne for helping and offered him some fruits with a humble smile. Hawthorne said it was no big deal, and then turned to Elizabeth. He asked if she'd be willing to partner with him on something. The little girl adjusted her glasses and asked what he meant with his words. Hawthorne replied with a suspicious smile, suggesting they move to another place to talk. If things work out, he believed it could also solve their financial problems. Elizabeth folded her hands and expressed disinterest, instructing Le Ping to ask her not to leave. The little girl's younger siblings inquired anxiously if their sister Annie was going out, concerned about her getting into trouble again. Annie reassured them, asking them to return to the church and promising to be back soon. As they were about to enter the pub, Hawthorne advised them to stay close, as they didn't know what might happen. Upon entering, everyone in the pub stared at Elizabeth and Le Ping. One man boldly approached Elizabeth, suggesting she join him instead, as the people around her looked like trouble. Le Ping and the little girl realized that if they accepted, Elizabeth would unleash her fury and likely harm everyone present. In response to the man's comment, Elizabeth's eyes turned red, and she exuded a threatening aura. Angered, she demanded the man repeat his words. The man, terrified by Elizabeth's intense presence, shook with fear along with his companions. Elizabeth turned her head to Le Ping and said it was all his fault for insisting on coming to a lousy place and wasting her time. She was really angry at Le Ping. Le Ping was nervous and told Elizabeth that they were already there. Hawthorne asked them to enter the private room where there wouldn't be any outsiders to bother them. Hawthorne opened the door and said that he was back. Then, a bunch of cute girls surrounded Hawthorne, expressing their worry and eagerness to go out and look for him next time. They pleaded with him to take them along. Hawthorne turned his head to Le Ping and mentioned that he forgot to mention he has a few wives. Seeing this, Le Ping was shocked and didn't have any words to say. He asked Hawthorne if he really had 4 wives. Hawthorne poured tea for everyone and introduced his wife to them first. First was Gasha, a shield warrior. Then he pointed out Lulu, the assassin, Glee, a mage, and lastly, Galia, an amazing elven archer. After Le Ping mentioned he had met a girl with elf bloodline a while ago, Elizabeth interrupted, urging Hawthorne to stop with the small talk as they needed to leave. One of the girls asked Hawthorne about Elizabeth, questioning her attitude. Elizabeth, visibly angered, responded that she was only acting as a queen like she was. The cat girl found it amusing hearing someone call themselves a queen and question her master if Elizabeth's brain was okay. The elf girl observed Elizabeth, and after looking at the shape of her ears, speculated that she was a lowly half-blood elf who should not be in front of her. After she heard those words, Elizabeth threatened the elf girl, saying if she insisted on bringing destruction upon herself, then she wouldn't blame her if she faced dire consequences. Le Ping knew that if he didn't calm down Elizabeth, there would be a disaster. He took the pudding from his bag and gave it to Elizabeth. When Elizabeth saw the pudding in Le Ping's hands, her anger disappeared, and she became really happy. Le Ping felt relieved and felt lucky that he was prepared. After Elizabeth calmed down, Le Ping began his conversation with Hawthorne. He explained that they were from a very distant and nameless tribe with Elizabeth as the princess of that tribe, and Le Ping as her servant. The cat girl observed that no wonder Elizabeth acted differently. She was a tribal princess who hadn't experienced the world. Another girl chimed in, mentioning that Elizabeth hailed from that primitive tribe that worshipped the demon queen in the demon realm, explaining her rude behavior and lack of civility. Le Ping signaled for silence, placing his finger on his lips. He mentioned that Elizabeth was still getting used to things and adjusting to cultural differences. He hoped that this explanation would stop any more questions about Elizabeth. Hawthorne interrupted, telling everyone to focus on the task at hand. He was interested in having Elizabeth and Leping join his team to explore a dungeon in search of treasure. However, Hawthorne was uncertain about the scary demonic power that came from Elizabeth earlier. He wondered if she might be part of the demon race. Leping then asked for more details about the treasure dungeon. He also asked Annie, the little girl, if she knew what a treasure dungeon was. Annie answered Leping's question and explained that treasure dungeons are magical spaces created by ancient powerful beings to hide valuable things. These dungeons are usually well hidden and very dangerous. After hearing Annie's explanation, Leping got an idea of what the treasure dungeons looked like. Hawthorne mentioned that he had also put in a lot of effort to learn about that treasure dungeon. However, the condition to open the barrier was that the number of people had to reach 8. If there weren't enough people, they couldn't enter the dungeon. That was why they were looking for them to make up the numbers. Little Annie started counting to see how many people there were. After finishing, she began to cry because she realized she was the 8th member of the party. With a tearful face, she asked Hawthorne if she couldn't go with them. Leping, feeling confused after seeing Annie cry, asked her what was wrong since treasure dungeons seemed to be precious. Elizabeth paid no attention to them as she enjoyed her pudding without a care. Little Annie turned her head and explained to her brother Leping that treasure dungeons are usually very difficult. She emphasized that Elizabeth was just a mere 4-star magician and expressed concern that if she goes, she'll probably die. Leping scratched his head and admitted he didn't know much about magic levels in that world. Hawthorne reassured Leping, explaining that they only needed to help him meet the number of people condition, and the battle inside would be left to them. He promised that the treasure Elizabeth would get in the end would be no less than theirs, estimating at least a few tens of thousands of gold coins. One of Hawthorne's wives chimed in, mentioning that their master had recently single-handedly repelled several dark apostles who wanted to take Jalea, demonstrating his strength. Little Annie became really happy hearing this, realizing that with tens of thousands of gold coins from the dungeon, they could easily solve the church's financial problems without any issues. Leping asked Elizabeth to help make up the numbers. While casually enjoying her pudding, Elizabeth, not fully attentive, agreed to assist, stating she had no problem and urged them not to interrupt the Queen's enjoyment of the delicious treat. After convincing them to seek a solution, Hawthorne instructed one of his wives to retrieve a crystal ball from his bag. Placing it on the table, Leping was surprised, not understanding its purpose. Hawthorne explained that it was Glee's magic measurements crystal ball. By placing their hand on it, a bright light emerged, revealing their magic level. Hawthorne demonstrated, registering a level of 8,769. Witnessing this, Leping and the little girl, Annie, were astonished. Leping inquired about the crystal ball, learning that it visualized magic levels into numbers. It was a tool for measuring magic levels, and an 8,769 reading indicated a demon spirit level. Hawthorne had disclosed that his magical prowess reached a 4-star demon spirit level, and all his wives were accomplished grand mages, rated at 4 or 5 stars. Since they were planning to collaborate, it was important for them to be familiar with each other and work together effectively. Upon hearing Hawthorne's statement, the young girl, Annie, laid her hand on the crystal ball. The ball revealed Annie's magic level, which was at 300. One of the wives of Hawthorne commented that she had a higher value than Annie when she initially changed her job. Hawthorne's wife, however, uttered harsh words that deeply upset Annie. Overwhelmed with disappointment, Annie started crying. She then apologized to Hawthorne's wife, explaining that her magic level seemed to remain stagnant despite her efforts. On the other hand, Leping got really excited when he saw the magic crystal since he wanted to try it too. With full excitement, Leping placed his hand on the magic crystal. However, there was no immediate reaction from the crystal ball. Suddenly, a number appeared on the crystal ball, indicating that Leping's magic level was 0. Hawthorne became really confused. He had never seen something like that before. He said that even a pure martial arts user wouldn't have a magic level of 0. Leping placed his hand on his forehead and realized that someone like him, who had been farming all his life, wouldn't have magic. He sat down on his chair and whispered that he was doomed to have no magic in this life because he never learned more about magic and swordsmanship. The catgirl was really disappointed after seeing Leping's magic level and asked what he could do. After hearing these harsh words, Leping responded that he was good at something: farming. He mentioned that he recently harvested some fruit they could try. The horsemen's wives expressed their disappointment, making fun of Leping. One of the girls commented that he was a typical bumpkin from a remote area and suggested keeping the fruit for himself. The cat girl wondered if Le Ping was really just an ordinary servant because he didn't look like one. Hawthorne calmed everyone down and suggested that Princess Elizabeth should also try. However, Elizabeth wasn't listening to Hawthorne's words. Le Ping convinced Elizabeth to cooperate with them. Upon hearing this, Elizabeth got annoyed and hated the fact to accompany them to play with ignorant mortals. She placed her hand on the crystal ball, and suddenly a bright light came out of the crystal ball, becoming so intense that no one could see what was happening. Le Ping was really scared. He thought if Elizabeth's identity as the Demon Queen got exposed, it would definitely cause a big uproar. He asked Elizabeth to control her magic level so they wouldn't reveal her true identity. Elizabeth replied that she knew what she was doing and wouldn't reveal her true power. She thought it was rare to come out, so she'd play along with Le Ping. She controlled her power, surprising everyone. After some time, the crystal ball started showing Elizabeth's magic level. Her level was 8,000. Little girl Annie announced to everyone that big sis Elizabeth's level was just like Horse Brothers, a demon spirit level of strength. Hawthorne's wives were really surprised. They didn't understand how this girl's level was similar to their husbands. One of the girls couldn't believe that Elizabeth was a 4-star demon. Le Ping felt relieved seeing that Elizabeth had control over her magic power level. On the other hand, the horseman said that Elizabeth was truly amazing and worthy of being the princess of the kingdom. With her joining, their chances of getting the treasure would greatly increase. Little girl Annie asked Hawthorne how they could go to that treasure dungeon. Le Ping also thought this was his second time going out, and he encountered such a good thing. He could learn from them. Hawthorne asked one of his wives to tell them how they would go to the treasure dungeon. His wife said okay and retrieved a scroll from her bag. She threw the scroll in the air and it started glowing. This was a teleportation scroll. With this, they could teleport directly to the treasure dungeon. After using the teleportation scroll, they teleported into the dungeon. Le Ping felt really surprised, saying he was dizzy from the teleportation. Little girl Annie got scared after seeing an unknown aura from the dungeon. But Elizabeth didn't care about the dungeon. She had already faced more dangerous things than this dungeon. Hawthorne called everyone and suggested they not delay, urging entrance into the treasure dungeon. Observing this, Elizabeth expressed her reluctance, informing Le Ping that she preferred not to participate and advised him to head home. Startled by Elizabeth's decision, Hawthorne and his wives exchanged surprised glances. A girl inquired about Elizabeth's sudden change of heart, questioning if she was playing games with them by altering her decision at the 11th hour. 2 others chimed in, asking if Elizabeth was aware of the considerable amount of crystals and magic power required to craft the teleportation scroll. They cautioned that if she chose not to enter, the group should abandon any thoughts of leaving as well. After hearing this, Elizabeth got angry and asked them if they had the power. Why didn't they try to stop her? Le Ping came forward and asked everyone not to be impulsive and listen to him for a moment. Le Ping had an idea, and in the next moment, he started begging Elizabeth, saying that since she came here, she should just take an in. Annie asked Elizabeth if she also noticed inside the cave there was a magic power that was very similar to Elizabeth. After hearing Annie's words, Le Ping thought, a magic power that is very similar to Elizabeth's? What did she mean? He didn't get what Annie was actually saying. The horseman came forward, pushed Le Ping, and asked Elizabeth to trust him. No matter what danger she encountered inside, he would protect her. He insisted that she go in with him, addressing her as Princess Elizabeth. Elizabeth didn't care about him. She instructed Le Ping to follow her, mentioning that she would play with him since he rarely came out. Le Ping started following Elizabeth without saying a word. Observing this, Hawthorne gritted his teeth in frustration. They began entering the dungeon one by one. Annie was genuinely surprised after entering the dungeon for the first time. Once inside, Le Ping noticed the dungeon barrier closing. He asked if they couldn't go back the way they came. Elizabeth explained that in this special magic space, it was impossible to leave by transfer magic unless they were stronger than the person who set up the barrier. Unless they found the target location and met the requirements of the barrier setter, none of them could leave. After some time, they reached the main entrance of the dungeon. One of the girls said that as long as they had their master with them, they would definitely get that thing. Another girl whispered, questioning what they would do if they found out about that thing. Annie overheard their conversation and asked Sister Gilia what they meant by that thing. Girl Gilia ignored Annie's question and mentioned that it was gold coins and treasure. She reassured Annie that they wouldn't be left out. On the other hand, Le Ping asked about the forks in front of them and wondered where they should go. With Elizabeth backing them up, Le Ping thought it was no problem. The adventure officially began. The cat girl asked Hawthorne which way they should go and if they needed to split up. Hawthorne said they didn't have to split up for the time being and asked one of the girls to use that move. The pink-haired girl agreed and used her magic wand to find the right route to the treasure. She told Elizabeth that she'd find the shortest route to the treasure in no time. Elizabeth smiled and remarked that she was just ignorant and didn't know how big the world was. After some time, the pink-haired girl learned that there were many treasure boxes, but she also discovered that there were monsters in this dungeon and all the monsters were at the boss level. After finding that much, her mana drained out and she couldn't check more. After a while, Hawthorne questioned the pink-haired girl about the maze's situation and if she explored it thoroughly. The pink-haired girl replied that the maze seemed endless. She extended her magic to the limit but found no trace of the edge. Hearing this, two other girls were surprised, exclaiming that Glee's magic reach was only 3 kilometers. They suggested using spirit divination, but it had a low accuracy rate of 34%. Despite the uncertainty, they considered using the clone technique in groups for support. Leping turned to Elizabeth and asked if she knew the right way. Elizabeth smiled, stating confidently that the maze was just an illusion. She believed the ignorant youngsters would never escape. Leping asked why she wouldn't help, offering to repay the favor quickly. Elizabeth changed her mind, expressing her desire to watch them perish together. As time passed, they encountered many tunnels, with one possibly leading to the treasure. Annie, a little girl, suggested taking the third cave to reach the destination. Leping, excited, asked how she knew. Annie admitted it was a guess, sensing a special magic coming from that direction. The pink-haired girl dismissed Annie's words, questioning why she didn't feel to mention magic and insulting her, claiming a mere 4-star mage shouldn't make random comments. After hearing the harsh words from the pink-haired girl, Annie became scared and apologized. The pink-haired girl mentioned that they hadn't explored the bottom yet, and based on no information, the last passage typically had fewer monsters. She suggested they go that way, claiming she could safely scout them to the treasure. Upon hearing this, Hawthorne asked the cat girl for her opinion. She still believed it was better to work in small teams for faster exploration. Another girl suggested following the pink-haired girl, even if they made a mistake, as they could always go back together. The pink-haired girl asked Hawthorne to trust her in leading them safely to the treasure. Hawthorne agreed to act together in the last cave. Annie, however, protested loudly, saying they could go anywhere else but not the last cave. She summoned a cute rabbit doll and sent it to the last tunnel, only for a huge monster to emerge and devour the doll, leaving only its head. Leping, frightened by the scene, asked what the creature was. Elizabeth explained it was a parasitic beast often found in the bodies of huge monsters. The cat girl asked if the explored area was the corpse in its stomach. The pink-haired girl got angry at Annie for exposing her. After some time, Elizabeth suggested letting them struggle on their own and asked Leping to go. Leping, scratching his head, asked if it would be better for Elizabeth to lead the way, considering they didn't know what dangers awaited them. Elizabeth and Leping headed towards the tunnel. Annie asked if they were going in the right direction and requested them to wait for her. The cat girl asked Hawthorne if she should use a clone to follow them and gather information. Hawthorne advised against it, thinking Elizabeth wouldn't make such a calm choice without confidence, hinting at her mysterious background. Hawthorne decided to follow them with his wise. On the other side, deep in the dungeon, a huge glowing monster's eye appeared. Shortly after, monsters began to attack them. They fought bravely, and Hawthorne asked his wife if they had solved the problem. The warrior girl reassured them, saying they had eliminated the remaining monsters, but new ones kept coming in waves on the road. On the other side, Leping and little Annie hid behind Elizabeth. Leping asked if it was safe, and if any monsters remained. Elizabeth turned her head to Leping, visibly angry, and scolded him for being a terrible actor. The pink-haired girl blamed Annie for leading them to a road full of monsters, insisting they should have followed her advice to find the treasure. Elizabeth defended Annie, explaining that concentrated magic attracts monsters, something the pink-haired girl, as a mage, should know. Frustrated, the pink-haired girl accused Elizabeth of being a powerful demon spirit who cared little about others. Elizabeth argued it was their problem and part of their agreement to handle the monsters. Hawthorne stepped forward, asking the pink-haired girl to calm down, reminding her of their promise to protect them. The pink-haired girl grew angrier, thinking Elizabeth not only embarrassed her, but also dared to seduce the master. The elf girl suggested they rest to recover energy after the prolonged monster fights. Elizabeth disagreed, claiming she had no extra time to waste on them. The cat girl, frustrated, questioned why Elizabeth didn't go on alone if she was so capable. The elf girl agreed, stating they blocked monsters for her. Hawthorne urged Elizabeth to listen and proposed a break for everyone to recover. He offered an elf potion to help with their stamina. Le Ping, curious about the potion, asked Elizabeth if he could try it, making a cute face and suggesting it might inspire his cooking. Elizabeth, thinking Le Ping had already enjoyed many good things, gave him permission and they set up camp to rest. The pink-haired girl praised Galia's elf potion, saying it really worked. The warrior girl said she had finally recovered, though she wasn't sure how long it would take to find the treasure. The elf girl took a potion from her storage ring and offered it to Elizabeth, calling it her special elf potion that enhances various states. Elizabeth, being powerful, declined, but Hawthorne intervened, telling the elf girl not to be rude and instructing her to give a potion to everyone. Unhappily, she tossed a potion to Elizabeth, who caught it but wasn't pleased. Elizabeth gave the potion to Le Ping, who, after tasting it, found the grassy flavor too strong and decided not to drink it. He offered it to Annie, who thanked him but explained that she hadn't used much magic power so she didn't need it. After hearing Le Ping's criticism of his potion, the elf girl expressed displeasure, deeming it a waste on someone with no magic power. Elizabeth, not pleased with the elf girl's words, dumped the potion into the fire, further infuriating her. She questioned Elizabeth about dumping her elf potion, to which Elizabeth coldly responded that she agreed with the elf girl's thoughts, showing no regard for the potions. Le Ping intervened, calming everyone down and stating that he had something for everyone that shouldn't be crushed. He retrieved bananas from his bag, expressing his desire to share them. Le Ping gave a banana to Hawthorne and distributed bananas to everyone. Finally, he gave an apple to Annie, mentioning that the bananas had all been divided and asking if she could eat an apple. Annie got emotional after receiving the apple. She asked if he was really giving it to her, surprising Le Ping, who thought it was just an apple and saw no need for tears. Annie asked Le Ping if she could take the apple back to her brother and sister. The orphans in the orphanage hadn't eaten fresh fruit for a long time. After hearing Annie's story, Le Ping understood why she was crying. He told her that of course she could take it back, and he'd pick some more for her when he got home to send over. Le Ping promised Annie that everyone in the orphanage could eat fresh fruit. The pink-haired girl threw the banana that Le Ping gave her, saying she didn't care about this rotten fruit and didn't need it. The elf girl also agreed, stating that it couldn't be compared with her elf potion. Hawthorne suggested they fill their stomachs for now, and when they got the treasure, he'd treat them to something good. They started eating bananas, and after the first bite, they felt something strange. Their bodies started glowing, and in the next moment, they found themselves in the forest. They asked what place it was, and suddenly, 3 grasshoppers appeared and started singing. They asked the group to dance with them, and all 3 of them started dancing. Le Ping was confused, not knowing what they were doing. This was the effect of the banana. The pink-haired girl and elf girl, who didn't eat the banana, were really surprised. The elf girl asked Hawthorne what he was doing. After eating bananas, Hawthorne and his wives leveled up. They didn't understand what was happening. Their magic levels kept rising. When Le Ping saw their dance performance, he was surprised. He clapped and called it a bonfire performance, showing he genuinely liked it. Le Ping also said that the cultural customs of the other world were interesting, making it worth coming out to see centaur dancing. Elizabeth, watching Le Ping's happiness, thought he knew about potential danger ahead and had enhanced them in advance to continue the game. On the other hand, the elf girl who didn't eat the banana was puzzled. She asked what was going on, wondering how their magic levels suddenly shot up so much. When Annie saw their surprise, she explained that it was because they ate the bananas. However, the pink-haired girl didn't believe Annie. She dismissed it as nonsense, questioning if those broken bananas were soaked in holy water to boost stats. The warrior girl told the pink-haired girl, Gilia, that it was the banana that made them break through and advance. She mentioned ascending to a 2-star demon spirit just a few seconds after eating the banana. The Catril agreed, stating that just after they ate the banana, they entered a new realm. She wondered if the banana was enchanted by a magician of the demon's sovereign level. Hawthorne added that after eating, he broke through 3 stages in a row, directly ascending to a 3-star great demon spirit. Finding it unbelievable, he asked Le Ping about the origin of the bananas he gave them. On the other side, Le Ping was really confused. He didn't understand Hawthorne's words. For Le Ping, these bananas were just ordinary. Getting this reaction from Le Ping, Hawthorne asked what was wrong. Le Ping said nothing, mentioning that being suddenly asked by him, he didn't know how to answer because they were just ordinary bananas. Hawthorne was not pleased with Le Ping's words, thinking it should be a hybrid crop that Le Ping grew with some magic item. Le Ping clarified that he grew these bananas with natural and organic farming, a production method he thought of in this world full of magic. Hearing about the magical banana from their master, the pink-haired girl and the elf girl decided to eat it to increase their magic levels. After taking a bite, the banana rotted and the pink-haired girl threw it away, saying it was clearly bad. After seeing this, little Annie said it was synchronicity. Elizabeth praised her for knowing what synchronicity meant. Annie mentioned that she learned it from the magic books. Hawthorne asked Annie what synchronicity meant. Annie explained that the nuns' magic books mentioned special treasures usually had to be used under special conditions to exert their effects. She guessed that Le Ping's banana had to be eaten by 3 or more people at the same time to produce an effect. Upon hearing this, the pink-haired girl became angry at Annie. She questioned why Annie pretended to know things she didn't. The pink-haired girl pointed out that Elizabeth ate the banana herself, and hers didn't rot. Annie apologized, admitting she didn't know either. She suggested that unless the user's strength completely surpassed the treasure, it was nothing more than an ordinary thing to them. On the other side, Elizabeth ate her banana without any problems. The elf girl warned Annie not to look at her with her eyes. Annie apologized, and the elf girl suggested that maybe it was because of Hawthorne's accumulated elf potion over time that produced the effect. Hawthorne asked Le Ping if he could share more fruits from his backpack to test if they were real. The elf girl questioned if Hawthorne actually believed their nonsense about the magical banana. Le Ping happily said that sharing is the greatest joy and started getting more fruits from his bag. Meanwhile, Elizabeth had already finished eating her banana. She snatched Le Ping's backpack and declared that those were what she was going to eat later. She refused to give her precious fruits to anyone else and told Le Ping to leave when they've rested enough because the journey was almost over. Le Ping apologized to Hawthorne and said he would treat him well when he had the chance. Hawthorne understood the situation and told Le Ping to go ahead as he would catch up with his wives. After packing up, Le Ping was grateful and suggested they set off together. Elizabeth interrupted, urging him to hurry up, or she would leave without him. Le Ping agreed and asked Hawthorne to gather up ahead and meet later. Seeing this, Hawthorne's wives were not happy. The cat girl suggested they snatch the backpack away, as they might be hiding something even better. Hawthorne calmed down his wives and said there was no rush since it wasn't the right time yet. He also mentioned that ordinary people wouldn't casually carry such precious treasures. The assumed Elizabeth was definitely not a simple princess from a remote tribe. Recently, one of the 4 major powers, the Kingdom of Aristotle, was offering a high reward for information on the missing princess. If he was not mistaken, that princess was right in front of him now. If he could turn the princess into his woman during this opportunity, he could climb the ranks of the Kingdom of Aristotle's power. By then, he would gain more than just these magical fruits. Before him, Hawthorne started laughing loudly and declared he would conquer Elizabeth and make her one of his harem girls. Seeing Hawthorne like this, his 4 wives started praising him, saying a charming pheromone was emanating from the master. They blamed themselves, stating that they hadn't been able to satisfy their master yet. In the maze's depths, many monsters lurked in the shadows. One of them was the powerful shadow wolf leader. Suddenly, it got really scared and hastily ran away. Shortly after, 3 individuals entered the cave: Elizabeth, Le Ping, and the little girl Annie. Le Ping asked Elizabeth about the mysterious labyrinth, questioning if there was indeed an exit. Elizabeth replied that she had already told him the labyrinth was just an illusion. And they were almost there. They proceeded deeper into the cave, but something unexpected happened. From the cave ceiling, a strange thing emerged. Annie got frightened by the noises and alerted Le Ping. Le Ping asked her to explain, but before they could understand, something swiftly approached them, and smoke enveloped everyone. When the smoke cleared, Hawthorne arrived with his wives. He apologized for the delay and sought forgiveness from Elizabeth. Hawthorne offered to serve Elizabeth for the remainder of the journey, even suggesting she could sit on his back. However, Elizabeth, being a strong, independent woman, told him to get lost, stating he wasn't qualified to be her mount. The elf girl, unhappy with Elizabeth's response, called her arrogant and asked her not to be shameless when their master was showing her respect. Suddenly, the elf girl's head exploded, leaving everyone in shock and confusion, unsure of what just happened. Stones fell from above as Le Ping turned his head towards the ceiling. He saw insect monsters called dragon fleas, who had devoured the head of an elf girl. One of them jumped down, opening its big mouth full of sharp teeth to attack Elizabeth. However, it didn't realize who Elizabeth was. Elizabeth's eyes glowed red, and in an instant, the monster exploded. Little Annie, a girl in the group, got really scared, thinking they were in serious trouble and everyone would die. Le Ping was scared too and ran to Elizabeth, catching her leg. He urgently asked Elizabeth what they should do next. Upon seeing Li Ping's actions, Elizabeth thought that Le Ping wanted to test human nature. She believed he intended to let the selfish and arrogant ones destroy themselves first, viewing it as his first step in testing them all. The dragonfly monsters started attacking with high speed. The warrior girl grabbed a carriage and transformed it into a shield. The pink-haired girl began casting spells, creating a shield barrier and getting Hawthorne and the warrior girl inside. Seeing this, Le Ping asked what about them. Hawthorne smiled and instructed Le Ping to find a way by themselves, thinking it was a good opportunity to test Elizabeth's strength. The warrior girl arrogantly declared that cooperation was over, and the pink-haired girl suggested Le Ping stay outside as bait. Suddenly, the barrier the pink-haired girl created was destroyed, and her head went flying. Witnessing this, the warrior girl became really scared. With the pink-haired girl eliminated, the magic barrier disappeared, and monsters started attacking Hawthorne and his two remaining wives. Meanwhile, Le Ping remained hidden behind Elizabeth. Hawthorne used his thunderbolt flash to defeat monsters in a single strike. The warrior girl relied on her shield strike to take them down. The catgirl, skilled in assassination, used her short blade technique. However, no matter how they fought, the monsters seemed endless. If this continued, they would become exhausted. During a moment of rest, a monster suddenly attacked the catgirl from above. Luckily, Hawthorne saved her using his clapping thunderback step. Despite their efforts, the monsters kept coming. Elizabeth asked Le Ping if, after seeing their true colors, he still wanted to continue the adventure game with them. Le Ping decided it was time to part ways. He felt that the outside world was too unpredictable, and maybe farming in the village suited him better. Elizabeth smiled, realizing that Le Ping first tested them, then determined if they were worth saving. This was his third step. She asked Le Ping to get ready to leave. Hearing this, Le Ping asked if they could go out. Annie grabbed Le Ping's hand and pulled him, saying that the way was just ahead. Suddenly, a monster approached from behind and attacked little Annie. She got scared, and her normal eyes turned red. Her bunny doll transformed into a giant bunny and defeated the monster with one attack. Afterward, it changed back to a normal bunny, and Annie caught it, unsure of what just happened. Before Annie could think, Le Ping asked her to join them. Elizabeth stopped, knocked in the air, and created an invisible barrier. After casting a magic spell, the barrier disappeared, revealing a giant door. Le Ping was surprised to see the hidden exit. The giant door opened, and Elizabeth entered, urging Le Ping and Annie to catch up. Ignoring Hawthorne's stares, Le Ping asked Annie to follow Elizabeth. Both went through the door, leaving Hawthorne and his wives fighting monsters. Hawthorne, furious, told his wives to get on his back, running towards the giant door with full speed. They reached it just in time, entering before it closed. Inside, they were surprised to find a room filled with gold and jewelry. They were all really surprised to find themselves standing on a flying island filled with treasure. Le Ping got really excited when he saw all the gold. Le Ping exclaimed that there was so much gold, and now they were rich. Little girl Annie was also there, wondering if they could really take some of it. Suddenly, a horseman came and pushed Le Ping aside. The horseman's wife pushed Annie too. Hawthorne stood in front, smiling after seeing the treasure. Hawthorne had been working hard to find it, and now he knew it was real. The treasure he was talking about was the Demon King's nectar. Le Ping interrupted them, asserting that now that they had found the treasure, they had to share it without expecting gratitude, urging them not to be unreasonable. However, Hawthorne wasn't happy. He looked back at Le Ping and expressed his dissatisfaction, mentioning that he hadn't expected them all to be so helpful in filling the numbers. He smiled like a demon and declared that, as a thank you gesture, he would allow them to die quickly. Before Hawthorne could take any action, gold coins started falling, and a big yellow eye opened from the pile of coins. The entire island shook, and a big dragon appeared in front of everyone. The golden dragon, the owner of all the treasure, was revealed. Witnessing the dragon, Le Ping was genuinely surprised. He called Elizabeth and asked her to look at it. This marked the first time Le Ping had seen a real dragon, but Elizabeth didn't seem to care. On the other side, Annie's entire body shook with fear. She mentioned that there was something even more terrifying hidden. Suddenly, her eyes turned black and she inquired, "Master, what do we do now?" Upon spotting little Annie in such a state, Elizabeth grew suspicious. However, before she could voice her concerns, the golden dragon let out a loud roar at Hawthorne and his wives. The warrior girl turned to Hawthorne and the cat girl, seeking guidance on dealing with the powerful dragon. Ignoring their inquiries, Hawthorne urged them to buy him some time while he charged up to deliver a single lethal strike. Agreeing to Hawthorne's plan, the cat girl and warrior girl prepared to attack the dragon. Yet the dragon struck first, forcing all three to step back and regroup. Determined to find a strategy, the warrior girl asked the cat girl to distract the dragon while she attacked. Using her clone technique, the cat girl created 100 clones to assail the dragon. Meanwhile, Hawthorne, confident that the giant dragon was the sole threat, decided to unleash his full magical power. He smiled as he gathered energy for his most potent move, the swift thunder flash. As his sword began to glow, he concentrated all his energy into the weapon. On the other side, the cat girl's continuous attacks with her assassination technique proved ineffective. Her skills failed to make a dent in the dragon, leaving her puzzled. Sensing the challenge, the powered-up warrior girl stepped in, requesting the cat girl to let her handle the situation. Employing her shield transformation blaster skill, she threw a massive shield equipped with rockets directly at the golden dragon, ensuring a direct hit. The warrior girl was happy, thinking her new move had worked after becoming a 2-star demon spirit. However, her joy shattered when she saw the dragon completely unharmed by the massive shield hit. The dragon, now angry, attacked the warrior girl with its giant foot. Without her shield, she couldn't protect herself and got smashed, leaving only her broken body and some blood on the ground. Witnessing this horrifying scene, the cat girl became really mad. She activated her Thousanders clone technique, and in the next moment, numerous cat girls emerged, attacking the dragon. Despite the cat girl's belief that she could disturb the dragon, it countered with a skill called Golden Hurricane. Gold coins surrounding the dragon formed a tornado, and he used them to throw and subdue the cat girls one by one. The cat girl's clones started to die. As the dragon got faster, Ling and Elizabeth also faced attacks from the gold coins. Ling just stood there without doing anything, and the gold coins flew past him. Elizabeth gazed at Ling and commented on his apparent calmness. Little did she know, Ling was actually terrified as he had just narrowly escaped death from the dragon's recent attack. The relentless dragon continued its assault. Annie, a young girl with unusual powers, activated her dollhouse release summon technique. A massive bear emerged, shielding them from the dragon's onslaught. As Hawthorne cast his skills, gold coins flew towards him. The cat girl, loyal to her master, defended him with her sword. However, a stray gold coin struck her head, ending her protection. Now only Hawthorne remained. Confident in his abilities, he completed his skill casting and unleashed his 300% lightning flash technique at the dragon's neck. To his dismay, the attack had no effect. The dragon stood unharmed, and Hawthorne's sword shattered into pieces. Shocked and confused, he fretted over his broken sword, and the dragon struck him with its tail, sending him flying to the other side of the island, crashing into Treasure Mountain. Hawthorne was unaware that the dragon they were facing was a formidable 4-star level demon sect monster. After dealing with that horseman, the dragon stood in front of Ling's group. Upon witnessing Hawthorne's fight with the dragon, Ling wondered if the centaur had died from its tail slap. It seemed like he had to use his trump card, so he called Elizabeth. When Elizabeth asked what he was going to do next, Ling, with a serious expression, instructed her to take action. Surprised, Elizabeth thought Ling had found out something, but she was mistaken. Ling was scared and urged her to take action, warning that they might die. Responding with an annoyed expression, Elizabeth instructed Ling not to order her in front of outsiders. She felt angry, suspecting that Ling intended to use little girl Annie to threaten her. As they conversed, little girl Annie suddenly remarked that the real terror hadn't come yet, and they might never get out of there. Hearing this, Elizabeth sensed that something was off. Approaching little girl Annie, Elizabeth examined her and immediately realized that Annie had the bloodline of Jimji. She asked Annie to show her what her magic was all about. Elizabeth had placed her hand on Annie's head, and a purple light surrounded her body. After that, Annie began recalling her past, where she used to play and eat with her younger siblings. One day, black-robed monsters attacked them, attempting to harm Annie and her siblings. In a sudden awakening of her bloodline power, Annie unintentionally unleashed a force that not only defeated the monsters but tragically took the lives of her younger siblings. The trauma from that day haunted Annie, leading her to forcefully suppress her magic and alter her memories. Upon discovering the truth, Elizabeth released her magic, letting go of Annie. As Annie fell to the ground, Elizabeth criticized herself, calling her stupid. Little Annie, overwhelmed with guilt, apologized to her deceased brother and sister, admitting she was the one who caused their deaths. Unmoved, Elizabeth declared Annie a disgrace to the Jimji clan's bloodline. Despite the harsh words, Elizabeth challenged Annie to break free from the prison of regret and stand up to fight. In response, Annie agreed, determined to protect her brother, Le Ping. As she stood up, she began to float in the sky, surprising Le Ping. Annie then utilized her puppet magic summon skill, bringing forth numerous large and powerful puppets. The sight angered the golden dragon, which attacked Annie, only to be blocked by her panda puppet's fluffy body. Panda grabbed the dragon's leg, making it unable to move. On the other side, the rabbit doll began attacking the dragon repeatedly in the same spot. These constant strikes caused the golden dragon's tough body to start breaking, and it screamed in pain. Le Ping asked Elizabeth what she did to Annie earlier and how Annie changed so much. Elizabeth explained that she didn't do much, just helped Annie accept reality. The golden dragon attacked the rabbit again and pushed it to the ground. Annie struggled with the dragon and commanded her rabbit puppet to grab the dragon's other leg. When the dragon attacked the rabbit, it grabbed its hand. Both the panda and rabbit were stopping the dragon from moving, and little Annie commanded her snake puppet to attack the dragon. The snake puppet grabbed the dragon's whole body and began attacking. The dragon tried to counter with its golden hurricane, but little Annie's eagle puppet used wind magic to halt the dragon's attack. All the coins that were meant to cause harm started flying away due to the wind magic. Le Ping was genuinely surprised after witnessing Annie's power and praised her as truly amazing. He remembered what Elizabeth had said before and asked her what she meant by Annie having the Jimji bloodline. Before he could finish his words, someone grabbed Le Ping's bag and snatched it with lightning speed. Due to that, Le Ping fell to the ground. The one who attacked him was Hawthorne, who was still alive. He grabbed Le Ping's bag, which contained magical fruits. Upon seeing Hawthorne alive, Elizabeth remarked that the scum hadn't died yet. On the other side, Le Ping, who had been robbed of his bag, asked Hawthorne to give it back. However, Hawthorne paid no attention to them. He opened the bag and took out Le Ping's fruits. While laughing like a creep, he claimed Le Ping's fruits were now his. He started eating Le Ping's magical fruits one by one without stopping. Le Ping, confused, asked him what he was doing, saying it was already late and he shouldn't be eating. However, after consuming Le Ping's magical fruits, something started changing in Hawthorne's body. Purple smoke emerged, and his eyes began to shine. He exclaimed that his true power was coming. Suddenly, his body started to grow, and all the armor he was wearing fell off one by one. Hawthorne transformed into an ugly monster, and his level became unknown. He declared that the power pouring out had awakened unprecedented strength in his body, laughing like a villain. Hawthorne talked about not being scared of the elders from the Sword Saint Guild hearing his trash talk. Golden Dragon got angry and attacked him with its breath. Quickly, Hawthorne dodged the attack and appeared in front of the dragon. He told the dragon to stop bothering him, called it a lizard, and kicked it in the face. The dragon flew away and fell with just one blow. After killing it, Hawthorne went for the treasure in the middle. He found a coffin filled with some liquid and said that adding it would make him incredibly strong. Drinking it, he immediately felt its effects. His eyes turned red and his body started changing. Horns emerged from his head and wings popped out from his back. He evolved into an evil form, claiming it was the Demon King's sweet wine. Le Ping and others noticed Hawthorne getting strange. Le Ping asked Elizabeth to do something, but little Annie, standing in front, bravely assured Le Ping she wouldn't let Hawthorne get close. She started casting her puppet magic, but before she could finish, Hawthorne closed the gap and stabbed her with his arm, ending her life. Hawthorne declared that he would eliminate anyone he saw as a threat. Le Ping was shocked when he saw Annie in that state, his eyes filled with tears. Hawthorne threw Annie aside and approached Le Ping, declaring that it was now his turn. However, Le Ping rushed to Annie, grabbed her hand, and urged her to hang in there because Elizabeth would come to her rescue. Hawthorne then confronted Elizabeth, stating that he knew she was hiding her strength, but it didn't matter. He presented her with two choices: either willingly become his woman, return to her kingdom, and help him inherit everything, or be slowly manipulated by him until she became useless, serving as a bargaining chip for his desires. With a disgusting laugh, he reveled in his plans. This angered Le Ping, who implored Elizabeth to get rid of Hawthorne immediately. Hawthorne, infuriated by Le Ping's words, dismissed him as a trash servant. He leaped towards Le Ping, attacking with his Thunder Road. However, a massive explosion occurred upon impact sending Hawthorne flying and breaking all his legs. Smoke enveloped everyone, and as it cleared, Ping declared that he wouldn't pretend anymore. Hawthorne pulled back, feeling thoroughly confused by what had just transpired. It seemed like the damage caused by his attack had instantly bounced back at him. Looking at Elizabeth in front of him, he asked if she was responsible. However, Elizabeth ignored him, completely focused on Ping. She knew that even her powerful demon magic couldn't harm the clothes Ping had crafted himself. Thinking that Ping intentionally manipulated him into attacking, Elizabeth believed he was paving the way for his own downfall. Ping's clothes radiated a beautiful blue light as he addressed Hawthorne, mentioning that everyone called him the hero. In a playful manner, Ping teased about showing his true power, but quickly returned to reality, feeling nervous. Ping believed that as long as he served Elizabeth and provided her with delicious food, she would protect him. He was confident that Elizabeth wouldn't let him die, regardless of the danger. In the face of any threat, anyone attempting to harm him would be akin to trying to destroy the queen's rice bowl in the eyes of the demon queen. On the other hand, Hawthorne found Elizabeth's behavior truly perplexing. With a devilish laugh, he remarked on her pride and forgetfulness. Claiming that he had only used less than half of his strength earlier, he looked at Elizabeth with anger and said that despite his great prowess, she had rejected him. Shouting at her to die for him, he leaped into the air, declaring that the next attack would be a full blow, challenging her to rebound it. Before he could reach Elizabeth, however, someone else intervened. A forceful attack crushed Hawthorne's face, causing him to fall to the ground with a solid impact. Elizabeth stood there without any fear, asking if Hawthorne had finally woken up. Hawthorne lay on the ground, his body crushed and in immense pain. Confused, he questioned what had just happened. Suddenly, something descended from the sky. The golden dragon, so massive that the floating island they were on seemed tiny in comparison. Hawthorne, realizing the dragon's true form, was perplexed about the creature he had recently murdered, which began melting and merging back into the dragon's tail. Elizabeth, observing the scene, teased the dragon, thinking it was using its tail as a pet. She revealed that this was the Dragon Void realm form, and she was the Golden Dragon Queen, a one-star demon king with the power to destroy the entire island with a mere hand gesture. Frightened, Hawthorne insisted it was impossible for him to lose, claiming the power of a demon king. However, before he could say more, the Golden Dragon ended him with a touch of her fingertip. With that, Hawthorne met his demise, leaving Ping astonished. Ping, surprised, questioned Elizabeth about the reality of the situation, but Elizabeth misunderstood, thinking Ping was pretending to have known about the golden dragon long ago. Suddenly, everything turned gold and the whole island started disappearing. Elizabeth explained to Ping that this space where they were wasn't real. It was just an illusion created by the dragon. After everything disappeared, everyone was floating. Ping was really surprised to see themselves floating in space. Elizabeth got annoyed after seeing Ping like this. The next moment, the dragon said something to Elizabeth in the demon language, and Elizabeth replied to him in the demon language. After hearing Elizabeth's words, the dragon started crying like a 4-year-old child, and tears started falling from her eyes. Suddenly, smoke covered the dragon's whole body, and that giant golden dragon turned into a cute loli. The dragon girl cried as she had been waiting for her master for a long time. This crybaby loli was Amelia, Elizabeth's pet. Amelia hugged Elizabeth tightly. Elizabeth looked at her and reminded her that she was already promoted to a demon king level. Elizabeth originally didn't want to come here and wake Amelia up because she was so clingy, but Amelia caught Elizabeth's leg and while crying begged her not to leave her again. She was left for 500 years without saying a word. Of course, the lowly dragon would miss her master. In a flashback, Elizabeth discovered Amelia as an egg and used her magical power to hatch it. They made a contract, and then Elizabeth personally guided, trained, and played with Amelia. Amelia promised to serve and protect Elizabeth. As Amelia grew up, she carried Elizabeth on her back to fight evil creatures. Eventually, Elizabeth decided to rule the world to end the ongoing war. Amelia was happy for her master's success, but she noticed Elizabeth's smile fading as she became more powerful and Amelia felt less useful. While Amelia was on patrol, Elizabeth took the holy sword and set out to find the legendary hero, but she never returned. 10 years passed, and Aristotle, the minister of mankind, noticed an increase in crime since Elizabeth's disappearance. Mughal, the minister of orcs, agreed that it was hard to control the orcs without their queen, so the orc tribe decided to split up. Heimerdinger, the Minister of Dwarves, suggested taking action in their regions to stabilize the danger before the Queen's return. Twila, the Minister of Elves, wondered about Jimji's thoughts on the Queen encountering the hero, as he had been with her the longest. Jimji, the Minister of Demons, knew how powerful their queen was and offered to search for her. Malfoy suggested dispersing and also decided to search for the Queen himself, feeling anxious about the situation. In the end, the ministers scattered everything and divided the regions. Amelia wasn't interested in the regions, she just took a bottle of wine. She went back to where Elizabeth first found her, thinking her master would come one day. Amelia waited and waited, through changing seasons and terrains for hundreds of years. Now Amelia cried with tears and snot, expressing how long she had waited. Elizabeth saw it as a positive thing, as Amelia had abandoned her playfulness and embraced meditation, helping her reach the Demon King level. Amelia pleaded once more for her master not to leave, believing the 500 years alone were meant for her to learn meditation and attain the Demon King level. Leping had interrupted their reunion and urged Elizabeth to stop discussing the past, emphasizing the need to quickly rescue Annie. Annie woke up and searched for Leping, puzzled by their surroundings as they floated in space. Leping was relieved to see Annie in good health. Although Annie insisted she was okay, she hesitated and pulled something from her bag. The apple Leping had given her, now crushed. Leping comforted her, assuring her it was not a big deal. Meanwhile, Elizabeth assumed Leping had everything under control, particularly when it came to dividing the bananas. Amelia, on the other hand, started behaving affectionately towards Elizabeth, rubbing her cheeks on her legs. Elizabeth, however, remained focused on Leping. This caught Amelia off guard, and she couldn't help but feel annoyed, questioning why her master was paying attention to Leping and not giving her a second glance. Like a cautious pet dog, Amelia had inquired about the identity of Leping. Elizabeth nonchalantly introduced Leping as the legendary hero and mentioned staying at his house during her absence. Armed with this knowledge, Amelia sought out Leping to settle both existing and newfound grievances. She harbored resentment toward him for separating her from her master for 500 years. With a friendly demeanor, Leping introduced himself to Amelia. The dragon girl, realizing she was already at the Demon King level, decided to team up with her master to take down the legendary hero. Amelia activated her Dragon King's claw and with a smile charged at Leping with the intention of ending him. Despite delivering a powerful blow, Amelia was bewildered when nothing happened and her arms returned to normal. Leping, wearing clothes resembling armor, scratched his head and apologized for not reacting in time. Amelia, in shock, realized that her attack, capable of destroying a town, had merely bounced off Leping. He reassured her, reaching out and claiming he would take the initiative. Though his appearance seemed intimidating to Amelia, she knew she could be subdued at any moment. Despite her plea for him not to take any action, Leping only reached for her hand, apologizing for not returning her handshake or was actually Dragon King's claw. It dawned on Leping why Elizabeth had been so composed since their arrival. The dragon was actually her friend. Amelia, confused by this revelation, started to question Leping's supposed danger. Elizabeth clarified that Amelia was her mount, prompting Leping to envision Elizabeth riding on Amelia's shoulders with a doubtful expression. In the next moment, Elizabeth snapped her fingers and suddenly, a purple smoke surrounded everyone. They all disappeared into that smoke, and in the next moment, they teleported into the beginner's village. Elizabeth wanted to end the day just like that. Amelia was really impressed after seeing Elizabeth's skills. She found her master cool. It was something Amelia could only create after stepping into the Demon King realm. But Elizabeth absorbed it in an instant with no effort at all. She was truly worthy of being called a monster. Leping was also happy seeing that they returned home easily. He thought that as long as he held on to Elizabeth's thigh tightly, all his troubles would be nothing more than child's play. But Annie was not happy because Leping's house was too far away, so she passed out from the teleportation. Elizabeth asked Leping to send Annie in first so she could rest. Elizabeth still had some things to tell Amelia. Leping said okay to Elizabeth and got Annie into the house. After Leping left, Amelia had a surprised expression. She asked Elizabeth what she wanted to say to her. Excited, she asked Elizabeth not to hesitate to give her orders. She couldn't wait to serve her master. Elizabeth asked Amelia if she had heard about the Demon Realm's Dark Guild. Amelia replied that even if she had not been outside in the past 500 years, she still heard some news of the Demon Realm before she fell asleep. She explained to Elizabeth that it was established by Malfoy, the Prince of Mankind, and asked Elizabeth if she remembered him. Elizabeth, after hearing this name, remembered and claimed that there was such a person. Amelia asked Elizabeth what was wrong. Elizabeth replied that she didn't want anything. She heard that it's the Dark Guild carrying out a great number of murders under the pretext of resurrecting her, and that has displeased her. After hearing this, Amelia got really angry. This simply disrespected her master. She asked what Elizabeth wanted her to do. Elizabeth gave the order to Amelia, saying she should make them disappear completely from this world, but she must not reveal any information about Elizabeth or this place. Amelia obeyed her command, and she would do as Elizabeth said. Elizabeth complimented Amelia, saying since she was so obedient, once things were done, Elizabeth would set her free. She could do whatever she wanted then. Amelia asked Elizabeth to leave everything to her. She was going to uproot the Dark Guild now. She was blushing, thinking that Elizabeth would allow her to be free and do whatever she wanted. Did this mean she could get into Master's bed every night like back when she was a baby? Amelia was really happy as she thought about this, so she opened her wings and flew into the sky. But while she was flying, something suddenly came towards her, and in the next moment, something hit her, causing a huge explosion. Elizabeth watched everything from the ground, shocked by the strong explosion. Amelia was confused, wondering what had just happened and who dared to attack her. She thought that only a being as powerful as a demon sovereign could penetrate her skin, and it must be an extremely dangerous monster that she needed to eliminate, as it posed a potential threat to her master, Elizabeth. The one who attacked Amelia turned out to be none other than the overpowered robot dog, who mistook Amelia for an intruder and classified her as an enemy. It activated its target detection system, and seeing that Amelia was still alive, increased its defense level and began attacking her. Amelia, still confused, suddenly saw missiles coming towards her and used her dragon wings to try to stop them. She arrogantly declared that choosing her as an opponent was a mistake, but her expression changed drastically when she realized there were too many missiles for her to block. She was hit by them, causing a massive explosion that left her burned and barely able to fly. The robot dog didn't stop there. It detected that Amelia was still alive and increased its defense level even further, preparing for its next attack. But just as it was about to launch another assault, it heard a voice calling it a stupid dog. It was Elizabeth's voice, commanding the robot dog to let Amelia go. Trembling with fear upon hearing Elizabeth's voice, the robot dog complied and added Amelia to its whitelist. Amelia, severely injured, realized that this place was incredibly dangerous and that she needed to be more alert in the future. In the house, Li Ping made orange juice for Annie. He asked if she felt dizzy and suggested she try some orange juice as its taste could clear her mind. Annie, feeling shaky, thanked Li Ping for his kindness and began drinking the orange juice. After a sip, she sensed something different about it. Each fruit pulp contained powerful magic, bursting open to release a fresh surge of magic, invigorating her nerve cells and sweeping away her fatigue. Annie realized the juice was imbued with advanced divine magic, clearing her mind instantly. Suddenly, she began seeing a ghostly nun, urging her to embrace her true self, though it was just Annie's imagination. Overwhelmed, Annie started crying, tears streaming down her face. Li Ping, exhausted, flopped onto his sofa, remarking how comfortable it still was. He concluded that going on adventures wasn't his thing. Later, Elizabeth entered the room, asking if Annie remembered everything. Elizabeth explained that Annie's ancestors had sworn loyalty to her, and if Annie's bloodline awakened, so would the power of their oath. Hearing this, Annie realized Elizabeth was the legendary demon queen who had ruled the world 5,000 years ago. She asked if it was true, and Elizabeth confirmed her identity. Confused, Annie recalled ancient records stating Elizabeth died with the legendary hero. Glancing at Li Ping, she questioned if he was the hero. Li Ping chuckled, admitting he felt a bit embarrassed to say so, but he should be the hero. Annie was surprised, realizing the truth might indeed be like this. She learned that her brother and sister, Li Ping and Elizabeth, once fought fiercely for the title of the strongest, but during the battle, they fell in love and abandoned the fight. They chose to live in seclusion for 500 years. Elizabeth mostly agreed with Annie's assessment, but Li Ping scolded Annie for her words, cautioning her not to offend Elizabeth. Annie apologized to Li Ping for her mistake. Elizabeth looked at Annie with disappointment in her eyes, expressing that as a descendant of the demon super warrior bloodline, Annie had actually fallen to such a state, greatly embarrassing the demon clan. Li Ping was genuinely surprised after discovering that Annie hailed from the demon clan. Annie felt deeply saddened by it all, unsure of what to say. Elizabeth proceeded to explain that 600 years ago, a child named Jim had awakened his bloodline. His eyes would glow red when he used magic power, and his combat skills improved significantly. However, as his power grew, so did his violent tendencies. Constant murdering became his only satisfaction, leaving chaos in Elizabeth's northern territories. Over 100 elite men under Elizabeth's command fell victim to him. Eventually, Jim even dared to challenge Elizabeth directly, but she swiftly defeated him and sealed his violent side. Since then, he and his descendants swore loyalty to Elizabeth. Upon hearing this story from Elizabeth, Annie's whole body trembled. She revealed that from her earliest memory, she had been living in the church's orphanage, considering the nuns, brothers, and sisters her family. Elizabeth explained to Annie that when she went berserk, she inadvertently murdered everyone in the orphanage. Unable to accept this reality, Annie imagined that she was waiting for the nuns to return. Elizabeth suspected that Jim, with his power, could have become the overlord of the tripartite, so why did he step back? Annie, however, refused to accept the truth, claiming her siblings were still alive and waiting for her. Le Ping, thoroughly confused, questioned Elizabeth about Annie's siblings, but she brushed it off, using her skill transfer door to reveal the truth about Annie's so-called younger siblings. The dolls Annie believed were her siblings transformed before her eyes into soft dolls. Elizabeth explained that Annie had used her magic to sustain the illusion, keeping herself at the magician level. Le Ping was shocked to learn the truth. Elizabeth further clarified that Annie had awakened her bloodline to protect her loved ones from dark apostles, but in doing so, she had lost control and murdered them. Annie broke down in tears, refusing to accept the truth. As purple energy engulfed her body, indicating she was about to lose control again, Elizabeth swiftly knocked her unconscious. Le Ping caught Annie as she fell, and Elizabeth cautioned him that Annie was only temporarily unconscious. If she lost control again, the entire town could be in danger. Le Ping assured Elizabeth that he understood and pleaded for a chance to help solve the situation. Le Ping had taken Annie back to the church to rest and recover from her recent ordeal. Moments later, the little girl woke up and asked Le Ping if he had brought her back seeking forgiveness for inconveniencing him. Le Ping reassured her, saying it wasn't about forgiveness. Having Elizabeth's portal made it easy. He asked if she was feeling better now. Annie became emotional, tears filling her eyes as she explained that she remembered everything, there was no doubt. The murderer was herself. Le Ping started comforting her, telling her she was wrong because everything she did was to protect her siblings. She wasn't a murderer. However, Annie continued crying, insisting that Le Ping was wrong and that it was all her fault. She blamed herself for running away after losing control. Le Ping explained to her that it was all the Dark Guild's fault. It wasn't her intention to lose control after awakening her bloodline. He told her to stop blaming herself like that because everyone lacked materials. But Annie didn't listen. She still believed she was the one who murdered her siblings, and this fact would never change. After seeing Annie's distress, Le Ping fetched a doll and showed it to her. He pointed out that while she made the dolls with great detail, it was obvious she was scared of the cotton slipping through, so she made a lot of knots. Even though it was secured, it resulted in the doll losing its spirit as a whole. Le Ping asked Annie to let him help her untie the knots and remake it, so he dismantled every part of Annie's doll to recreate them. However, seeing this, Annie started to lose control again, thinking that Le Ping was also harming his brothers and sisters. After Annie saw Le Ping, she began recounting Shakespeare's words to her. He once said, "Don't wander under the tree, don't ponder under the rain, and don't cry in the dark." Hearing this, Annie found herself in an unknown place surrounded by water. Moments later, as she regained her senses, she found herself in an unfamiliar place, wondering where she was. Suddenly, a really big hand emerged from the sky, telling Annie to look forward and not to look back. As long as she dared to face it and raise her head up, she would find the current haze to be just a very short rainy season. The sky was too bright, but when Annie looked properly, she saw that it was Le Ping in the sky, helping Annie to control her power. He asked Annie to look forward, emphasizing that there was still a bright sky which would give her determination. He used his hand to lift Annie from the water, bringing both of them from darkness to light and giving her new hope. Sometime later, Le Ping created a new doll for Annie and named it as Raphael. Le Ping hoped it could help her heal, so he gave the doll to Annie. After receiving the doll, Annie became emotional, thinking this feeling was for her brothers and sisters. Suddenly, she started seeing her brothers and sisters playing. They told Annie that they were all free and asked her not to worry about them anymore. They told her she had to live well for them. After saying this, they started disappearing, saying goodbye to Annie. After everything happened, Annie started crying. She promised her brothers and sisters that she would definitely protect the church. Lipane placed his hand on little girl Annie, saying, "After a rain, the sky clears up." After everything happened, Lipane felt relieved, thinking it was a good thing he had learned about psychotherapy from books he got from the system before. But to be on the safe side, he still had to come back to check regularly. On the other side, in the Demon Realm's Death Swamp, where all the dark powers lived, Amelia went there after Elizabeth ordered her to check out the Dark Guild. When she saw the bleak land, Amelia felt really sad, swearing she'd never forgive those who messed up her master's land. This was where Elizabeth used to rule 500 years ago. Up ahead was a once great castle now in ruins. Amelia jumped from the cliff and headed towards the castle to find out about the Dark Guild. Suddenly, smoke surrounded Amelia, and she heard whispers saying a new victim had arrived, offering rewards to whoever could murder her first. They wanted her soul. As Amelia got closer to the voices, she ran into many scary monsters wanting to eat her and take her soul. But Amelia wasn't scared. She quickly defeated each monster, annoyed by their disrespect for her master's land. Seeing Amelia's strong power, the rest of the monsters got scared and made way for her. Then, a big purple boss monster showed up from a flying book. He asked Amelia who she was and how she dared to come to the Dark Guild alone to cause trouble. This monster was one of the Dark Guild's important demons named thwarted. He threatened Amelia, saying he was one of the important demons, and asked her to come over. At the same time, in the Dark Guild hallroom, there were thousands of monster body parts in a purple bubble for making lots of monster clones. 6 other important demons of the guild were talking with a man connected to a large egg. He told them that a powerful one was coming to their door. One of the demons said that Khan's troops were all wiped out when they attacked the Sword Saint Guild, and wondered if they came for revenge. This demon was Samui, an important member of the Dark Guild. Another demon said it wasn't a problem, mentioning that the purple demon thwarted would greet them. She was Ruth Bader, another key member of the Dark Guild. Experiment number 24 asked if he should fight the intruder. William Elizabeth told him to be quiet. The vice president of the Dark Guild, Dago Kulu, told everyone that whoever dared to come, even if it was the Sword Master himself, wouldn't return. The man supporting the large egg was the president of the Dark Guild, Wiz Malfoy. He used to be the Prince of Humanity and swore loyalty to Elizabeth at the start of the story. Although he's still alive, he told everyone that he was initially worried about missing materials but didn't expect them to be delivered to him suddenly. On the other side, Amelia had already defeated the purple demon. The purple demon was really confused, wondering how this was possible. His abyss magic was all useless, and even his magic tools had no effect on the intruder. He realized this wasn't good. Her power seemed endless. He thought it best to use teleportation magic to return to the hall and convey information to the rest. But before he could use his teleportation magic, Amelia used her dragon's claw and crushed him with her hand. Using this skill, she could be in her human form and could use any part of her dragon body at will. Only the purple demon's blood and some body parts remained after Amelia used her dragon hand to crush him. In the next moment, thousands of demons came toward Amelia. They were great apostles. They were a little scared, thinking about how the purple demon was actually defeated by a mere child, but they were happier thinking there would be 2 vacant seats for a pillar demon now. They were thinking that since Amelia and the purple demon had a difficult battle, she should be definitely seriously injured. They asked everyone to take this opportunity. Another great apostle asked all the apostles to overwhelm her with numbers and murder her. But Amelia did not give a thought about them. She just saw them as another pile of trash. She used the Golden Dragon King roar and murdered all the demons in just one attack. Her roar sound was so strong that all of the great apostles' heads started to hurt like crazy and blast. They died, and a blood rain started in that place. While walking in that rain, Amelia claimed she was done. She opened her wings and flew and went to the castle to find out about the Dark Guild. But before she entered the castle, the door demon stopped her, saying if she wished to enter, she must answer his questions. The cost of answering wrong was her life, so he started asking her questions, but before he could complete his words, Amelia kicked the demon door and broke it into multiple pieces. After destroying the demon door, she entered the main hall. The first thing she saw after entering was Malfoy. Beside Malfoy, the remaining members of the 6 pillars were standing. After seeing Wiz Malfoy, Amelia called him ugly. After hearing this, Malfoy started laughing, saying 5,000 years had passed, and he had become old. Now he was really happy after meeting Amelia after such a long time. Without warning, Amelia murdered him with one slash, and his body exploded instantly. Everyone was really surprised, wondering what had just happened. One of them asked if Amelia thought her attack had worked after murdering Malfoy. Amelia thought she was done and suggested calling it a day and going to see Master Elizabeth. But suddenly, Malfoy's body started regenerating. He did expect that Amelia would become stronger. He was really curious and asked Amelia why she had suddenly awakened from her deep slumber. He asked if she had perhaps found Elizabeth. Amelia was really surprised, thinking about what had just happened. She wondered how he was still alive, but before she could say something, the six-pillar vice president attacked Amelia with his taboo tentacles. He tied Amelia up with his tentacles so she couldn't move. He told Amelia that as long as he defeated her, the position of the Lord of Demons would be his. He laughed, saying that now Amelia's magic power and the movement of her limbs were sealed inside the dark sea. No matter how strong she was, she couldn't escape his grasp. Amelia laughed and asked him who wanted to escape, and what did he mean. Amelia started chewing his tentacles, but he told her it was a pointless struggle. However, Amelia didn't care about him and continued eating. But his tentacles were really large when they all came out of the ground. He told Amelia that she was a stupid girl, asking if she wanted to eat him since his body was too much large for her to snack. But he had underestimated Amelia. Amelia started eating his whole body, and the octopus demon got really scared. He asked Malfoy to save him, but before they could help, Amelia had already finished eating him. Since waking up, she hadn't eaten anything and thought that this would be enough to fill her stomach. Suddenly, one of the six pillars told Amelia to surrender, saying she had to join them against her will. She moved closer to Amelia and tried to seduce her with a kiss, thinking it might work if attacking didn't. She claimed Amelia as her prisoner, but the kiss didn't affect Amelia. Amelia used some of her power to send her flying to the other side. She didn't pay much attention to her, still focused on the octopus she had eaten earlier, which was trying to multiply in her stomach. Amelia warned the octopus that she would digest it all at once. The other six pillar members were surprised that not only had Amelia murdered the vice president, but she also injured her father. One of them found Amelia interesting and used their Demon King's skill Liberation. However, Amelia easily sent them flying with just one punch. Another pillar member teamed up with the first one to attack Amelia, but she murdered both of them with a single strike. After dealing with the remaining six pillars, Amelia asked Malfoy if he planned to replace Elizabeth by bringing these weaklings. She told him they weren't even qualified to be her opponents. Malfoy congratulated Amelia on becoming a Demon King and expressed envy at her power, lamenting his short human lifespan. Amelia interrupted him, asking if he intended to take his own life or if he still thought he could defeat her. Malfoy laughed, claiming he, Weas Malfoy, dared to challenge her. Suddenly, the egg behind him began to reveal its contents, resembling Elizabeth. Malfoy declared that with Elizabeth's clone, things would change. Amelia was shocked and angered by what he had done. Malfoy laughed loudly, boasting that with the help of the Elizabeth clone, he would defeat Amelia. 1 month later, we could see the OP robot dog cleaning itself, while Li Ping worked on his farm, digging a hole and planting fruit seeds. He watered them, and soon after, a tree grew with many types of fruits. Li Ping harvested all the fruits and began traveling back home with his robot dog. However, halfway on the journey, he suddenly stopped on the roof, lost in thought. His robot dog barked, snapping him back to reality, and he followed it home. Once back home, Li Ping started preparing firewood for cooking, but he remained lost in thought, even while cooking. Elizabeth, who was focused on eating, noticed that Li Ping seemed different, but she couldn't figure out what was going on with him. At night, Li Ping couldn't sleep because of his thoughts. Suddenly, he sat up in bed and decided he would ask Elizabeth about the world the next morning. He apologized to Elizabeth for bothering her so early, prepared breakfast, and asked her to enjoy it. Elizabeth, direct as always, asked Li Ping if he had something to say, as she disliked beating around the bush. Li Ping explained that after spending a year together, Elizabeth should know he meant no harm to her. He believed that both the hero and the Demon Queen could coexist, so he thought it was time for Elizabeth to leave and reclaim control of the world. Elizabeth was confused about what Li Ping meant. Li Ping explained that he had hoped to live peacefully by hiding in the novice village, but he hadn't anticipated the truth behind the system's prediction of the inevitable encounter between the hero and the Demon Queen. While he stayed put, Elizabeth appeared at his doorstep, damaging the beginner village's barrier and causing 500 years to pass outside, leading to chaos in the outside world. Dark guilds emerged, and what happened to Bose and Annie was just a small part of the chaos. Elizabeth, still puzzled, asked Le Ping why he cared about the chaos as it didn't affect them. However, according to the system, if Le Ping and Elizabeth became enemies, the world would be peaceful, but if they became friends, chaos would reign. Le Ping explained that during that period, he felt caught up in everything because of the disappearance of the barrier. Without Elizabeth, he would have struggled to carry on like before. Even though he could have just stayed here without knowing what was happening outside, witnessing it changed things. Now he couldn't stay uninvolved. It's not that he wanted to be a hero or save people from suffering, but Elizabeth misunderstood, thinking he couldn't live without her. Le Ping asked Elizabeth to go back and rule the world. Even though he wasn't a great hero, he realized he couldn't keep being selfish. He figured if this place got wiped out by monsters, he could at least go to the city to work after dinner. Elizabeth responded, smiling, saying it was a minor issue for her to solve the world's problems. Le Ping was thrilled and offered to help her pack right away. But Elizabeth wasn't interested in the outside world. However, she had two solutions in mind. Elizabeth misunderstood Le Ping, thinking he wanted to get rid of her. Le Ping asked about the solutions. Elizabeth explained the first was to cast a world-destroying magic spell, which Le Ping disagreed with, knowing it wouldn't work. The second solution was to find someone suitable to rule the world, and Elizabeth would guide them from the shadows. Le Ping didn't understand and asked who this suitable person would be. Elizabeth smiled and said he already knew. It was him. Le Ping was shocked and asked if she really wanted him to rule the world. Le Ping stood in the open, clutching his legendary sword, wondering why everything had suddenly turned out this way. Elizabeth advised him to stay alert and start his swordsmanship training. Le Ping apologized and began swinging his sword in the other direction. Elizabeth smiled, misinterpreting Le Ping's actions once more. She imagined that he wanted to play games with her, the Demon Queen, but deemed him too young for such antics. It was true that Le Ping had a slight edge over Elizabeth in power, but in terms of psychology and knowledge, she outmatched him. When Le Ping had told Elizabeth to leave earlier that morning, she had felt unhappy, almost allowing it until he confessed his feelings, which she saw through. Despite this, Elizabeth believed that they both knew their power could easily destroy or rule the world with a single thought, rendering it meaningless, so they chose to observe and let things develop, especially since Amelia had already dealt with the Dark Guild. Elizabeth thought Le Ping had been lost in thought lately, hence his sudden outing that morning to discuss ruling the world, which she realized was merely his imagination. Misunderstanding his intentions, she believed he was trying to grab her attention. After a year of bonding, she suspected Le Ping had fallen in love with her. Meanwhile, Le Ping, unaware of Elizabeth's thoughts, continued practicing his swordsmanship. He questioned the simplicity of mastering a sword by swinging it 1,000 times a day. Elizabeth considered Le Ping the epitome of strength, capable of being beaten by others, but controllable only by her due to his wicked interests. Despite her disinterest in love, she entertained the idea of creating the strongest child with Le Ping to surpass the realm's limits. However, she laughed at the thought, knowing she wouldn't agree so easily. Le Ping, observing her behavior, grew confused, wondering if Elizabeth planned to teach him swordsmanship and magic to confront the Dark Guild. When Le Ping swung his sword, a sudden smoke surrounded the legendary sword. In the next moment, the legendary sword transformed into a 12-year-old kid. Both Le Ping and the kid looked at each other in shock. Le Ping screamed, asking why the holy sword turned into a kid. The holy sword, now a kid, got angry at Le Ping, asking who he was calling a kid. He introduced himself as Majestic Holy Sword Spirit Alpha. Elizabeth, seeing Alpha, asked Le Ping what was going on. Alpha seemed annoyed after seeing Elizabeth, rushing toward her as if he wanted to murder her. Before he could attack, Elizabeth kicked him hard, sending him flying. As Alpha fell to the ground, Elizabeth asked him to sit down and talk. Le Ping apologized to Alpha, explaining that he didn't know the holy sword was conscious even after using it for so long. Alpha proudly said that he appears at critical moments when heroes fight demon queens. He grabbed Le Ping angrily upon realizing that Le Ping had been using him to chop firewood all year. Le Ping asked Alpha to calm down, but Alpha didn't listen, expressing disgust at Le Ping for changing the script and befriending the demon queen Elizabeth. He called Le Ping disgusting and undeserving of being a hero. Elizabeth, angry, asked Alpha if he wanted to murder her. Alpha replied no, blaming it on the system settings. Elizabeth asked Alpha to help Le Ping rule the world. Confusing Alpha, Le Ping explained that they needed to save it. Alpha asked Le Ping if he knew where his talents lay. implying that Li Ping only used him to practice sword swings. Li Ping misunderstood, believing he could succeed with Alpha and Elizabeth's help. Alpha was about to reveal his strength as the world's strongest sword master, but Elizabeth silenced him with magic. She then explained something to Alpha, causing him to try to escape. Elizabeth used magic to restrain Alpha and beacon severely. Later, Alpha, heavily injured, agreed to cooperate with Li Ping. Elizabeth suggested they venture outside with only swordsmanship allowed without further delay. The scene shifted to the bustling town square of Titano City, alive with the chatter of townsfolk. A girl announced that the Grey Wolf Guild was looking for recruits, and the salary was favorable. Those considering a job change could look at the flyer. The town's air was rich with the scent of street food, the best choice for a snack when going to watch the guild competition. Titano Town was in Sword Saint Guild's area of influence. Li Ping and Elizabeth also came to this town to watch the guild competition. While walking, Elizabeth told Li Ping that her magic senses were telling her that this town was going to hold a large-scale event. With so many people gathered, they could gather a lot of information. Li Ping understood that the first step to ruling the world was gathering intelligence. However, Holy Sword Alpha didn't look happy. He asked Li Ping if he wanted him to accompany them and waste his time in such a place. Hearing this, Elizabeth turned her head toward Holy Sword Alpha and, in anger, asked him if he wanted her to break him in two. Seeing Elizabeth angry, Holy Sword Alpha got scared and asked Li Ping to call him if he needed him. After saying this, he turned into a sword again. Suddenly, Li Ping noticed a flyer lying on the ground. Looking carefully, Li Ping noticed that it was a guild competition flyer. He asked Elizabeth if she knew about it. Elizabeth explained that it was a competition where the guilds sent their representatives to fight. But suddenly, they heard a really loud sound. This was the announcement sound for participants to enter and place their bets. After hearing the sound, people started heading toward the arena where the guild competition was going to be held. Some people asked everyone to bet on the Sword Saint Guild, as they would definitely win. But some said that the Elves had also sent people this time, and there was also that card guild that became famous recently. Li Ping had grabbed Elizabeth's hand, suggesting they watch the spectacle too. Moments later, upon reaching the arena, Li Ping was amazed by the immense beauty and size of the arena. However, their entry was halted by a yellow monster who informed them that his magic ticket inspector hadn't detected their tickets. Turning to Elizabeth confidently, Li Ping offered to handle the situation. He inquired to the monster about the advertised tickets, which could still be purchased for 10 gold coins. Li Ping took out his pouch of gold coins and asked if he could buy 2. The yellow monster confirmed, but then revealed that he had monopolized the remaining tickets and was now selling them for 200 gold coins. Li Ping was shocked by this blatant profiteering, remarking that there were such thieves in this world too. Elizabeth, clearly displeased, used her mind control magic on the monster, causing it to get hypnotized by her. Its attitude instantly changed, becoming obsequious towards Li Ping. It offered them 2 VIP room tickets, asking Li Ping to accept them, saying it was a great honor to serve both of them. It then happily ushered them to the VIP room. When Li Ping and Elizabeth entered the VIP room, they were struck by its luxuriousness and couldn't believe their eyes. However, they weren't the only ones with VIP access. Several important figures from various guilds were present who were hidden, including spellwriter Tagore Severus, unaffiliated drunk blacksmith Brian from the Dwarf Kingdom, Orange Sword Luna, and her sister Purple Sword Anna from the Sword Saint Guild. Anna spotted Li Ping and Elizabeth, asked Luna to inquire if they were on the invitation list. After sitting in their seats, Li Ping told Elizabeth that the first glimpse of the grand arena made him a bit nervous, but Elizabeth remained nonchalant and requested snacks from him. Anna advised Luna to keep an eye on them, speculating they might be from a guild whose president had aided them in the past. Finally, the competition began. The host, Gob the Goblin, welcomed everyone and requested a warm reception for the players. He then announced the final round of the guild competition and introduced the 4 finalists. King the Genius Swordsman from the Sword Saint Guild, Gala the Valiant General from the Giant Bear Guild, Travis the Handsome Fellow from the Elf Guild, and Yi Laifu the special guest representing the Card Guild. The crowd roared in anticipation as the host declared the games to begin. Travis from the Elf Guild carefully examined everyone, thinking that the muscular fool from the Giant Bear Guild seemed too simple-minded. He was probably just cannon fodder. As for the Card Guild, recently established, the only reason they qualified to join the competition was because they helped the Sword Saint Guild in murdering the invading 6 pillar demons. They were just a second-rate guild affiliated with the Sword Saint Guild, and their president was the only one representing them. Travis saw no threat from them. However, the only one who posed a threat to him in the competition was the Sword Saint Guild's blue sword. During the competition, Gala from the Giant Bear Guild started running toward Blue Sword to attack him. But he wasn't the only one attacking. Travis jumped into the air and prepared his arrow to attack, thinking about how barbaric Gala seemed. He shot 3 arrows at once, aiming at everyone, but they managed to avoid his arrows. Gala from the Giant Bear Guild caught Travis' arrow and called him rude, wanting to murder him first. He crushed the arrow and threw it to the ground. Suddenly, the arrow he threw began to grow. In just a few seconds, those arrows transformed into a wooden cage, capturing everyone. Travis, after locking Gala in a cage, said such an uncultured beast like him should be locked up. However, Gala, who was really big, told Travis he couldn't stop him with just his rotten roots. He tried to crush them all with his fierce raw power, thinking he could escape with his fierce ram. But when he attempted to flee, the grassroots came to life and captured him. Confused and unaware of what was happening, Travis started laughing, explaining that these were the grassroots of the gum tree. Upon impact, they shrank, releasing an extremely sticky fluid. Meanwhile, Blue Sword effortlessly sliced through the roots with his sword, emerging from the cage unharmed. His flawless swordsmanship surprised both the masked man and Travis, especially Travis, who grew frustrated, thinking Blue Sword was too fast. The roots couldn't even touch him. As Blue Sword emerged from the cage, he apologized to Travis for destroying his plant. To Travis's surprise, he declared it didn't matter and that he could repay the debt with his life. Defeating a formidable opponent like Blue Sword would be exhilarating. Travis readied his bow, unleashing his violent butterfly dance technique, a flurry of 100 arrows. Unbothered, Blue Sword muttered, "No fear, no doubt, no surprises, no confusion," entering his selfless state. He readied his sword and executed the bluebird technique, slicing through not only Travis's butterfly dance, but also severing his right hand, without Travis even noticing. Confused and bewildered, Travis looked at Blue Sword, who calmly stated, "You've lost." Travis conceded, acknowledging Blue Sword's title as the Sword Saint Guild's genius. However, he reminded him that he too was a genius, an elf genius. Suddenly, green butterflies surrounded Blue Sword before he could react. Travis unleashed his butterfly explosion, causing a huge explosion. Blue Sword lost his sword, but he survived the attack. After Travis saw that the Blue Sword was still alive, he reached into his mouth and pulled something out, tossing it onto the ground. Suddenly, a huge flower sprouted from the earth. This flower had the ability to heal, capable of mending any wound. Travis used it to fix his lost arm. Seeing this, he admitted that the Sword Saint Guild was indeed powerful, but criticized its predictable attack patterns as a flaw. Despite the strength of the sacred tree's blessing making elves the most powerful beings, Travis was interrupted by Gala from the Giant Bear Guild, who attacked him from behind and murdered him. Gala laughed, stating that Travis, as he predicted, was the first to perish. Gala expressed annoyance at show-offs like Travis before turning his attention to the Blue Sword. Blue Sword was surprised by Gala's presence and the aura he emitted. However, before he could react, the audience cheered for Gala, urging him to defeat the Blue Sword. Gala's revenge fueled the crowd's excitement. Travis of the Elf Guild became the first to exit the competition, leaving everyone curious about Gala. Now the focus shifted to whether the injured Blue Sword could withstand Gala's attack. Blue Sword raised his right hand and summoned his sword, narrowly avoiding significant damage as Gala attempted to break free using sweat as lubrication. Blue Sword retaliated in time, minimizing the impact. As Gala's body grew and purple smoke enveloped him, he declared that power was everything and threatened to crush Blue Sword in seconds. He leaped into the air, launching an attack with 70% of his muscle power. Blue Sword evaded the strike and countered with a swift, cold slash, pushing Gala back. Unfortunately, he couldn't deal any damage to Gala's body. Gala started laughing after seeing that Blue Sword could only scratch him. On the other side, Blue Sword got really surprised after seeing his sword get damaged. However, before Blue Sword could think anything, Gala attacked him and used 80% of his muscle power. Unfortunately, Blue Sword barely stopped his attack using his sword, but he couldn't completely stop it and rolled into the ground. After finding out that he couldn't use his sword anymore, he threw his sword into the ground and started fighting Gala hand to hand. Gala started attacking Blue Sword again, but this time he used 90% of his muscle power, thinking he would murder Blue Sword. However, Blue Sword dodged every attack. Meanwhile, Le Ping was really excited after seeing their fights. He asked Elizabeth who she thought would win in the end. Elizabeth didn't say anything. Anna, the red-haired girl, was really surprised because Blue Sword's sword was a B-ranked weapon forged by the dwarves, but it was broken by a simple punch. Luna, the yellow-haired girl, asked her sister if they should stop it because their Sword Saint Guild couldn't lose more face. But the red-haired girl was really confused, thinking, when did the giant bear guild's people become so strong? Then she suddenly remembered, thinking, could it be the Dark Guild? On the other side, a yellow-haired man named Ash asked one of the important elders, Bali from the Sword Saint Guild, if he needed him to stop the fight between the Blue Sword and Gala. However, Sword Elder Bali from the Sword Saint Guild disagreed. He explained that the remaining two competitors were more than enough to handle Gala. He then asked Elder Bose what he thought. Elder Bose replied that he didn't know and would think about it if the situation got out of hand. He was the Card Guild president and a former member of the Sword Saint Guild, and also a 4-star demon sect realm. His name was Bose, the old man we saw at the beginning of this manhwa. He received card skills from Le Ping to become powerful and created his own guild. Ash thought that Senior Bose was indeed someone who deeply hated the Dark Guild. Just hearing about becoming an apostle made him so angry that he could hardly hold back and even trembled all over. However, Ash misunderstood everything. Bose didn't tremble in anger because Gala became the apostle of the Dark Guild, but he trembled in fear after seeing Le Ping and Elizabeth. He couldn't believe his eyes, thinking how could it be possible. He assumed that Le Ping and Elizabeth were discussing about eliminating them if they won't meet their expectations. Bose's imagination ran wild and assumed further that Le Ping was there to check whether he had used his card and barley tea on the right path. Fortunately, after he mastered the basic abilities, he actively hunted down the evil apostles and devoted himself to maintaining the peace of the continent. However, he worries that the two would not be satisfied enough with his achievements. However, Gala, after becoming an apostle of the Dark Guild, got really powerful, saying the Blue Sword was a little bug in front of him and he would slap him to death. Blue Sword was really surprised after seeing Gala's power, and he didn't have any other choice. He had to use his secret technique, but he was really nervous because he didn't know if he could control it now. However, he couldn't doubt himself. He remembered his master's teachings. If you wanted to enter a state of selflessness, you must abandon distracting thoughts. Before Blue Sword could execute his technique, Gala used his overwhelming strength to attack the ground, making it as flexible as rubber. He used this to surprise and attack Blue Sword, who was shocked to see this. Before Blue Sword could react, Gala began his assault, sending Blue Sword into the air. Gala planned to capture him using his ground-controlling technique, creating walls around him. Confused and unable to react, Blue Sword found himself trapped in a stone cage. Gala, after capturing Blue Sword, explained that the giant bear guild wasn't just about physical enhancement, but also excelled in earth magic, similar to high-level magician guilds. He laughed at Blue Sword's situation. Suddenly, Gala noticed a blue energy coming from the stone cage. Upon closer inspection, he realized his hand was cut off. Confused and scared, he wondered what happened. Blue Sword used his magic sword energy to break the stone cage, showing his power. Despite still recalling his teacher's words about staying calm, Blue Sword showed exceptional skill. Enraged, Gala disregarded Blue Sword's teachings and wanted to murder him, declaring he'd do it today. Despite the threat, Blue Sword remained determined. He cut Gala's right leg with his magic sword energy, causing Gala to cry out in pain. After the decisive move, Blue Sword offered Gala a chance to surrender, but Gala refused, vowing to murder Blue Sword. Gala remembered his master's advice about using enhancements for competition and avoiding forbidden drugs, but considering them due to his opponent's powerful skills. Blue Sword warned Gala to give up the Dark Guild's power voluntarily, but Gala refused and chose to use forbidden drugs to transform into a demon king and murder Blue Sword and the Sword Saint Guild members. While still considering this, Blue Sword swiftly cut off Gala's head. Meanwhile, the masked girl, trapped in the cage, wondered if she could win the fight or should surrender. She lacked confidence in herself. It was revealed she was the Miss Elf shown earlier in the manhwa when Li Ping's robot dog saved them from the Dark Guild. In a flashback, Yi Lifu from the Card Guild was meditating and training with the card given by Le Ping. While sipping barley tea, she broke through from a 5-star demon spirit to a 1-star great demon spirit. After the breakthrough, she felt drained mentally but found solace in the calming effects of her magic barley tea, preventing her from getting lost in her thoughts during meditation. She was amazed by how quickly she advanced despite her modest abilities. While still pondering this, she heard the door open, and her father Bose returned from work. Yi Lefu was delighted to see him, but she couldn't help being curious about the meeting between the Sword Saint Guild and her dad. She asked him about it, and Bose explained that while the crisis with the Dark Guild's invasion was resolved, the internal problems of the Sword Saint Guild were more severe than expected. He hadn't met the Sword Master personally this time. Upon hearing this, Yi Lefu asked what they should do next without the Sword Saint Guild's recognition, as it was crucial for their region's development and recruiting members for Li Ping's Card Guild. Bose reassured her, mentioning that even though he didn't meet the Sword Master, he aided in repelling the Dark Guild and obtained something unexpected. He revealed a bag containing dark gears of great apostles, which surprised Yi. Recognizing them, Yi Lefu explained that now being at the great demon spirit level, she could purify them in a day. However, she was puzzled and asked if these were the unexpected gains. Bose then showed her an invitation card, explaining that it was the real unexpected gain. The Sword Saint Guild gave them direct qualification for the guild competition finals. Yi Lefu was astonished by the guild competition card. Bose reassured her, saying that as long as she participated in one, their card guild would be recognized. Despite this, Yi Lefu felt nervous, expressing her worries about competing with past participants who were geniuses from various guilds, often at the demon ancestor level. She feared not only representing them poorly but also embarrassing them. It felt like they were being deliberately challenged. However, Bose didn't share her concerns, emphasizing that confidence and determination mattered most. He reminded her that they were different now and that when the time came, he would provide her with Li Ping's treasure deck, bridging any level gap. In the past, Yi Lefu was still thinking about her father's words. She remembered how her father had instructed her to bring in Li Ping's cards. However, due to her limited strength, she could only use up to 6 cards at once. This meant she had to rely on replica cards for the rest of the battle, which would significantly weaken her attacks. Despite this, she couldn't afford to retreat if she wanted to honor Mr. Li Ping properly. She understood that determination was key. With determination in mind, Yi Lefu retrieved Li Ping's cards from his pocket. Using a card slash, she managed to free herself from the cage. Slowly, she approached Blue Sword. To her surprise, Gala, who she thought was defeated, was still alive. Blue Sword was impressed by Yi Lefu's strength and commended her strategy of concealing her power until the end. However, he didn't see Yi Lefu as a worthy opponent and offered her a chance to admit defeat. He warned her that his guild owed her a favor and he didn't want to harm her, but this was his final warning. Before Blue Sword could finish his warning, Lefu attacked him with her card skills. The Dark Guild president was taken aback by Yi Lefu's unfamiliar weapon and questioned its nature. Yi Lefu wasted no time in slashing Blue Swords with cards and using the poker flying sword technique to attack. Blue Sword quickly realized Yi Lefu's strategy, understanding that her flashy attack was just a distraction. He anticipated another move from her and swiftly moved to counterattack. Yi Lefu was shocked to realize that Blue Sword had already seen through her plan. Fortunately, she managed to dodge Blue Sword's attack just in time. Without wasting a moment, she used her card slash to strike Blue Sword multiple times. However, Yi Lefu's attacks didn't affect Blue Sword. He leaped into the air and tried to attack Elf, but Yi Lefu dodged his attack and fought back with her card slash skill. Blue Sword attempted to dodge Elf's attack using his sword Chi, but Elf used her card lock to stop him. The audience was thrilled by the intense fight between Blue Sword and Elf. They found the Card Guild's fighting style to be quite unique. Blue Sword found himself surrounded by cards, and the audience wondered how he would deal with this situation. Yi Lefu had already restricted Blue Sword's skills with her card lock skill. Blue Sword asked Elf if she was using his sword Chi against him, but he didn't seem to care, saying it was pointless unless she was ready to face the consequences. Elf, hearing this, knew that her card lock wouldn't hold him for long, but it would buy her enough time to complete her card slash and activate her most powerful move with Spade's cards. She released her cards, preparing for a powerful attack. The cards then transformed into a Spade's dragon. The spectators were shocked by this sight and questioned what it was. They marveled at Yi Lefu's diverse attacks, from locking to summoning. Someone remarked that this moment was worth recording and investigating. Even the proud dwarven craftsman was surprised by the power of the cards, pondering who had crafted them with such mastery. Li Ping was really surprised when he saw that people in this world also knew how to play cards. He asked Elizabeth to look, and it turned out that people outside also knew how to play cards and could use them to fight. Meanwhile, Lifu used her Spade's dragon skill and attacked Blue Sword. After seeing this powerful move, Blue Sword used his maximum output of sword energy to create a big blue bird and use it to counterattack Lifu's Spade's dragon. Blue Sword's attack with the blue bird was powerful, destroying Lifu's Spade's dragon without any problem and causing some harm to Yi. Luckily, Lifu created a shield with her cards just in time and barely defended herself. She thought Blue Sword was really strong, and as a 3-star demon spirit, it was still difficult for her to make up for the gap in level using only replica cards to win. She must use treasure cards. But she was nervous about using them because if she couldn't control the power well, she might end up harming him. Blue Sword was really impressed with her because she was forcing him to use his full power. He jumped into the air to attack Yi. However, Lifu created a shield with her cards to defend herself. Unfortunately, it was not enough to stop Blue Sword's attack, and he sent Lifu flying across to another corner. Blue Sword approached Yi, saying it was over and she lost. Lifu admitted defeat, thinking that there was no need to continue. Suddenly, something hit Blue Sword on the head from behind. Blue Sword, looking in pain, didn't know what just happened and wondered what hit him. His eyes started changing. Lifu also got shocked after seeing this. The one who attacked Blue Sword was Gola's head. He was controlling Blue Sword's body. However, he was not Gola. He was a great apostle who was in Gola's body after Gola's death. He finally hatched, and now he wanted to control Blue Sword's body as he really liked Blue Sword's body, and he could use the sword energy in this body. Gob the Goblin explained to the audience what was happening. He said Gola's head had suddenly leaped up and taken control of Blue Sword's body. The scene felt chaotic. The great apostle began attacking the audience, but shield barriers protected everyone. Still, people started to panic as they saw the protective shield about to burst. Everyone was shocked to see the guy from the Sword Saint Guild turn into an apostle. Anna was shocked too when she saw Blue Sword become a Dark Guild apostle. A yellow-haired girl asked Sister Anna what they should do next. A man who was smoking also seemed really surprised by the unexpected turn of events. Le Ping was also taken aback. This wasn't what they had expected. He asked Elizabeth if they should intervene. Elizabeth replied, saying no. She explained that if Le Ping wanted to rule the world, he had to learn to adapt to such sudden changes. Otherwise, how could he manage such a big world in the future? Elizabeth told Le Ping to wait and see what happened. Le Ping agreed. Bose, who had been lost in thought, realized that both Elizabeth and Le Ping knew about the Apostles' invasion. They planned to see if Lifu and he could handle the situation properly. He prayed that Lifu would perform well and satisfy Le Ping and Elizabeth. Meanwhile, the president of the Sword Saint Guild was thinking that Bose seemed anxious. If he stepped in to save his daughter, it would prove that his guild wasn't strong enough to deal with the Dark Guild. Now the Sword Saint Guild was recruiting new people, and they wanted Bose to come back and become the new elder in the guild. The great apostle was really pleased with Blue Sword's body, saying it was excellent. Lifu was truly surprised to see the Dark Guild. The great apostle laughed at Yi, asking what the little one wanted to do. Lifu retrieved her treasure card, saying she didn't need to worry so much if the opponent was the Dark Guild. Lifu's body started to glow, surrounded by a huge amount of magical energy. The great apostle got really scared seeing the unknown power coming from Yi, thinking it was better to murder her immediately. He used Blue Sword's energy to attack Yi. However, Lifu managed to stop his attack. She used her card skill and created a sacred guardian to protect herself. Le Ping was really surprised when he saw and felt something familiar. Meanwhile, the Dwarf Guild president was shocked after seeing Lifu's card power. He wondered how the new cards were different from the previous ones since they felt incredible. The man with the eyeglasses was also really shocked. He had never seen an attack like this before. He wondered if the phantom on the stage was one of the 13 holy warriors recorded in the books. The Sword Saint Guild president asked Bose if this was the trick he used to defeat the 6 pillar demons. Bose replied that he used a 9-card formation before, and his daughter was using only a 5-card formation. The attacks were the same but different in magical power. Bose hoped that it was enough to defeat the Dark Guild apostle. Lifu threw her card toward the great apostle, asking him to leave Blue Sword's body. Unfortunately, the great apostle dodged A's attack without any problem. He got really scared after seeing the power of these cards. He was surprised by the card's power. He was really impressed with Elf's power, but he didn't want to lose his life, so he jumped into the air, telling Lifu that she was incredible, and he would be back for revenge after familiarizing Blue Sword's body. Unfortunately, Elifu used her card and summoned her shield guardian, commanding it to stop the Great Apostle. Then she threw the Great Apostle to another shield guardian, and the guardians played with the Great Apostle like volleyball. The Great Apostle was really confused, not knowing what was going on. He thought he was just born and couldn't die there, so he used his strongest move, Fierce Sword, to escape. Before he could attack Yi, she used her guardian and trapped the Great Apostle in a box. The Great Apostle was really confused after seeing this, so he tried to cut the box with his Fierce Sword. However, before he could use his skill, Elifu used her Holy Array, commanding her guardian to crush the Great Apostle. After that, the box started getting smaller and smaller. The Great Apostle asked Elifu to show some mercy, saying there was no need to do this and he didn't want to die. However, Elifu didn't listen. She crushed the Great Apostle and turned him into a purple ring, saving Blue Sword in the process. After that, she sighed with relief. However, she was a little careless with this move. Luckily, she defeated the Great Apostle, who was more powerful than her. Meanwhile, Blue Sword didn't look good as Elifu gave him a really good beating. Bose, after seeing this fight, thought Ling and Elizabeth should be satisfied with this now, right? Ling was really surprised after seeing that the masked girl was Elifu and told Elizabeth. He asked Elizabeth if she still remembered them, the father and daughter who came to live with them a few months ago. However, Elizabeth did not look happy. She looked back at Bose, wondering why they revealed themselves. Bose got scared when he saw Elizabeth looking at him angrily. He immediately apologized, saying that he didn't disturb them so their viewing experience won't be ruined. When Ling heard a familiar voice, he looked back and saw Bose. Ling waved his hand, saying that he had a lot of questions to ask. When Bose heard that Ling had many questions to ask him, he assumed it was about being dissatisfied with Elifu's card skills. On the other hand, the Sword Guild's elder was very curious to know who Ling was, which even someone like Bose respected so much. After Elifu had won the competition, Bose invited Elizabeth and Ling to a gathering. Bose asked them to take their seats. However, Ling felt confused, wondering why he was invited again. Elizabeth replied, suggesting it wasn't a bad idea to learn more about current affairs to prepare for future leadership. Ling agreed, but preferred they call it an experience without mentioning world domination. Elder Sword, the president of Sword Saint Guild, congratulated Bose for winning the competition. Bose responded, saying they could discuss such matters later and introduced the guests. As they began to introduce Elizabeth, she turned towards Bose with her eyes glowing red, which startled Bose and Elifu. They realized they couldn't reveal Elizabeth's true identity as the Demon Queen. Elder Sword asked why they couldn't introduce her. Bose, afraid, didn't know what to say. Ling understood and suggested keeping her identity hidden. Elizabeth didn't mind and told Ling he could call her whatever to ease the tension. Ling introduced himself as being from a small southern nation, a minister named Ling. He introduced Elizabeth as their princess. However, the butler behind Elder Sword mentioned not knowing of any southern princess. Bose supported Ling's story, saying he taught Ling card skills personally. Ling blushed and admitted he wasn't very skilled with cards, but Bose was. He also expressed interest in learning swordsmanship from Bose. The yellow-haired girl was surprised and commented on Ling's interest in swordsmanship after showcasing strong card skills. Blue Sword warned her to be careful since Elder Sword was present. Meanwhile, Elifu nervously asked Ling if she performed well in the square battle and if her card skills were satisfactory. Ling didn't understand what she meant. Bose asked Ling if there were any shortcomings in Elifu's performance and encouraged honesty. Ling, serious, said he had no comments but didn't expect them to use his cards like that. Bose quickly agreed, admitting he was self-centered and created the card guild without Ling's permission. Elifu asked Ling for forgiveness and admitted that she might have let him down, but that was her limit. However, Ling told her not to apologize. He said if they kept going like this, more people would be able to join in, which he thought was great. After hearing this, Elifu asked if Ling meant that most people were like them, regulars, so their card strategy was suitable for others to learn. Ling agreed, saying it was better for promoting the guild. However, he also mentioned that in this magical world, he envied them for their magic abilities. Suddenly, Tagore began inspecting Ling and Elizabeth, finding it increasingly amusing. He secretly used his demonic eye lens to check their magic power. However, he was really surprised when he saw that one of them was casually emitting powerful magic, while the other was completely suppressed and showed no magic power at all. Elizabeth realized he was using some kind of tool to examine them and became really angry. Mr. Tagore became scared, wondering if he had been discovered, though he thought it was impossible. He had used the demonic eye lens to observe them, but there was no magical reflection. He felt confused by the oppressive feeling engulfing him. Elizabeth approached Le Pain with a chilling declaration of wanting to end someone's life. Shock washed over Le Pain upon hearing her words. He inquired about her target, urging her to hold off on such discussions until later, not wanting to complicate things for Bose. Elizabeth's mood brightened considerably at the sight of pudding, instantly quelling her anger. Elder Sword intervened, calling for an end to idle chatter and a return to the main topic. He revealed that he had invited several individuals to discuss forming an alliance to combat the Dark Guild. Butler Ash presented a bag containing dark gears collected from participants throughout the competition, totaling 30 pieces. Le Pain, unfamiliar with dark gears, expressed astonishment. Bose clarified that these gears embed themselves into anyone who accepts the Dark Guild's power, drawing parallels to the ones found in hunted apostles. The president of the Dwarf Guild also expressed surprise at the number of dark gears, pondering the extent of the Dark Guild's infiltration. However, a yellow-haired girl questioned whether Gola had undergone the Sword of Purification test and accepted its power. Anna, a red-haired girl, revealed another possibility. The Dark Guild might have found a way to evade purification. Mr. Tagore explained that only those with the lowest fusion degree could be detected through purification. In the other scenarios, they could conceal themselves effectively. In the first scenario, the host couldn't bear the fusion, resulting in a backlash and transformation into a dark apostle. In the second, the host could bear it but couldn't control it, leading to a transformation witnessed in the square earlier. Ultimately, the host became a vessel birthing a powerful apostle. In the third scenario, the host gained full control, harnessing the power of the Demon King, becoming a strong servant of the Dark Guild. Mr. Tagore kept explaining that those who had received the Dark Gears always followed the orders of whoever gave them the Dark Gears and became loyal servants of the Dark Guild. Blue Sword realized he had nearly become a great apostle of the Dark Guild. Mr. Tagore reminded him that he had been controlled but not fully integrated. If he had turned evil, Blue Sword would have become a demon pillar with his skills alone. The Sword Saint Guild president was relieved that Bose had come to help, as he couldn't handle what had happened on his own. Bose said it was natural to help since he had once been part of the guild. Blue Sword then praised Yi Lifu for his strength after seeing the cards that could defeat the pillar demons. Yi Lifu proudly said it was all thanks to Le Ping, who had given them the powerful cards. The Dwarf Guild president then asked Le Ping where he had learned blacksmithing to create the cards, noticing that the sword on Le Ping's back was not simple either. Le Ping said he only did handicrafts at home to pass the time and didn't involve blacksmithing. The Dwarf Guild president laughed at how humble Le Ping was. Suddenly, the yellow-haired girl spoke up and said that the Dark Guild wouldn't dare ruin the event if the Sword Saint was there. The red-haired girl advised her not to talk too much. Le Ping became curious and asked Bose if the Sword Saint was the strongest swordsman and where they could be found. Bose, feeling concerned, said he couldn't answer because he was no longer part of the Sword Saint Guild. The president of the Sword Saint Guild said it was okay and admitted that rumors had already spread, so things couldn't be kept secret much longer. The Dwarf Guild president wondered if the rumors were true. Mr. Tagore explained that after the rebellion of the Sword Saint Guild, not only did their fighting power decrease, but the Sword Saint went missing. That's why the Dark Guild seized the opportunity to attack. The president of the Sword Saint Guild said they last heard from the Sword Saint 6 months ago. Le Ping was confused about the rebellion and the missing Sword Saint. Ash then explained that the Sword Saint had gone to arrest Elder Axe, who had betrayed the guild, but the Sword Saint hadn't returned yet. Blue Sword mentioned that his previous mission was to assist the Sword Saint. But when they arrived at the location, nobody was there. The yellow-haired girl reminded them that the Sword Saint had been promoted to a 5-star Demon Sovereign, just one step below the Demon King level. She said it would be easy for the Sword Saint to apprehend Elder Axe, who had recently become a Demon Sovereign. Blue Sword added that nobody would question the Sword Saint's authority. However, when he ventured into the mountains, they found large traces of sword slashes at the mountain's base. As he climbed higher, he was shocked to discover that half of the mountain range had been leveled to the ground. He imagined how terrifying the battle there must have been. The Sword Saint Guild Elder confessed that Elder Axe had obtained a supreme magic weapon. It was a giant axe called Demon Burial, emitting terrifying resentment. Its power was so immense that it easily closed the gap in strength between Elder Axe and the Sword Saint. The Dwarf Guild president confirmed that they hadn't recorded the forging of an S-class weapon like Burial, and assumed it was a masterpiece created by the Dark Guild. Le Ping had then asked Yi Leifu why Elder Axe had betrayed his guild in the first place. Bose had explained that under the leadership of the Sword Saint, there were 5 elders who assisted her in handling various matters and guiding the disciples. He introduced the elder next to him as Elder Sword, and the others were known as Elder Dagger, Elder Spear, Elder Shield, and Elder Axe. When Elder Axe betrayed the guild, he brutally murdered Elder Dagger and Elder Spear. Elder Sword had explained that Elder Shield had died in the battle against the Pillars of the Dark Guild. At that moment, he was the only one left with seniority in the guild. During the rebellion, many members took the opportunity to betray them, including his son named C. Buckthorn Terres. Le Ping was surprised and asked if C. Buckthorn Terres was the sword-wielding centaur. Learning that his son was a centaur, it implied that Elder Sword had relations with a horse. Elder Sword was shocked that Le Ping knew his son and asked if they had met. Without guilt, Le Ping confessed that the centaur was dead. The Elder Sword told Le Ping that it didn't matter anymore. This was the fate of the traitor. Many factors had caused the Sword Saint Guild to be in its most unstable times. He just wanted everyone to unite to fight against the Dark Guild. The Dwarf Guild president asked the Elder Sword if they could just provide them with weapons. The Dwarf Kingdom wouldn't have any problems then. However, getting A or S level weapons would be difficult due to the lack of grinding stones, although his father was already considering a solution. Mr. Tagore reminded Elder Sword that he had been going through his most unstable times and wondered why he thought he could destroy the Dark Guild with their help. Elder Sword replied that it depended on Bose. He believed Bose should give up his own guild and return to serve as the vice president of the Sword Saint Guild. Bose was really surprised and asked Elder Sword if he truly wanted him to serve as the vice president. However, he was afraid it wasn't appropriate since he had left the guild for a while. Elder Sword explained that Bose was more suitable than he thought. Cards could be considered weapons just like daggers and flying knives. If Mr. Bose became the vice president of the Sword Saint Guild, they could open a new unit and let Yi Leifu serve as the elder. Yi Leifu felt really nervous, expressing that she wasn't qualified to be an elder of the Sword Saint Guild. Elder Sword assured her that as long as Bose agreed, he guaranteed that everything would go smoothly. He promised that the guild's resources would be at Bose's disposal, and he would even obey Bose's orders. Butler Ash informed Bose that the elder was genuinely sincere in his intentions. The position of vice president meant he was one person above 10,000, which was much easier than establishing his own guild. He encouraged Bose to consider the suggestion. Afterward, Bose turned to Le Ping and asked for his opinion. He wondered if, with the aid of the Sword Saint Guild's fame, the card skill would spread faster. Le Ping was really surprised that Bose was seeking his advice. He mentioned a saying from his hometown: "It's much easier to become a senior executive in a large company than to start your own business." However, those who are more ambitious will choose to start their own business, so it still depends on their personal desires. Le Ping thought to himself that as a person with no ambition, he shouldn't be giving advice to others. Bose misunderstood Le Ping's words, thinking that Le Ping believed he needed to be someone's accessory to elevate himself. If Bose had only that much ambition, Le Ping was really disappointed in him. However, Bose found himself in a tough situation, wondering if Le Ping was trying to help him. But Elder Sword, being very strict, might reject him directly. This would be disrespectful and would offend the entire Sword Saint Guild. Elder Sword asked Bose if he was still satisfied and encouraged him to put forward any conditions. Bose stood up from his seat and told Elder Sword that he didn't need to say anything else. He established his own guild not because he wanted to pursue fame and wealth, but because he wanted to improve his card skills. Then he wondered if Le Ping could see that his determination was strong. Elder Sword asked Bose if he had thought this through. However, Elder Sword was really surprised and couldn't sense the aura of this strong man named Le Ping. He suggested that being taught by him might be an excuse to hide his background. Ping replied, saying the conditions were good, but he'd have thought he could count on his connections to Bose to learn swordsmanship from the Sword Saint Guild. After that, Bose refused to return to the guild but assured Elder Sword not to worry, explaining that it was his responsibility to eliminate the Dark Guild and his guild would fully support the Sword Saint Guild in the future. Elder Sword agreed with Mr. Bose, saying he understood. However, according to the agreement, the Sword Saint Guild would recognize the legitimacy of Bose's card guild. Le Ping didn't know what to say. He could only express that Bose was very courageous. However, for Bose, the most important thing was Li Ping's satisfaction, and they had worked really hard to satisfy Ping. Meanwhile, Elder Sword asked the Dwarf Guild president when the king would return from seclusion, as the provision of A and S level weapons could greatly enhance their combat power. Dwarf Guild president replied that he couldn't tell Elder Sword, but the shortage of grinding stones was a big issue, and the entire kingdom couldn't find a proper substitute. The Aristotle kingdom refused to cooperate, so his father was researching in seclusion. However, they couldn't do anything at that moment. Elder Sword didn't know what to do, so he asked Mr. Tagore for his opinion on the request for weapons and combatant spells. Mr. Tagore, being a neutral party, didn't have a big problem with casting spells for Elder Sword. Elder Sword then suggested that everyone come to a mutual understanding of their plan. He proposed that in 2 months, they would gather their forces and do their best to solve the issues at hand. He also asked if anyone had questions. Suddenly, Li Ping raised his hand and asked if he could join. Elder Sword was surprised and asked if Li Ping wanted to join the battle against the Dark Guild. Li Ping replied that no, he actually wanted to join the Sword Saint Guild to learn swordsmanship. Even though he had been inactive for a long time, he felt it wasn't too late to start learning again. Bose asked Li Ping if he was joking and why he wanted to learn swordsmanship. Li Ping explained that Princess Elizabeth had arranged it for him, and if they wanted to know more, they should ask her. Bose and Yi Lifu, after seeing Elizabeth, didn't dare to question Li Ping's plan. Elder Sword agreed with Li Ping, but he wanted to know which type of swordsmanship Li Ping wanted to learn and what his magic level was. Li Ping admitted that his magic level seemed to be very low, explaining that he wasn't very good at magic. Ash mentioned that if Li Ping didn't excel in magic, he wouldn't be able to use the magic sword taught by the Elder Sword. After hearing this, Li Ping asked if any regular sword techniques didn't require magic. The Elder Sword replied affirmatively, but mentioned that only one person had mastered such techniques, the president of the Sword Saint Guild. Li Ping could learn from her if he found her. Bose also agreed, stating that only those qualified, like the Sword Saint, could teach Li Ping. Upon hearing this, Li Ping started crying, worried about finding the Sword Saint. He felt they didn't believe he was worthy and wouldn't help him. Suddenly, Mr. Tagore told everyone to wait and then did something magical. All of a sudden, a book appeared out of thin air. He wrote something in the book, and then the magic spell started floating in the air. He explained that he had recorded some sword skills spells in the book, which might help Li Ping. He happily gave those spells to Li Ping, who asked Mr. Tagore how to use them. Meanwhile, Elizabeth had finished eating her pudding. Li Ping asked her to look at the spell that recorded swordsmanship skills, but Elizabeth didn't pay attention. Instead, she quickly got back to what she wanted to do and dealt with a bug that was causing trouble. She gripped her hand and suddenly, Mr. Tagore exploded like a fruit, splattering blood everywhere. On the other side, in the desert, a battle was raging. The one in the midst of it was Sword Saint Chi-Chi Saugus, who also happened to be the president of the Sword Saint Guild. She called out for Elder Axe to reveal himself instead of hiding. Elder Axe, in turn, asked her what her problem was and why she kept bothering him. Chi-Chi Saugus replied that she needed to address his crime of collaborating with the Dark Guild and intended to eliminate him once and for all. She then used her sword sheath technique and attacked Elder Axe. However, Elder Axe countered her attack using his demonic axe. He roared as he felt his power surging and used the power of the demonic axe to launch a counterattack against Chi-Chi Saugus, but the Sword Saint calmly evaded his strike. Elder Axe remarked that as his fusion with the demon burial kept deepening, the threat posed by the Sword Saint to him decreased. He predicted that soon it would be his turn to pose a threat to her. However, Chi-Chi Saugus paid no heed to his warnings. She cautioned Elder Axe that if he persisted in his stubbornness and refusal to repent, he would eventually be completely overtaken by the axe and lose himself. She urged him to wake up and face reality. Nevertheless, Elder Axe seemed unconcerned about losing himself. He explained that after experiencing the supreme power, losing oneself was a privilege. He assured himself that everything would be fine soon and beckoned the demon burial to take control of his body. Suddenly, Elder Axe's body underwent a transformation, turning into that of a female. With the demon burial now in control, she declared with resentment that she was finally free while talking about her resentment when she was abandoned. The elder's body started changing into that of a woman, gaining features like a big chest, wide hips, and a curvy behind, much to their surprise. After the change, they warned the Sword Saint, saying, "No matter where you go, I'll always find you." Seeing this transformation, the Sword Saint understood that Elder Axe was fully controlled by the Dark Gear. However, Sword Axe smiled, laid his hand on the Dark Gear, and dared the Sword Saint. He suggested she was underestimating him, and that his anger made the dark power seem weak. Then he forcefully took off the Dark Gear along with some skin. The whole body's skin was dragged along, and Demon Burial took on her real form, a beautiful woman with a youthful appearance. Damn, from grandpa to mommy real quick. Demon Burial remained unfazed by the Sword Saint's declaration to destroy her that day. When the Sword Saint summoned her phantom super weapon, the hoof armor of the legendary monster Phantom Horse King, forged by the Dwarf King himself, Demon Burial chose to face it head-on. This armor, capable of increasing the wearer's speed tenfold and granting the effect of being as swift as the wind, seemed like her best chance against Demon Burial. Despite Demon Burial's taunts, the Sword Saint remained unbothered. She called upon her Mist Chop technique, causing massive destruction within a 100-meter radius and leaving a gaping hole in the ground as a result. She claimed that there was no need to hold back and show mercy since Elder Axe was technically dead already. Even though the attack was strong, the Sword Saint was surprised when her phantom sword broke. Demon Burial, however, was untouched. She mentioned feeling stiff at first, which made it hard to block some hits, but she recognized the Sword Saint's power. Thinking back on the sword made from the Phantom Horse King's failed attempt to harm Demon Burial, the Sword Saint considered what to do next. Demon Burial warmed up, waiting for the Sword Saint to make her next move. This prompted the Sword Saint to summon 2 more weapons from her storage. She used weapon fusion, combining a stalactite spear forged by the Dwarf King over 1,000 years ago with a rare stalactite, along with an insect scythe also crafted by the Dwarf King using the gem of the Insect King, a mantis sickle. As the 2 weapons combined, she also summoned the Kulu Cane and explosive knife, both super weapons with unique dangers and powers. Combining all her super weapons, the Sword Saint launched a full-on attack on Demon Burial. Meanwhile, Demon Burial finished her warm-up after stretching some stiff bones, totally unbothered by the Sword Saint's fury and arrogance. The Sword Saint also summoned the Snow Silkworm Shield, a super weapon forged from the pupa silk of the sacred beast, Snow White Silkworms, by the Dwarf King. It was known for its toughness and ability to create bursts of cold air. Demon Burial stood her ground, challenging the Sword Saint's underestimation. She combined the powers of her weapons. The Sword Saint created a twisted space with the Kulu Cane and allowed the explosive knife to continuously explode, releasing the Earth's core energy. She knew she could only maintain this energy for a short time before her mind risked invasion. Finally, the Sword Saint summoned the Hammer of All, a super weapon forged by the Dwarf King from the fossilized bones of a mammoth lord weighing 100 tons. Even a normal blow from this hammer could unleash ultimate power. With this weapon, she aimed for Demon Burial, determined to end the fight. However, when Demon Burial used the splitting cut technique and sliced through the Sword Saint's powerful weapon, the Sword Saint was surprised by the attack. She realized that if she didn't block it, she would die. So without wasting any time, she used Abyss magic to summon 7 guard swords. Suddenly, 7 swords appeared in front of her as a shield. However, this wasn't enough to stop Demon Burial's attack. It broke through the Sword Saint's defense and heavily damaged her. In just 0.8 seconds, Demon Burial murdered the Sword Saint. Seeing the Sword Saint in this state, Demon Burial wondered if she was truly inadequate. Yet she wasn't satisfied with the fight. It was just a warm-up for her. The real battle was about to begin. She used her demonic axe to search for any heartless ones. With the help of her demonic axe, she could see for thousands of miles. Suddenly, she spotted a house in the middle of nowhere. It was the Le Ping's house, where Le Ping and Elizabeth lived. She was thrilled to see Elizabeth and exclaimed that she was heading there right away. At the Le Ping house, Elizabeth grabbed the remote and turned on the air conditioner. She commented that it was nice to be home, where she could relax, watch TV, and eat chips. She thought Le Ping should handle all the troublesome world domination stuff. However, Le Ping felt worn out every time he had to deal with it. He wondered if ruling the world wasn't right for him. Elizabeth disagreed, saying they had to stick to their plan. She reassured Le Ping that she'd help him, but Le Ping felt frustrated because of what Elizabeth had done at the Sword Saint Guild. He asked her to let him know before making such decisions next time. Some time ago, within the Sword Saint Guild, Elizabeth murdered one of the elders, which shocked the guild's president, Elder Sword. He quickly informed everyone to be on high alert. Butler Ash, the red-haired girl Anna, and her sister drew their swords to confront Elizabeth. Blue Sword also summoned his remaining sword key, but after the Great Apostle took over his body, he didn't have much control left. Meanwhile, the dwarf president was surprised by Elizabeth's strength and decided it was best to stay out of the fray and observe. After the incident, Bose tried to calm everyone down and asked them to listen to him. He then turned to Le Ping, wondering if he could explain what was happening. Le Ping, feeling confused, didn't understand what situation Bose was referring to. Elizabeth was disappointed as she explained that considering their level, it wasn't surprising they had been infiltrated by the Dark Guild. Le Ping, feeling confused, asked Elizabeth to clarify. She then showed the sword skill Mr. Tagore had given to Le Ping, insisting that everyone pay attention. Soon after, she unleashed her resolve magic, and suddenly, a parasite appeared in front of everyone. The Sword Saint Guild's Elder Sword was genuinely shocked by the parasite's appearance. Upon realizing it had been discovered, the parasite began to consider its next move. However, upon spotting Le Ping as an easy target with no magic, it immediately attacked him. Le Ping was taken aback by the sudden assault, having no time to react. Fortunately, Elizabeth acted swiftly and destroyed the parasite. After Elizabeth dealt with the parasite, Butler Ash noticed that Mr. Tagore's body was under a spell technique. The girl with yellow hair was shocked by this revelation, wondering if even a prominent figure like Mr. Tagore had joined the Dark Guild. Anna, the girl with red hair, explained that it made sense. More and more people were accepting the power of the Dark Guild, and they were able to evade detection by the Sword of Purification through advanced techniques. Elizabeth had commented that the technique was more than just a simple mechanism. She said it had allowed him to cast a massive technique to fight the entire area, which would have turned into a large-scale hatching site. She laughed, saying it would have been ridiculous. Meanwhile, Lo Ping was still reeling from the encounter, wondering if what had attacked him was indeed a parasite. The prospect of being bitten seemed daunting. Elder Sword was curious and questioned Elizabeth on how she discovered the parasite. However, Elizabeth chose not to disclose her method, stating that it was none of his concern. After hearing this, Elder Sword started laughing, saying that although they had grown weak, they still could not be disregarded. Meanwhile, Bose was really surprised, thinking that things might turn out bad since the Elder was someone who's sensitive about his pride. If he doesn't recognize the identities of Le Ping and the Demon Queen, he will definitely consider them beneath him. If he offends the Demon Queen, the consequences will be dire too. So Bose asked Le Ping if he understood what just happened and could explain it to everyone. Le Ping was confused about why Bose was asking him, and not having figured it out himself either, was suddenly interrupted by Elizabeth, who grabbed his hand and said that it was time for their afternoon tea and discussion time was over. She ordered him to go back with her. Le Ping said goodbye to Bose, stating he would see him next time. Bose was really scared, thinking if Le Ping didn't explain himself clearly, that stingy elder would cause trouble for him. Even if the Sword Saint returned, there would be no way to save this. Elizabeth became really angry at Bose, asking him if he wanted to die. After hearing this, Bose quickly shut his mouth and said goodbye to Elizabeth happily. Meanwhile, Elder Sword asked Butler Ash to follow him. They were going to the south right now to investigate the Sword Saint matter. In the past, Li Ping had asked Elizabeth if something like that happened in the future, to tell him in advance so he could be mentally prepared. Meanwhile, Elizabeth was thinking there were two pieces of information worth mentioning. Firstly, Mr. Tagore's glasses could detect other people's magic, probably forged from Jim's red demon eyes. Secondly, the magic power of that one was different from that of the Dark Guild. It was clear that there were still other evil forces outside of the Dark Guild who were on the move. But that didn't matter because Amelia had eradicated the headquarters of the Dark Guild, and the source of this trouble was no longer there. The remaining ones were just left for Le Ping to deal with as an adventurer. However, that magic really scared Le Ping. He was really glad that no such things were living in his yard. But he was really curious and asked Elizabeth how she could sense that Mr. Tagore was a bad guy. Le Ping wondered if Elizabeth could teach him that skill. He then realized it must have been a form of magic that required magical power, which he lacked the talent for. Elizabeth knew that when the glass detected magic power, there was no magical reflection. She explained that if he weren't as strong as her, he wouldn't be able to detect it under normal circumstances. But wearing clothes made by him, he wouldn't need a magical reflection to detect all malicious intentions the other party wished to inflict. Le Ping, feeling underestimated, questioned if his inquiry was perceived as mockery, aiming to challenge her authority as the Demon Queen. Elizabeth, visibly annoyed, retorted that Le Ping was not worth her attention. Feeling anxious, Lei Ping asked Elizabeth what he should do next. He wondered if just swinging the sword 1,000 times a day was really enough. He felt he needed to learn some sword moves, but the Sword Saint Guild had refused to take him in. "Why won't you teach me?" he asked Elizabeth. Elizabeth firmly declined, explaining the conditions. She said that to rule the world, he must rely only on his swordsmanship and magic. He couldn't bring any of his other creations with him, except his clothes. Even though she would accompany and guide him, she wouldn't teach him any magic or swordsmanship. Confused, Ping wondered when they had agreed to these terms. Elizabeth replied that they had agreed just now. Frustrated, Lei Ping threatened to seek guidance from Bose again. Even if he switched to cards, Bose should still be able to teach him the swordsmanship he had learned before. However, Holy Sword Alpha, transforming into his human form, advised Lei Ping to give up. He said they simply couldn't teach him pure swordsmanship. Lei Ping was puzzled and asked Alpha what pure swordsmanship was. Alpha explained that even without relying on magic, none of their techniques would be effective. Lei Ping questioned why anyone would learn pure swordsmanship just to strengthen their body if magic was available. Conceding to Alpha's logic, Lei Ping admitted that what Alpha was saying made sense. In this magical world, combat demands the use of magic sword techniques that integrate magic. However, a sudden recollection of pure swordsmanship and body strengthening made Lei Ping stand up from his seat and head towards the bookshelf. He exclaimed that he had found what he was looking for, the Holy Sword. Alpha, curious, wondered what Lei Ping had discovered, especially since this was his first visit in a while. Lei Ping recalled obtaining the item randomly from the system as a gift, only to discard it on the bookshelf where it collected dust. Was this the item he was referring to? Alpha was curious about what kind of place could keep Elizabeth so engaged, preventing her from wanting to go out and rule the world. He decided to investigate, but was surprised by the many unfamiliar things he encountered, questioning what these strange items were as he ventured further. He suddenly felt a strong urge to murder, but he couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Then he understood that he had just been metaphorically murdered. He wondered if it was him, but the sharpness of the intent didn't match. Was it Elizabeth? No, her intent should have been more violent and scary. Then he realized it was coming from the kitchen. He was shocked to see kitchen knives. How was this possible? He, the king of weapons with his holy sword Alpha, couldn't understand how he could feel threatened by mere kitchen knives. Overwhelmed by fear, he ran out of the house, refusing to stay inside. Lei Ping was puzzled by Alpha's sudden departure, but he wasn't too worried. Finally, he found what he had been looking for, the Tai Chi sword technique. It was known for being easy to learn and providing moderate exercise. People said it could help prevent diseases, extend life, maintain fitness, and even prevent osteoporosis and arthritis. The technique aimed to reveal the secrets of nature. Lei Ping was surprised by how he had ignored it before. Now he found the book useful. It described 13 Tai Chi sword movements that seemed simple and suitable for people of all ages. No magic was needed. Lei Ping was genuinely curious if it could work in a fight, so he asked Elizabeth if she could help him with the sword manual he found. But Elizabeth, feeling tired after eating too many chips, said no, she wanted to rest. Lei Ping felt really disappointed by Elizabeth's answer. He decided he would go find Alpha and try it out himself. After Lei Ping left, Elizabeth started smiling, thinking to herself that he wouldn't be able to master swordsmanship and teamwork soon. She decided to let him practice slowly and blindly on his own. When he hit a wall and had no idea what to do next, she planned to step in and guide him. Only then could she underscore her superior position to him. Lei Ping, upon leaving the house, began calling the name of his holy sword, Alpha, wondering where it was. Suddenly, he noticed that Holy Sword Alpha had transformed back into its sword form, which confused him. Lei Ping warned Holy Sword Alpha that if it ignored him, he would take it as consent to start practicing. However, there was no response from Holy Sword Alpha, so he opened the Tai Chi sword skill book and started practicing the first move, resembling a dragonfly touching the water. Meanwhile, 300 kilometers away, Toad Immortal, a level 3-star demon ancestor, and the frog shown at the start of this story were in bad shape. Toad Immortal's body was covered in blood as he fought with Demon Burial. He tried using his stomach acid mist technique to attack Demon Burial, but it didn't work. Demon Burial retaliated, declaring that as long as she murdered him, the others would obediently surrender. She used her move Chopping Shoot to attack him, sending Toad Immortal flying across the field. In one swift punch, Demon Burial made a hole in Toad Immortal's chest, leaving him in a really bad state. Toad Immortal's body was covered in wounds. Demon Burial was quite impressed, seeing so many powerful monsters serving as guards for Elizabeth. She thought it was no wonder she could hide so well. Then she readied his final attack to finish Toad Immortal, declaring that his peaceful days were over. But just in time, Robot Dog stepped in to save Toad Immortal using his sound-absorbing energy field. Seeing another troublesome enemy, Demon Burial was surprised, and Robot Dog started barking at her. Toad Immortal, upon seeing Robot Dog, sighed in relief, saying that since his dear elder brother joined the battle, he would retreat for now. With that, he vanished, leaving Robot Dog alone. Demon Burial warned Robot Dog to move out of her way if he didn't want to die. Robot Dog checked his system list but couldn't find Demon Burial in the white. Noting the high risk level, he asked Demon Burial not to disturb his master's life. According to the highest law, he would eliminate the individual. He then activated Defense Level 3 and started attacking Demon Burial with a barrage of missiles. Meanwhile, on the other side, Le Ping continued practicing his swordsmanship. After practicing for a long time, he finally mastered it, thinking it wasn't that difficult. When Le Ping finished his swordsmanship practice, Holy Sword Alpha transformed into his human form. Surprised, Le Ping asked why he had appeared now instead of when he was called. Holy Sword Alpha replied that he had finally recovered. Le Ping said he had arrived just in time and asked for some advice on his swordsmanship. Holy Sword Alpha, confused, wondered which swordsmanship Le Ping was talking about. Le Ping reassured him, saying not to worry, even though he knew Tai Chi sword was only for strengthening the body, not for battle. But after trying it once, he felt like his whole body was refreshed. Meanwhile, the Holy Sword Alpha remembered being chased by many scary weapons in Le Ping's house. One of them was strong enough to overpower him. Afraid for his dear life, he ran out of the house, not wanting to stay in such a scary place. But when a weapon admits defeat, its aura dissipates, and it returns to its original form. This is how the Holy Sword Alpha was turned back into his sword form. He felt sad realizing he was suppressed back to his original form just now, almost losing his soul and becoming a normal weapon. Despite being the pinnacle of weapons, the legendary Holy Sword, he wondered why he was so scared of those kitchen knives. If Le Ping hadn't picked him up to practice his swordsmanship just now, reawakening his aura to the minimum, Holy Sword Alpha would have been reduced to a mere tool for chopping wood. Le Ping saved the Holy Sword Alpha with swordsmanship beyond his understanding and then asked him for guidance. However, Holy Sword Alpha misunderstood, thinking Le Ping didn't need him, and the Demon Queen considered what he had as mere scrap. Holy Sword Alpha asked for forgiveness from Le Ping, crying and questioning the meaning of his existence, how he came to be, and why he was there again. It was so confusing for him, and he turned back into his sword form and flew away, wanting to leave the terrible place. Le Ping was surprised, wondering how he could learn swordsmanship without a sword. On the other side, Demon Burial dodged Robot Dog's attack, then she asked him if he was really willing to be a lackey forever. She wanted Robot Dog to work with her to destroy the place, and they would split the outside world evenly afterward. But Robot Dog didn't care. Demon Burial floated into the sky and told Robot Dog that not appreciating favors didn't scare her. She used her powerful move, Chopping Shoot, which even murdered the Sword Saint, but Robot Dog easily dodged it. After that, he began to analyze the damage. He realized that if they weren't stopped, they would penetrate the mantle layer, causing magma to explode. This would lead to abnormal changes in the bottom layer and cause earthquakes, ultimately endangering his master's life. Suddenly, a robotic hand emerged from Robot Dog's back and grabbed Demon Burial's attack. Demon Burial started laughing upon seeing Robot Dog in a tough situation, thinking he couldn't escape. She unleashed another attack to eliminate Robot Dog, but then another hand emerged from Robot Dog and grabbed Demon Burial's attack. Shortly after, he started absorbing both of Demon Burial's attacks. In just a few seconds, he completely absorbed Demon Burial's attack and energy. Demon Burial, frustrated, wondered how it could be possible to absorb all of her attacks. However, Robot Dog thanked Demon Burial for the tasty energy. In exchange, he asked Demon Burial if she decided to leave now, he would let her go. Demon Burial became really angry and grabbed her demonic axe, saying that this move was originally reserved for dealing with that heartless person. But now she had no other choice but to use it to destroy the dog that was in her way. The constant shattering of hope, the eternal torment of waiting, the sadness and fury of being abandoned, and the resentment accumulated for 500 years were now gathered at one point, ready to explode at once. Dark energy began gathering around Demon Burial. Her demonic axe started absorbing that dark energy. She warned Robot Dog that after witnessing this, he would realize how fortunate it would have been to be chopped to death just now. Then she used her ultimate move, the resentment deadline. Robot Dog sat calmly, and it effortlessly grabbed a tiny mirror made by Le Ping with its robotic hand. Using the mirror, it reflected the attack from Demon Burial, which left the demon shocked and confused. The attack ripped through the outer layer of Earth and destroyed one of the planets in the solar system. Still bewildered, Demon Burial wondered if her 500 years of resentment had vanished in an instant. Suddenly, she noticed a dog-shaped unmanned drone and wondered what it was up to this time. Determined to destroy everything, she prepared to attack, but the unmanned drones quickly captured her in their force field. Meanwhile, our robot dog lay on the ground, soaking in the sunlight, and remarked that after dealing with that fierce woman, Elizabeth, Demon Burial must have been the strongest intruder he had ever faced. Luckily, he has been upgrading myself continuously, so it's game over for her. He had increased the force field control power to 50 grams. Demon Burial was really angry, saying she could endure this. She shouted loudly that she couldn't give up, but Robot Dog increased the force field control to 100 G. After that, Demon Burial's demonic axe broke into tiny pieces. Robot Dog thought that the intruders who had been coming recently seemed to have pretty good levels. It seemed like he had to go back and sift through the trash, pick some materials discarded by the master, and upgrade them. But suddenly, a hand stretched out from the ground. Robot Dog was really surprised, wondering if Demon Burial was not dead yet. However, this was not Demon Burial, but the Sword Saint Guild's Sword Saint. She used her lucky pendant, a super weapon called the Lucky Star, that wandered around the universe and passed through the Hero Continent every 10 years. Each time it passed, it would drop a small amount of Lucky Star pieces. Sword Saint had collected enough pieces while traveling all over the world during her adventures in her early years. She commissioned the Dwarf King to personally forge them into jewelry. She said that wearing it can greatly increase the wearer's luck. Over at Le Ping's house, Elizabeth was munching on chips and watching TV. She found the ads super annoying, just like many of you might, so she thought about asking Le Ping to get her a membership to skip the ads. Then she noticed she polished off all the chips. But for her, that wasn't the end. The best part was yet to come. Those last few bits of chips coated in lots of seasoning powder. They were seriously addictive for her, taking her satisfaction to the next level. She confessed that she loved this part the most when eating chips. It was almost time to check on Le Ping's swordsmanship training, but Elizabeth thought he must have been struggling with it. She knew it was necessary for him to be ready for the challenge ahead. He had to undergo hellish training before understanding the art of swordsmanship. She imagined that just when he had no clue what to do and was about to give up, she would appear to guide him. She got really excited thinking about this, so she opened the door and asked Le Ping if he hadn't been lazy and inquired how the training had been going. She had come to check on him, but she was surprised to see Le Ping sitting cross-legged like that when she had asked him to practice his swordsmanship. However, Le Ping ignored Elizabeth because he was busy practicing his yoga. Elizabeth asked Le Ping again what he was doing, but he didn't say anything. Elizabeth wondered if Le Ping had encountered a setback and lost face, so he wanted to escape from the problem, right? It didn't matter. She changed her mind. As long as he bowed his head and asked her for guidance, she was still willing to teach him a few moves. She guaranteed Le Ping that after he learned them, he would be able to run rampant in the outside world. Le Ping ignored her again. After completing his meditation, Le Ping asked Elizabeth if she was talking to him just now. He apologized to Elizabeth, explaining that he had just come out from a Tai Chi meditation state. Elizabeth felt frustrated as she told Le Ping that it seemed like he thought he did well in his practice. But she made it clear that what he aimed to learn was swordsmanship, not just meditation. She thought the meditation was pointless. Le Ping started smiling and pointed his stick towards Elizabeth, asking her what she meant by calling it pointless. He explained that these were strengthening exercises, and more importantly, they cultivated the mind and nourished the body. Meanwhile, Elizabeth was busy eating potato chips and watching TV. Le Ping had already mastered the entire set of 13 Tai Chi swordsmanship moves and was very proficient. He then asked Elizabeth if she would like him to demonstrate them for her, so she could give him some guidance. Elizabeth agreed, thinking that since he wanted to make a fool out of himself, she wouldn't stop him. She doubted that he could have mastered any sword skills just by practicing some horizontal and vertical slashes in such a short time. After that, Le Ping started explaining that the most important part of practicing Tai Chi was keeping a calm mind, closing your eyes, and getting the right posture. He then showed Elizabeth the first move, Dragonfly touches the water. Elizabeth was surprised to see Le Ping show such power with just one move, but she remembered he was the legendary hero after all. Having lived with him for so long, she knew him well. However, in such a peaceful state, there seemed to be no threat at all. She wondered where the destructive power of the sword had gone. After that, he demonstrated the second move, Swallow catches the insect, and the third move, Dust floats in the wind. Suddenly, the sky started changing, with clouds gathering. Elizabeth was surprised to see his power transform. Water started floating around Le Ping as he changed his stance and performed his fourth move, Sudden Thunderstorm, with lightning striking all around him. Elizabeth was astonished, wondering how he could reach this level in such a short time. She claimed that it must be surpassed, offering Le Ping some guidance as she returned to her Demon Queen state. Le Ping had used his fifth move, Blue Dragon, out of the water. Suddenly, a very big water dragon appeared in front of Elizabeth. When she saw this, she grabbed her demonic sword of destruction. In the next moment, a massive purplish demon dragon came down to earth. The two dragons began attacking each other, but unfortunately for Elizabeth, Le Ping's water dragon defeated her dragon. In the next moment, everything returned to normal, the sky cleared, and a beautiful moon appeared. Elizabeth felt really angry after witnessing this. She thought it was unreasonable for her sword force to become so weak in front of him. Le Ping explained that when he stood calm, his mind was not lacking. When standing still, his mind was at peace. He must remain calm with every move, staying calm in the face of events. Only then could he grasp the essence of Tai Chi. Then he touched his stick to the water where the moon's reflection shimmered. Suddenly, the moon seemed to emerge from the water itself. This was Le Ping's eighth move, Moon in the Water. When Elizabeth saw this, she wondered if Le Ping was pretending to be weak to trick her into a fight again. But when it came to sword fighting, Elizabeth thought Le Ping had picked the wrong field of expertise. Meanwhile, the moon started getting bigger. Elizabeth also started to get more serious and didn't hold back against Le Ping. Just when she planned on attacking, everything suddenly began to float in the air. Elizabeth couldn't help but curse and wondered if Le Ping was trying to control her using gravity, but she said she wouldn't let him. However, before she could act, she realized that Le Ping had changed the scene once again, and now they were standing on the moon's surface. Le Ping then began preparing his next move, saying that as the moves of the Tai Chi sword progressed, the state of the mind became calm and vast. They began to understand the mysteries of nature. Then he showed the ninth move, Meteor catching the moon. Elizabeth was shocked to see that each meteor was comparable to her destructive magic, and there were so many of them. She transformed into her demon form, admitting it was her fault for underestimating him. But if he thought he could beat her in swordsmanship, he was very wrong. After that, she cut through all the meteors into pieces and started running toward Le Ping, determined to defeat him that day. She claimed her swordsmanship was the strongest in history and unbeatable. Then she used her powerful move, All Things Full Slash, and alongside Le Ping, she cut the moon into two pieces. But after regaining her senses, she realized she was so overwhelmed by the desire to beat him that she wondered if she hadn't actually murdered him. However, she was shocked to see that Le Ping had merged with the universe. Le Ping explained that the vastness of emptiness, staying calm, and sincerity embody the state of mind that is spacious. Elizabeth was confused about what Le Ping was talking about. He was describing the embodiment of Tai Chi and the body close to nature. He then used the 10th move, Holding of the Moon. Like literally, bro held the slashed moon and put it back together. Elizabeth, in her Demon Queen form, realized how foolish she had been for getting distracted and worrying about Le Ping's safety. She decided to take advantage of the moment to finish things. She unleashed all the power she could muster and used her complete magic force. Elizabeth then grew to the same size as Le Ping, who was holding the moon. She claimed she could do everything Le Ping could do. Le Ping lightly tossed the moon aside and began to demonstrate the final stage that focuses on cultivating one's mind and meditation. The swordless move and the 11th move, Sword Enlightenment. Holding a stick, Le Ping started creating clones of himself. Elizabeth found Le Ping's next moves absurd and decided to entertain him herself. She then unleashed her 9 clones technique, declaring that all her clones had the same power level as her real body. Le Ping began moving and claimed he would merge all things into one as his clones fused with him. Elizabeth thought Le Ping was retreating since he was now alone, so she took this opportunity to strike him with her sword, which was faster than the speed of light. However, Elizabeth's 9 swords missed Le Ping, and she was deeply shocked. She then noticed a Tai Chi symbol under Le Ping's feet and realized that Le Ping hadn't moved at all. Instead, he had expanded the space at a high speed, widening the gap so her swords couldn't reach him. Le Ping explained that when someone meditates and becomes one with nature, their mind naturally opens up. He then started manipulating the universe itself. Elizabeth became furious when she saw Le Ping surpassing her speed but proudly claimed she could still take action. She asserted that as long as she had a target, her next move could strike Le Ping at super speed. She then pulled out a huge demonic sword that exuded an evil aura. Angered, Elizabeth decided to use the most powerful strike of her demonic sword of destruction, a technique she had created herself. With full power, she unleashed the arrow of destruction. However, the technique was useless against Le Ping's 12th move. 3 lives give rise to all. The universe that Le Ping held expanded, growing larger than the demonic sword of destruction. It grew and grew until it swallowed the once huge sword, dissolving it into nothing. Elizabeth was shocked to see her powerful strike annihilated into fine dust. The scenery then changed from the universe to a large pool surrounded by lilies. Elizabeth snapped out of her shock and realized that the swordsmanship she had gained through so much training had failed her. Le Ping explained that one's mind might wander through time and space before finally returning to the beginning, where it can find peace. Elizabeth was angered by Le Ping's lecture on swordsmanship and felt humiliated. However, she suddenly calmed down as she understood the vastness of the universe. She decided to forget about her past, let go of her pride, and set aside her swordsmanship to accept Le Ping's guidance instead. She then pointed her fingers toward Le Ping, causing the space at her fingertips to bend. Le Ping told her to set aside her magic and even her life, regardless of the consequences, and pour everything into her sword's will. Le Ping then prepared to execute his last move. Elizabeth, on the other hand, claimed she would use her move that transcends time and space, the swordless move. Within space and time, no matter how strong the attacks were, they were no match for Le Ping's rules. Elizabeth decided to surpass time and space to murder Le Ping. She stepped forward to attack him. She thanked him for his guidance and knew that she would lose everything once she used her final move. There would be no meaning for her to live anymore if Le Ping died, but it would be a fitting ending for them. She wanted Le Ping to always remember that the one who murdered him was her, the Demon Queen. With his eyes closed, Le Ping also made his last move and faced his palm toward Elizabeth. He used his final move, One is All, and lightly caught Elizabeth's swordless move with his fingers. The power from the swordless move dissipated, leaving Elizabeth speechless. Le Ping then pulled Elizabeth toward him. As their bodies touched, Elizabeth became flustered. Le Ping then made Elizabeth fall into his arms like a gentleman. The scenery changed, and Elizabeth's appearance changed to her normal look. Elizabeth, for some reason, had a breakthrough and achieved the rank of a 7-star demon lord. Le Ping then asked if he was able to do it already. Frustrated, Elizabeth inquired what he meant. Le Ping sighed and questioned his sword skills. He admitted that he only performed basic moves and asked Elizabeth if there was any way to enhance them. Elizabeth struggled to find her words, and Le Ping found her adorable, like a puppy gazing at its owner. Elizabeth blushed even more, and her stare made Le Ping flustered. He asked why she was staring. He didn't want to offend her since he still relied on her protection. Elizabeth snapped out of her trance and stood up by herself. The two shared a moment of awkward silence. Le Ping decided to break the tension by speaking up. He expressed that he felt he had improved, even though he closed his eyes, and thanked Elizabeth for her guidance. As Le Ping spoke with his eyes closed, seemingly unaware of what had happened, Elizabeth stared at him, lost in her own thoughts. She mistakenly believed that Le Ping had helped her advance in her training by teaching her about swordsmanship. She felt her senses expand, pushing her to her limits, only to be defeated in a sword duel. Somehow, Le Ping managed to turn back time, leading to Elizabeth's breakthrough. In that moment, she realized the incredible power of Tai Chi. Despite Le Ping's attempts to get her attention, Elizabeth remained in shock. She realized her naivety in thinking she could keep up with him. She was perplexed by Le Ping's refusal to fight her to the death or bring about destruction. Instead, he seemed intent on helping her grow stronger. Unable to come up with any other explanation, Elizabeth concluded that there was only one reason for his actions. Elizabeth began to imagine images that were banned, ones we can't display. She believed that Le Ping desired for them to have the strongest son together. She thought this was Le Ping's aim, and because Elizabeth wasn't strong enough yet to conceive, Le Ping was helping her to become stronger first. With this idea in mind, Elizabeth blushed and requested Le Ping not to underestimate others. Confused, Le Ping inquired about her meaning. Elizabeth sensed that Lo Ping was intentionally looking down on her but didn't truly wish to harm her. In her mind's eye, she could envision Lo Ping encouraging her to train harder. She realized there was no harm in bearing a strong son and asked Lo Ping to explain something first. Elizabeth attempted to express her conclusion but struggled to articulate it. Suddenly, a nearby crash startled them both. Robot Dog then approached, bringing back a familiar woman who was injured and unconscious. Lo Ping couldn't believe his pet dog had brought back yet another injured person. Little did Lo Ping know, the woman was the sword saint he had been looking for. She was still conscious but severely injured and needed urgent care. He praised Robot Dog for bringing her in. Robot Dog was happy that his master praised him. However, he suddenly sensed an intense and violent aura behind his master. He looked back and saw Elizabeth, who started scolding Robot Dog for picking up people and bringing them to the beginner's village. She was angry that Robot Dog had forgotten what she had told him about it. Robot Dog couldn't help but tremble in fear. Meanwhile, the holy sword flew away and transformed into his human form. He had flown 30 kilometers from the beginner's village. He looked scared for some reason. He had just awakened to be used by the hero. The situation was already beyond his understanding. The hero, Lo Ping, had gone off script and started living with the Demon Queen, having an inappropriate relationship with her. The Holy Sword was also shocked to find that anything Lo Ping created, like kitchen utensils, had the power to crush a holy sword like him, the king of all weapons. In Lo Ping's home, Alpha was considered scrap metal, and he got so scared that he returned to his original form. His purpose was to defeat the Demon Queen, but everything had changed. Now he was only used for chopping wood, and Alpha was having the worst existential crisis of his life. Since he had escaped from Lo Ping, he decided to rediscover the meaning of his existence. Suddenly, he heard someone crying for help. He became alert and turned his hands into blades. In the grassland, a transparent figure was groaning in pain and asking for help. Alpha saw that the woman was a weapon spirit. He asked her about her real body since she seemed to be vanishing soon. The spirit demon Burial claimed that a bad guy had ruined her body and asked Alpha to find her a new one. Alpha found her beautiful and offered his help, feeling like he was really needed. Burial urged him to hurry since she wouldn't last long. However, Alpha realized he wouldn't have enough time to find a body for her. Burial then asked if she could temporarily use Alpha's body. Alpha agreed since he had enough power to sustain her for a while. Burial finally thought she had her prey. However, Alpha suddenly started laughing out loud and exclaimed that he knew what Burial was thinking. Burial couldn't believe her plan to take over his body had been discovered. Despite being weak, she thought she could easily defeat a small guy like Alpha. Alpha exclaimed how extraordinary he was and knew he was being taken advantage of. He proudly confessed that he was the legendary Holy Sword. It seemed like Alpha was just showing off his name. He realized he could still help others despite being useless to the two people he left behind. He was still the king of all weapons. Alpha then agreed to let Burial take his body because it was hers. Burial then realized that Alpha was a fool, but she was glad to have a body to take over. Burial crawled forward and asked Alpha to come closer, as if she was seducing him. Alpha asked what Burial wanted to do. Burial wrapped her arms around Alpha and asked him to look into her eyes. Blushing, Alpha wondered what to do next as he stared at Burial's chest. Burial asked him to look into her eyes again. She then asked what Alpha's resentments were so she could help him resolve them. She used the eyes of resentment on Alpha. She kept staring into Alpha's eyes, who was still flustered from being so close to a woman. He remembered how much he hated the people who had made him lose his sense of purpose. He fell into a trance, and Burial asked him to give his body to her so she could take care of all his problems. Hypnotized, Alpha agreed. Burial then jumped onto Alpha's back and began to possess him. She entered slowly, and Alpha's body flinched. Alpha then slowly stood up with a demonic aura surrounding him. Burial, now in Alpha's body, started laughing as she finally had the chance to get her revenge. However, she felt disappointed that the body she possessed was too weak despite Alpha's claim of being the Holy Sword. Still, Alpha's strong resentment made Burial stronger. She had learned her lesson and wouldn't fight the robot dog head-on, planning instead to defeat the Sword Saint in a single fatal blow. Meanwhile, the Sword Saint had just woken up and looked confused. Elizabeth glared at her, seeing that she was awake. The Sword Saint asked who Elizabeth was and where she was. Elizabeth told her she was not in a position to be asking questions. She ordered her to listen and leaned toward the Sword Saint. The Sword Saint became flustered, and Elizabeth warned her. She asserted her dominance by pressing her larger chest against the Sword Saint's. Elizabeth exclaimed that she was the one who came to Li Ping's house first. The legal wife was making things clear. She ordered the Sword Saint to refuse whatever Li Ping might ask from her, as everything in the house, including Li Ping, belonged to her. Scared, the Sword Saint just went with the flow of the conversation and agreed. She couldn't believe that someone with such a strong presence existed on the continent and wondered who the person Elizabeth was talking about was. Just then, the door opened and Li Ping came in with some noodles. However, he was shocked to see the Yuri scene happening on the bed. The sight surprised him, and he slowly walked away, closing the door behind him. Soon after, Li Ping and Elizabeth talked with the Sword Saint in the living room. Li Ping told her to focus on resting because of her injuries. The Sword Saint thanked them for their help. Li Ping then wondered how the Sword Saint got her injuries and asked if there were strong monsters nearby. The Sword Saint confessed she was chasing a traitor who had gone to the Dark Guild. For the sake of the Sword Saint Guild, she decided to hide her identity. She then said she misjudged the strength of the enemy and got injured. She was fortunate to have met them. Li Ping, nervously looking to the side, checked Elizabeth's reaction since it involved the Dark Guild. Elizabeth sighed and asked if the Sword Saint was sure it was the Dark Guild, as she knew the Dark Guild had recently vanished. She couldn't believe there were still many Dark Guild members around when she had ordered Amelia to deal with them. She decided she would spank Amelia once she saw her. The Sword Saint wondered if the Dark Guild had truly vanished since she had been tracking the traitor for 3 months. She assumed she hadn't been informed about recent events. To hide her identity, she introduced herself as Chi-Chi. Li Ping then introduced himself, claiming he had been working as a hero trying to destroy the Dark Guild. He also introduced Elizabeth as Xiao Bai and his roommate to conceal Elizabeth's identity. Chi-Chi was surprised that Li Ping only referred to Elizabeth as his roommate. Annoyed, Elizabeth wondered if Chi-Chi had something to say. Li Ping laughed and claimed that Elizabeth was blunt but had a good heart. He explained that it was Elizabeth who had taken care of Chi-Chi when she was unconscious and used magic to heal her. Chi-Chi was surprised since even a peak 5-star demon ancestor couldn't heal her injuries unless healing magic was at the level of the clan leader, which seemed impossible. She noticed Elizabeth's pointy ears and assumed she was an elf. She also thought Elizabeth was special since her aura suppressed hers, which was at the 5-star demon ancestor level. She was surprised that Elizabeth had advanced healing abilities. Li Ping then mentioned that he was jealous of people who could use magic because it was all-powerful. Chi-Chi remarked that she could tell Li Ping's place was unique. As a traveler, she was surprised to see the unfamiliar style and strange gadgets. She wondered if Li Ping and Elizabeth were the only ones living in the house. To keep the conversation going, Li Ping said they were. However, Elizabeth was not amused and wondered why Chi-Chi kept asking questions. Chi-Chi noticed that the two people had different auras. Li Ping seemed very kind, while Elizabeth appeared very evil. She remembered the ones considered the strongest on the continent: the Dwarf King, the Minister of Science of Aristotle, the Elders of the Elf Guild, and even Malfoy of the Dark Guild. She knew their strengths from their previous communications with the Sword Saint Guild. However, she couldn't understand the strengths of the two people in front of her. Elizabeth then told Chi-Chi to leave the house if she had nothing to do so she wouldn't dirty it. Her words surprised Chi-Chi. Li Ping then told Elizabeth that Chi-Chi was injured by the Dark Guild and was a guest. He claimed he could clean up anything that got dirty. Elizabeth looked jealous and told Li Ping to do whatever he wanted. Chi-Chi stood up and claimed she understood. She apologized for bothering them. However, she could still recall the demon burial she had just fought. She claimed she needed to hunt her down quickly, or the whole continent would be in danger. From the fight, she realized that Demon Burial was stronger compared to Malfoy and assumed that she was related to the Sea of Darkness. Chi-Chi then tried to bring out her sword since she was the only one who could stop and defeat Burial. However, nothing happened, and an awkward silence filled the living room. Li Ping wondered what Chi-Chi was doing. Anxious, Chi-Chi tried bringing out her sword, but nothing happened at all. She used up the last of her power and fell to the floor. She wondered why her mind was blank, as she couldn't remember a single sword form. Elizabeth then explained that the impurities on Chi-Chi's body had taken away her sword skills and claimed it was the price of taking shortcuts to get stronger. Confused, Li Ping asked what Elizabeth meant by that. Chi-Chi then confessed that she had signed a contract with the Sea of Darkness to make a breakthrough and deal with the Dark Guild. Li Ping remained confused upon hearing such a name. Elizabeth then claimed that the Sea of Darkness were mere dirty bugs somehow connected to them. Chi-Chi agreed that she had been tempted to take the shortcut and admitted it was her own fault. Li Ping realized he needed to do something and suggested that they learn swordsmanship together since Elizabeth was a sword master herself. He suggested that Chi-Chi could become stronger that way, and angered Elizabeth then wondered why Le Ping would work with another woman and claimed she hadn't agreed to teach her. She asked him not to make decisions for her. Le Ping got scared and quickly apologized, saying that this way they could easily deal with the Dark Guild. He wondered why Elizabeth was suddenly acting possessive of him. Chi-Chi then stood up and said she wouldn't bother the couple anymore. She thanked them again for helping her and said she would leave now. Le Ping knew she hadn't eaten yet and mentioned that he had already prepared a bowl of noodles, asking her to eat before leaving. The bowl of noodles was on the table, ready to be eaten. However, Chi-Chi just thanked him for the gesture, saying she couldn't eat at the moment since she was still in shock. She then left the living room quietly. Since it was dangerous in the area around them, Le Ping told her to be careful. Elizabeth then picked up the bowl of noodles and called Chi-Chi sensible. She said the bowl of noodles Le Ping made was meant for her and only she could eat it. Worried for Chi-Chi, Le Ping told Elizabeth that it was mainly the fault of the Dark Guild and asked her to help Chi-Chi. Elizabeth childishly refused and told Le Ping to help Chi-Chi himself. Outside, the Sword Saint meditated under the night sky while the cold breeze passed through her. She then started sweating as she recalled her fight with Demon Burial. The last thing she saw before being defeated was Burial's chopping shoot technique. Her swords were destroyed and useless against the demonic blade. Helplessly, she looked to the sky as she fell to the ground, sinking into the sands of the arid desert. As she fell into a hole, a yellow crystal emerged from her chest, and the Sword Saint strangely burrowed underground like a mole seeking safety. She soon emerged from the ground, and the yellow crystal broke. The next thing she saw was Robot Dog, suspiciously glaring at her. The Sword Saint opened her eyes, panting. She recalled everything that had happened. It was all thanks to the lucky gem that she managed to escape the quicksand. She would have died hundreds of meters underground. It had only taken one blow from Burial to defeat her completely. She had thought she was the strongest on the continent, but it was all a delusion. She couldn't believe she had let herself be deceived by the Sea of Darkness. She realized how arrogant she had been. Le Ping suddenly appeared, looking relieved that Chi-Chi hadn't gone too far. He sat beside her and said he understood her well because he once had the chance to learn swordsmanship, but chose a peaceful rural life instead. Recently, he felt the desire to learn again, but realized he lacked the talent. He wanted the power to defeat the Dark Guild. Chi-Chi then curled up and hugged her legs. She said Le Ping wouldn't understand because her swordsmanship wasn't simple. She explained that it was demon swordsmanship, which she had discovered by chance in ancient demon race ruins. Le Ping knew that Chi-Chi still had magic despite losing her swordsmanship, and suggested she change her class since an uncle of his had done so. Chi-Chi replied that it was impossible because losing her swordsmanship was like losing her life. Le Ping looked up at the night sky and said that everything was insignificant in the eyes of the universe. Nothing would be lost, and they could just start from scratch together. Using her advanced magic concealment, Elizabeth, Le Ping's worried legal wife, sneaked nearby and eavesdropped on their conversation. Holding a bowl in anger, she couldn't believe Le Ping was cheating on her. Le Ping then told Chi-Chi that he had recently learned Tai Chi's sword, holding up a piece of twig as he spoke. It was the first time Chi-Chi had heard of such swordsmanship. Le Ping claimed it could be considered a form of swordsmanship without the need for magic. It couldn't destroy enemies, but it cultivated the mind and nourished the body. He then invited Chi-Chi to try it with him. Hearing these words from her husband, Elizabeth flinched and started imagining Le Ping and the Sword Saint getting close and touchy with each other. She even imagined them becoming romantic in the end. She got mad, broke the chopsticks she was holding, and let out her voice in frustration. Le Ping noticed her and wondered if Elizabeth was nearby. Elizabeth had no choice but to reveal herself by removing the concealment magic and glared at Chi-Chi. Le Ping assumed that Elizabeth would help them since she had shown up. Elizabeth claimed she would do whatever she wanted. She reminded them of the house rules, stating that everything in the house belonged to her and couldn't be given to anyone without her permission. Le Ping reminded her of the time she took the noodles meant for Chi-Chi. Elizabeth exclaimed that everything in the house, including Le Ping himself, belonged to her. In the end, Le Ping gave up and told Elizabeth to do things her way. Elizabeth then grabbed something from the air and brought out a space curtain. She instructed Chi-Chi to follow her and covered her with the space curtain. The two women then disappeared from sight, leaving Le Ping alone. As usual, Le Ping remarked how Elizabeth had a warm heart despite acting mean with a sharp tongue. The Sword Saint found herself in a purple space. She was in Elizabeth's dimensional space. Chi-Chi was surprised to see herself in a space realm that could only be achieved by someone at the level of a demon king. Elizabeth then claimed that she had come to help her. The Sword Saint asked how she could help her. Elizabeth then told her that she needed to be destroyed first. She turned imposing, and the next thing Chichi saw was an incoming attack from her. She barely dodged an attack that looked like a demonic hand. Chichi asked why Elizabeth was trying to murder her when there was no conflict between them. Chichi could clearly see Elizabeth's level and knew that even if her swordsmanship hadn't been taken from her, she couldn't defeat Elizabeth. She didn't know why she was being murdered right after being saved. Elizabeth brought out more demonic hands, 4 in total, which creepily scared off Chichi. She told the weak Sword Saint to stand still so she could suffer less. Elizabeth continued her attacks, but Chichi refused to go down. Using her athletic abilities, Chichi dodged the attacks from Elizabeth, though she barely managed and sweated with anxiety. Symbols appeared in her eyes, and she claimed what she had been waiting for had arrived. She then stopped her movements, did a handstand, and took a stance facing Elizabeth. She declared she was the peak 5-star demon ancestor and exclaimed that she would not accept her death easily or let Elizabeth defeat her. However, Elizabeth was unimpressed and told Chichi she didn't want to speak with her. She then used all of her demonic hands to attack Chichi. Despite her efforts to dodge, Chichi was quickly overwhelmed. The demonic hands caught her limbs and held her in place like a witch captured during a hunt. Angered, Chichi demanded to know what Elizabeth wanted and asked her to let her go. Elizabeth saw that Chichi's mind was becoming disoriented. She knew the power Chichi had obtained somewhere would consume her mind and body since she no longer had her swordsmanship. Elizabeth was only trying to help Chichi uncover the danger before it got worse. Like a crazed dog, Chichi struggled and begged to be released. Elizabeth then released one demonic arm and turned it into a fist, pointing it toward Chichi. It went into Chichi's mouth like a snake invading a rabbit's hole. Chichi trembled as the demonic arm rummaged through her insides, as if searching for something. Suddenly, her stomach started deforming and bulging, and it looked like something was trying to get out. While the other demonic arms held Chichi in place, the one inside her grabbed something that looked like a creepy insect. Chichi lost the strength to struggle, and the Crocs she was wearing fell off. The demonic arm slowly withdrew from her mouth, carefully ripping out the insect inside her. The insect was successfully extracted from her body, and the demonic arms dropped Chichi to the ground. While the Sword Saint was recovering from the painful experience, Elizabeth confronted the strange insect, wondering how it had even gotten onto her plane. The insect struggled desperately. Elizabeth kept questioning it, asking if it was connected to the Dark Guild. The insect suddenly formed a face and cursed at Elizabeth for ruining its plans. Elizabeth didn't care and crushed the insect without hesitation. However, the same voice that came from the insect started speaking through Chichi's mouth. Chichi's body began to move like a zombie, standing up and talking about how it had taken over her body. It said its magic could help the Sword Saint reach the level of Demon King, but every time the Sword Saint showed weakness, something would be taken from her. As Chichi's body stood up, it continued to crack, and the same demonic symbols appeared in her eyes. The voice claimed that if its real body was destroyed, it would take over the Sword Saints. It realized that Elizabeth knew about the contract and had broken it on purpose. Calmly, Elizabeth stated that a similar situation like this had happened before. 500 years ago, in a place where magma looked like an ocean, a lone person was meditating in the middle of this fiery sea. A scripture's pages were flipping rapidly, and a familiar woman sat at the center of the Demon Queen's cultivation ground. It was Elizabeth from 100 years ago, determined to become stronger than the hero she was destined to fight. Suddenly, a creepy voice asked her if she wanted to get stronger, offering help. Elizabeth opened her eyes and demanded to know how the intruder had entered her cultivation grounds. The intruder introduced himself as Azathoth, the Lord of the Sea of Darkness. He claimed that it didn't matter how he got there, but insisted he could give Elizabeth the power to become stronger. Curious, Elizabeth asked how. With a sly smile, Azathoth claimed it was simple. He could give her power as long as Elizabeth let him stay in her body. He explained that his chaotic force would help her reach the realm of the Demon King. He told her not to fear the legendary hero from the stories. Elizabeth became curious upon hearing those words and started moving her hand to touch Azathoth. A symbol then appeared on her eye, and Azathoth excitedly instructed her to accept his power. However, Elizabeth suddenly grasped Azathoth hard, surprising him. She wondered who Azathoth was referring to, that was afraid of the legendary hero and couldn't believe a little bug from another space was saying such things. Azathoth realized that Elizabeth was using him to spy on his world. He then told her again that with his help, she could reach the Demon King level if she accepted him and his chaotic force. He claimed Elizabeth's power alone could suppress him and that he wouldn't be a threat to her at all. Still, Elizabeth knew Azathoth's plan as she glared at him. It was to wait for Elizabeth to meet and murder the legendary hero and then take everything from her afterward. Azathoth then claimed they had already formed a contract when Elizabeth briefly touched his chaotic force. He warned her that things would turn bad if she rejected him now. Elizabeth ignored his warnings and slowly extracted Azathoth from his world's plane. She said she had already absorbed a good amount of chaotic force when she peeked into his world. Azathoth couldn't believe Elizabeth was so cunning and unafraid. Elizabeth then released Azathoth and remarked that the power she saw was as barren as the world she saw. She said it was only suitable for bewitching the weak. Azathoth fell into the magma and asked what Elizabeth was trying to do with him. Burning, he exclaimed that Elizabeth would experience some backlash since the contract had already been formed. Elizabeth replied that she would seal Azathoth in the area and rely on her own power to break through to the Demon King level. She would completely digest the chaotic force she had received into her own power. That would already invalidate their contract if there was one. Azathoth couldn't help but call Elizabeth shameless for manipulating him. He cursed out loud as he was defeated as soon as he appeared in Elizabeth's world. In the past, Azathoth possessed the Sword Saint's body. He blamed Elizabeth for everything he had experienced, not revealing his true form even after 500 years had passed. He could only rely on his clones to move in the world. Elizabeth had completely forgotten about Azathoth and seemed unimpressed. Azathoth claimed that without a host, he couldn't show his true strength, and that was why she had tricked him. However, he could now demonstrate the terror of his chaotic force using the Sword Saint's body. Elizabeth still looked unimpressed and didn't say anything. The Sword Saint's back began to rumble and bulge. Azathoth unleashed his chaotic form. Multiple creepy hands emerged from the Sword Saint's back. These hands then started to form a spear-shaped aura. Azathoth smirked, claiming that his power was now unimaginable due to the combination of his chaotic force and the Sword Saint's swordsmanship, which he had taken from her. He told Elizabeth to die as he fired his powerful technique, Chaotic Arrow of Destruction. An eerie-looking arrow then shot toward Elizabeth. However, Elizabeth had a way to counter the attack. She used the cannot overstep rule in her space realm to stop the Chaotic Arrow of Destruction in its tracks. The Chaotic Arrow of Destruction was completely destroyed and turned into dust. Azathoth couldn't believe that his strongest swordsmanship was not enough. He realized Elizabeth hadn't blocked it at all. For some reason, the attack just dissipated instantly. Elizabeth then claimed that the swordsmanship Azathoth was using was her own creation. If she encountered it, the attacks wouldn't affect her at all. However, she already knew that her swordsmanship couldn't hold the strongest title anymore after seeing Li Ping's Tai Chi sword. Azathoth couldn't believe such a thing existed. After she had added the power of the Sword Saint to her chaotic force, according to this world's rules, she should have reached the level of a 2-star Demon King. Elizabeth had claimed Azathoth was like a frog in a well, but she wanted him to use whatever he could to fight. Azathoth then got into a running stance and suddenly disappeared from sight. She was trying to run away. Smiling, she told Elizabeth to wait for her comeback. She decided not to mess with Elizabeth for now. She planned to leave the space realm and then unlock the seal on her main body. However, Elizabeth wouldn't let her escape. One of her demonic hands went for Azathoth. The demonic hand missed grabbing the Sword Saint's body and grabbed the clothes instead, ripping them a bit but holding Azathoth in place. Azathoth then decided to do something about the clothes and used her extra arms to rip them apart since they were in the way. Elizabeth had been launching her attacks with her demonic arms, seizing Azathoth tightly. Unaware that Elizabeth had full control over everything in her space realm, Azathoth cautioned her that the only means to rid herself of him was to eliminate his host, as no magic could banish him. Out of nowhere, noodles splattered onto his face. Elizabeth, wasting the noodles, boasted that she could easily vanquish Azathoth. She simply didn't want to lose to Li Ping, who waited outside. Advising him to have some noodles first, Elizabeth's actions left Azathoth astonished that the mighty Lord of the Sea of Darkness could be humiliated by someone like herself. Azathoth stopped talking suddenly, sensing something peculiar. He detected an unusual energy emanating from the noodle suit. This energy seeped into the cells, pushing out the chaotic force. The splattered soup on the Sword Saint's body began to seep into him. Azathoth cried out in agony as he felt his powers diminishing. The chaotic force expelled from the Sword Saint's body gathered in the empty bowl held by Elizabeth. Elizabeth couldn't believe she had once again relied on something Li Ping provided to solve a problem. She pouted, feeling disappointed that everything unfolded according to Li Ping's plan. She realized she still felt inadequate compared to him. Shortly after, Li Ping, enjoying his evening stroll, noticed a strange opening nearby. Elizabeth emerged from the portal, carrying the Sword Saint in her arms. Li Ping inquired if everything was okay. With blood trickling from his nose, Li Ping covered his eyes and questioned why the Sword Saint was now unclothed. The following day, the Holy Sword Alpha soared through the skies, but Burial was the one in control of Alpha's body. She spotted the beginner's village in the distance and saw Wan Kai, the familiar robot dog, on his morning patrol. Burial abruptly stopped flying when she noticed Wan Kai, feeling a sudden fear. Wan Kai, unaware of what had flown by, checked his radar but found nothing suspicious. However, parts of his body, like screws, began to come loose. He blamed Elizabeth for damaging him and noticed he was experiencing system errors. Wan Kai couldn't believe Elizabeth had become stronger since the last time they met, and his body continued to fall apart. Not long ago, Wan Kai was beaten by Elizabeth, and he couldn't do anything to stop her. While patching himself up and crying, Wan Kai cursed Elizabeth, who had learned Tai Chi sword techniques from his master, Li Ping. He was relieved that his spare parts were stored in the cabinet and that the housekeeping system had activated. He decided to speed up the cloud data construction, fearing that his ship would be destroyed by Elizabeth. Meanwhile, Burial was flying in a different direction until she saw the beginner's village from another angle. She suddenly stopped when she noticed something troubling. Her spirit body emerged, remembering that she had clearly gone to the other side. Seeing Wan Kai from afar, she wondered angrily how he had ended up there. She quickly made a U-turn, and Wan Kai noticed her. She knew where her target was and decided to avoid the troublesome dog, not wanting to take any risks. However, her eyes widened when she saw Wan Kai again from another direction. She felt confused and kept asking herself the same question. She turned and tried another path, but an hour later, she encountered Wan Kai again. Burial kept wandering around until she stopped and angrily complained because she couldn't handle Wan Kai appearing almost everywhere. Burial assumed that Wan Kai had discovered her early on and was just toying with her. She decided to take on a physical form and used Alpha's body. She decided to deal with the dog blocking her way so she could confront the heartless person again. She ran toward Wan Kai, determined to defeat him no matter what. She was willing to die, but not to be humiliated. She swore to at least take a huge bite out of him. Wan Kai started scanning Burial, who was angrily coming toward him. Burial then activated her demonic powers to attack. After Wan Kai finished scanning Burial, he identified her as one of Li Ping's items since she was using Alpha's physical body. Additionally, Alpha was the last item on the list. Wan Kai tagged Alpha with the lowest danger level. Noticing that Alpha was on the whitelist, Wan Kai opened a compartment in his body and brought out a banner welcoming Alpha back home. Burial, confused by this, stopped and canceled her attack. She became worried and anxious, seeing that she was being warmly welcomed. Wan Kai just barked, signaling her to go inside. Burial stepped inside the beginner's village and stood in front of the simple house. She felt confused and looked around with a sense of nostalgia. The cozy house, the tall trees, and the chopping area where Alpha had been used for chopping firewood brought back memories. Burial realized she was finally back to the place where she was born. Tears ran down her cheeks as she remembered the times when Li Ping worked hard on smithing. Li Ping also put a lot of effort in making a handle for the axe he was forging. After finishing the axe, Li Ping held it high like it was his child. Burial realized that she was originally Li Ping's creation, and he had named her Da Zhuang. Since her creation, days had passed by. As Li Ping kept using her to chop firewood, Da Zhuang began to develop her spiritual body. She was just a child at first, then turned into a teenager, happily watching her creator work hard like a daughter watching her father. Even after becoming an adult, she continued to watch her creator work hard to live normally in the village. However, during a stormy day, when Li Ping had just finished chopping down some trees in the nearby woods, he left Da Zhuang behind as he dragged his cart away. Da Zhuang tried to call out for her creator, but was ultimately left behind because she couldn't utter a word. That's it for the latest chapters of this manhwa. Stay tuned for more chapters to be released. Give us a like and subscribe. See you next time.